The story begins in an educational institution. They throw bills in the guy's face, showering insults because he was very poor. In a classroom full of people, he was ordered not to approach Anzijing because they were from completely different worlds. Everyone at the back agreed with him, and he shouldn't have looked at the most beautiful girl, especially when Wang Teng's father was the vice-rector. Mr. Li, who had come to deal with Su Xun for an unknown reason, burst into the office. The people noticed him, knowing that Mr. Li was a member of the Qingyun International Company. He was one of the managers of the main enterprise of Jiangzhou province. All of a sudden, Mr. Li and his guards bowed down to Su Xun, begging him to come back and fix things at the corporation. The whole company was shocked by what they saw, especially Wang Teng, who opened his mouth. The teacher tried to explain that Su Xun couldn't be a member of their corporation because he was just a poor student, but Mr. Li immediately shut him up. He was extremely angry for his words after all. Su Xun was the sole heir of the corporation. Wang Teng began to tremble in fear, not understanding how a penniless student could be the heir. Su Xun didn't listen to him and slapped him across the face. I didn't even want to talk to him. At this moment, he looked at the terrified Anzijing. He took her by the waist, pulling her down sharply. Unexpectedly for everyone, he kissed the girl in front of them. They disowned each other while Zijing's face was turning red. But he didn't look at her, just turned around. He ordered them to leave, taking Mr. Li and his guards with them. He left everyone with incredible emotions while Wang Teng sobbed at the turn of events. Everyone in the corridor was discussing Su Xun, who seemed like an ordinary poor student, but suddenly became the chairman. In fact, he really was a student just 20 minutes ago. Then he received a notification about a car accident with the president of the corporation, Zhao Chengming. Su Xun didn't care much about what happened to him, but abruptly, a crumpled piece of paper hits him in the head. A friend nearby immediately knew whose piece of paper it was. It was Zijing, who was angry at his distraction in class. She bothered him terribly, and he was surprised that she only noticed him, even though everyone in the class was on the phone. He remembered that she had been making signs to him for a long time, but he didn't react. But he didn't even know what to do in such cases. In fact, he knew everything. He just didn't have the money for courtship. The system congratulated the owner on activation and started linking. Now, Su Xun could change personalities every week, and if he completed tasks, he could get random skills. He raised his head, shocked by what was happening. Su Xun didn't understand what exactly change of identity meant. The system explained that he can say the command change identity to get a new identity every week. His new identity was the chairman of Qingyun International Company. Although he appeared to be an ordinary student, he hid his identity as the sole heir due to the death of the company's president. He now had a commercial skill, a leadership personality, and a calm temperament. Also, he had a personal task, and he needed to find out the true cause of the president's death in a week in order to regain the right to manage the company. At that moment, the lesson ended, and the classroom was filled with loud voices and noise. His face was covered in sweat from nerves until he didn't know if it was a dream or not. And Zijing popped up in front of him, angry at the guy for ignoring him completely. He tried to explain to her that his mind was in chaos, but a different male voice interrupted him. It was the formidable Wang Teng who was threatening him not to approach Zijing. Su Xun was already sitting in the VIP seat while the elite wine was being poured into his glass. He couldn't believe that he was able to create a new identity for himself, and he wanted to have a good time. The deputy was informed that Mr. Li Tao had already returned from Su Xun's school, and their people were a little late. He didn't care. He didn't think the little kid could do anything to him. After all, now he has taken over the board, and now nothing will stop him. Mr. Li was showing Su Xun around Vice President Cheng Hua. He was supposed to be president after the tragedy with Mr. Zhao, but in his will, he gave all the shares to Su Xun. He had already guessed that there would be a conflict with the deputy. And I considered the main lead in the deputy, wanting to first establish my authority in the company. Mr. Li warned that Cheng Hua had many enemies and all of them had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, advising her to be careful. But this only made Su Xun even more amused, and he wanted to meet him. He knew that all the members of the board of trustees were waiting for him in the hall, and he asked them to come to the main entrance. This request left Mr. Li puzzled. And then, he asked me to turn around at the intersection, offering me a cup of milky tea, which made Li Tao even more puzzled. The man was furious that Su Xun was already delayed for half a day. He was ordered to shut up because it was all an order from the president of the company. The man doubted that a strange guy without abilities could become the president of the company, and this role should belong to Mr. Cheng. Everyone agreed with him. The old man was angry at them for doubting President Zhao's choice. The crowd was against having old people in the company. At that moment, a car pulled up to them, and Su Xun came out in a suit with a glass of tea in his hands. He was glad that everyone was here. Cheng Hua greeted him with a smile, introducing himself and shaking hands. Su Xun already knew all about him, enjoying their meeting. The man realized that he was not in a hurry to meet, still having time to go for tea. He hinted that he shouldn't get involved in these serious matters. Su Xun didn't really know this guy, suspecting that he was just an ordinary obedient dog. The man was terribly angered by his insults. But before he could speak, he was slapped in the face. Su-Shun decided to hit her because the dog wouldn't stop barking. Everyone was shocked by his abrupt act. He turned around as if nothing had happened, leaving the man in disgrace. As they entered the conference room, a receptionist greeted him. Mr. Lee introduced his secretary Liao Yu that she was ready to do any job. He immediately asked her to prepare 3 cups of tea for the hall. She was surprised by the request. When everyone finally sat down, Su-Shun was satisfied with everyone's presence. He decided to introduce himself first, and there were 3 cups of tea on the table in front of him. The man interrupted, wanting to discuss his inheritance right away. But then a cup flew into his head. It was Su-Shun who didn't disrespect his speech. Mr. Lee was shocked by what he did. He ended his sentence by explaining that he was now the president of this company. I wanted to hear their opinion while the room was dead silent. Su-Shun asked them to give their opinion, since he was easy on the upswing, but everyone was silent. Mr. Lee was surprised by his charisma at such a young age and was pleased with President Zhao's choice. Chunghwa chuckled and decided to voice his thoughts after all. Su-Shun was willing to listen to him. He immediately put his hand to his second cup of tea, which gave Mr. Lee a double shock. He was very happy to have a new young president, which would make the company successful, but he thought it would be difficult to negotiate with everyone, since there were so many people in the company. And he hinted that this problem could be solved with a big deal with the Taishan Corporation, so that no one else would dare to doubt his abilities. Mr. Lee was furious that Chunghwa brought up this topic when the Taishan were their main enemies. Chunghwa didn't tolerate the raised tone as he threw a glass of water. Mr. Lee didn't expect this. He was in a stupor, but the glass was snatched up in midair. Everyone in the audience was shocked by what was happening. It was Su-Shun who was willing to accept his challenge, about to make this deal. Chunghwa was pleased with his determination and gave him a deadline of 1 month, but Su-Shun was confident as he shortened the time limit to a week and ended the meeting. Mr. Lee was very surprised. Su-Shun ordered the receptionist to follow him. Chunghwa rejoiced at the agreement while Mr. Lee tried to stop Su-Shun from leaving. Everyone was laughing, thinking that he wouldn't be up to the task, thanking Li Tao for the opportunity to make fun of him. The others started praising Chunghwa, knowing that the brat couldn't compete with him. The old man couldn't believe that President Zhao would hand over the shares to such a fool, and they were about to resign. While Su-Shun was looking at the papers, Mr. Lee tried to change his mind. But he was only interested in President Zhao's death, wanting to know the details. Mr. Lee himself was sure that he had died in the accident, as the police said. But he was not satisfied with this answer because otherwise the system would not have given him such a task. His car was crushed by a truck at the intersection, but the driver drove along this route daily, taking out garbage, so the accident was unplanned. Su-Shun wanted to know where the driver was right now. He was detained and was in the police station. Su-Shun ordered him to go to the police station and follow the driver so that nothing would happen to him. Mr. Lee was shocked to see what he was getting at, but he didn't want to jump to conclusions just yet. Mr. Lee took his orders, immediately heading to the station. At this moment, the receptionist arrived. She handed him all the information about Taishan Corporation President Anantian. He took the papers from her hands. As he stared at them, his name seemed awfully familiar, as if he'd heard it somewhere before. And then, it hit him. The familiar face of his prefect, An Zijing, appeared in the papers, which was a terrible coincidence. The girl got out of the shower and couldn't believe that Su-Shun had become the president of the company. And I thought it was a lie, because you cannot become a handsome man in 1 second. Then her phone vibrated. She picked it up, her mouth hanging open in shock. Zijing rushed outside on the pretext of taking a walk, while her cohabitants did not understand what was going on. She went outside standing under a street lamp. Suddenly, Su-Shun hugged her from behind, startling her greatly. The girl didn't recognize him, thinking he was a stranger. She took his hand, knocking him to the ground as he tried to explain himself. She realized that it was Su-Shun, and realized the mistake. He kept his face to the ground while she apologized, but he wasn't mad at her. Su-Shun was surprised by her incredible strength. They went for a walk while Zijing didn't understand what he was doing. He was surprised that she hit him for hugging him from behind, even though she didn't do anything when kissing him in front. His flirtatious words made her blush. But she hadn't expected this from him after years of being ignored. It was all about his condition, and now he could provide her with a good life, willing to give all the love. The girl's eyes sparkled at his words, and there were tears of happiness when she agreed with his words. He asked her not to cry, asking if her father was the president of Taishan Corporation. The girl had told him that 5 years ago, when he'd started the company, and she was angry that he didn't remember it, even though he pretended otherwise. He explained that he would need her father's help to secure a foothold in Qingyun Corporation. But they were interrupted by a sudden phone call announcing the suicide of the driver of the same truck. He was going to visit him right away, so he had to leave Zijing. Her heart beat loudly at the memory of those events, regretting that they couldn't talk. But she still ran away happy. Su-Shun immediately ran to the company, but when he was running across the road, he didn't notice the car that was flying at him. I didn't realize it until she was awfully close and the headlights were shining right in my eyes. But then this car was cut off by another car. Su-Shun was shocked by what he saw. As they struggled, the first car hit the gas. She drove off quickly down the road. He exhaled, realizing that he had avoided a dangerous situation. A worried Mr. Lee, who had saved the president's life, ran out of the second car. Liao Jun came into the office to report on the driver's failure due to Li Tao's appearance. It was Chung Hua, who was sitting quietly with the girl drinking alcohol because he didn't want to kill two company presidents at once. But this was only a warning to Su Shun. He immediately understood everything, explaining that someone wanted him to lose. Mr. Lee violently jumped up from his chair, realizing that the consequences would be much worse if he was late. And he started telling me about the driver, that he had suddenly committed suicide in the isolation ward. Su Shun realized that he had contacted a serious person, and Mr. Lee added the detail about the suicide note that the lack of money to pay damages was the reason for his action. And he had no family, and he lived alone after the divorce. Su Shun demanded to check everything. After all, if it was a killer, then the driver could give his life only thanks to a relative. Mr. Lee jumped out of his chair, accepting the order. Meanwhile, at the An family home, Lixiu was angry at Nantian for not doing anything and not even keeping an eye on her daughter. But he had no idea what she was talking about. She was extremely angry that Zijing was chasing after some starving man and still refusing to go home, even though Xiao Cheng had been waiting for her all evening. Jian Yun, who didn't really like his mother's screams right in the morning, came down the stairs. Beside him was Han Xiaocheng, who was impatiently waiting for Zijing to return. Lixiu started to get nervous, offering them something to eat while she hurried her daughter. Xiaocheng decided to leave since she didn't like it at all, but even Jian Yun started to say otherwise. After all, he, Headmaster Xiao, couldn't possibly lose to some poor student. The door to the house opened abruptly, and a satisfied Zijing and Su Shun appeared in the doorway. Everyone stared at her in silence, their expressions unclear. Lixiu couldn't find the words to describe her appearance. Su Shun introduced himself to her parents as Zijing's boyfriend and bought them some fruit. Jian Yun walked closer to him. He brushed the bag of fruit away with one hand, not understanding how Zijing could date such a poor man. The apples rolled on the floor. He ordered him to scram while Zijing tried to calm him down. Su Shun was surprised by their son's upbringing in such a fine family. While Jian Yun was trying to answer him, his father ordered him to shut up. The man admired it, but still, it didn't suit his daughter. Su Shun wanted to tell the whole truth, but another voice interrupted him. It was Xiao Cheng who only wanted to say a few words. He introduced himself as a young executive of the Kangshan Steel Company, and in the future should become the president. Su Shun caught deja vu at this moment, and begged him not to take out his bank card. But Xiao Cheng actually threw a card at his feet, wanting him to take 1 million and leave. He knew better than to stoop to his level, and he knew it was time for a slap in the face. Zijing chimed in and recalled that Xiao Cheng had talked about the unimportance of money and status, but now he wanted to reveal his identity. Xiao Cheng only wanted to show him his insignificant place so that he wouldn't look at such girls. Su Shun leaned down. He picked up the map from the floor. Xiao Cheng started laughing with his correct choice. Nantian watched in silence. But Su Shun put the bank card back in his pocket, explaining that he had no right to waste his father's money like this without having the right to do so. Zijing's parents smiled in approval of his choice. Xiao Cheng lost his temper, bragging about his status, wanting to give the choice of groom to his parents. Su Shun calmly stated that he was the president of Qingyun International Company, but Xiao Cheng only laughed. But then, a realization slowly began to come to him, and his eyes flew out in shock. The whole family was surprised as long as the father kept his face. Everyone was shocked by his statement. Su Shun felt uneasy, realizing that he didn't look like the president at all. Xiao Cheng was nervous, but he didn't believe him, thinking that such a bastard couldn't be president. In the background, the TV played the news of President Zhao's death and the discussion of his will, in which he handed over his position as president to 19-year-old Su Shun. The news even included a picture of him. The entire family stood in silence when they saw the news. Xiao Cheng was speechless, realizing that he had lost. Nantian coughed, realizing that this was the same Su Shun. His eyes lit up when he wished to cooperate with Director Han in the future. He was sweating with fear as he accepted his offer. He suddenly remembered his urgent business as he ran away from home. He slammed the door behind him. Jian Yun abruptly hugged him, pretending to understand at a glance. Nantian was so angry with his son that he immediately began to suck up to him after hearing about the money. Lixiu immediately pulled his hand, inviting him to sit down at the table and eat. When he sat down, he informed the man about an important matter, hoping to cooperate with his Taishan company. But he had promised himself never to have anything to do with Qingyun, and he didn't want him in his house as president. Zijing was shocked by her father's abruptness, but he didn't even want to listen any further, ordering the guest to be escorted out. But Su Shun had already sent people to investigate Taishan's conflict with Qingyun. Lixiu didn't understand why her husband didn't want to do anything for the sake of business. The man was sweating profusely, wanting to know the details of his investigation. Su Shun began to read out the information he had received, starting with a story about his youth with Mr. Zhao. Nantian abruptly rushed towards him. I grabbed his arm, interrupting his words. He was very nervous, inviting him to his office for negotiations and signing documents. Su Shun thanked him with a smile. They walked towards the stairs together. and the man pretended not to change his mind. Finally, Su Xun asked if he and Mr. Zhao were really competing for a girl when they were young, but he didn't want to reveal this information to his wife at all. Chenghua was terribly surprised to learn about the signing of the cooperation agreement. Liao Jun brought him the information about Nantian's announcement to the board of directors 2 days later. Chenghua slammed the mug down on the table. He didn't expect that after so many years of feuding, Nantian would agree to some kid's demands. Liao Jun knew that Su Xun was very close to his daughter. Chenghua jumped out of anger, realizing that they were missing out on such important information. Liao Jun offered to see it through, but he didn't want to. Chenghua wasn't afraid of an ordinary kid at all, having already come up with his own plan. The system informed him that the date expires in 4 days and he needs to complete the task as soon as possible. He lay back in his chair in frustration, realizing that this agreement didn't help him find out the truth. At that moment, the door to the study was abruptly flung open. It's Mr. Li who found something extraordinary. Su Xun was intrigued by his reaction. He found out that the driver had a daughter who went abroad to study 3 years ago. Su Xun pondered, realizing that the driver couldn't have had the money to pay for his daughter's education, so perhaps he was bought and planned 3 years ago. Mr. Li understood that they still couldn't find this source of money, and the opponent was very devious, so he had already called bodyguards for Su Xun. The guy hadn't expected this, but he'd already ordered them in. The door to the room opened. Men wearing strange t-shirts appeared in front of them, but they were all elite retired military squad members, and they were very strong. Su Xun was shocked, but thanked him for his help. And I'd like to ask you one more question. Mr. Li then ordered them out of the office. He pointed to the person in the photo who was standing next to Chenghua, who wasn't even at the meeting. Mr. Li said about Liao Jun that he was very close to Chenghua and did his dirty work for him like a dog. He thought that the investigation would start with him, but Su Xun was only interested. Su Xun started scrolling through his last name, realizing that it sounded extremely familiar. Their secretary was passing in the hallway, and Liao Jun appeared at the wall lighting a cigarette. She was passing by, but he expected at least a greeting from her. The girl asked him not to pursue her in the company, but she didn't want to take his calls outside of work, so he came here with an urgent matter. The girl didn't want to help him at all, but he grabbed her arm from behind. He pushed her against the wall, explaining that she had achieved everything thanks to him, and he could safely deprive her of her job. Liao Jun frantically explained about the problem with his father, and he might die if she didn't help him. Su Xun stretched after a hard day, but when he left the office, he was greeted by 5 bodyguards with a bow. They were going to follow him anywhere, but he was just going home. The bodyguards shouted, wanting to follow him. He was surprised by their energy. Liao Yu's secretary was working at the computer. Su Xun walked past her and announced his departure, and she said goodbye to him. But then I remembered something and called out to him. He paused, trying to figure out what had happened. She reported that her car had broken down and asked to be taken home. Su Xun didn't refuse her, intending to fulfill the request. The bodyguard opened the car door for them. Su Xun didn't expect her to live here, and the girl thanked him for his help. But he did not leave, but went ahead. He wanted to stop by her place for a drink of water. The girl understood and ran after him. The bodyguards didn't know if they should go after them, but the man understood perfectly. He thought it would take an entire night. They went to her house where the entire floor was littered with things. But after the dorm, Su Xun was not afraid of anything. Su Xun sat down on the sofa, which was littered with laundry everywhere. He noticed that she was working very hard, since she didn't even have time to clean up. She snatched it from his hands, her face flushed. I ran to pour him a glass of water. While she was pouring water, an unknown pill appeared in her hands. It was given to her by Liao Jun, who asked her to give it to Su Xun. She would let him pass out, and she could take some embarrassing photos with him. Liao Yu was nervous, but she had no choice. So the pill flew into the glass of water. Su Xun was looking at the picture frames on the wall. He saw a picture of his mother, wondering where she was now. It turned out that her mother is now at home. She handed him a glass of water. Su Xun wanted to ask her a question, and he asked her what they had in common with Liao Jun, which made her even more nervous. She pretended that he was just her namesake and they weren't related. Su Xun smiled, pretending to believe him. He moved his lips to the glass and Liao Yu was afraid. And out of the corner of his eye, he saw her violent reaction. But I still drank the whole glass in one gulp. He thanked her and prepared to leave. As he turned toward the door, she knew she couldn't let him go until the drug took effect. So I shouted, wanting to ask him a sharp question. He hadn't expected her to be so eager to spend time with him. He sat down on the couch, intending to answer her question. The bodyguards were waiting outside by the car, smoking a cigarette. But then he received a message from President Su. He demanded to turn off the internet signal in the entire house. And the man ordered the guys to get to work. They took orders to get it done in 5 minutes. Liao Yu couldn't think of anything to say as he waited patiently. He could feel the effects of the drug, knowing it might be an aphrodisiac. Liao Yu could see the look on his face, not understanding why he didn't fall asleep. Su Xun realized that she had also been tricked while she thought it was a sleeping pill. It suggested that someone was watching them, and that she was a victim here too. She couldn't understand what was wrong with him, or why he wasn't falling asleep as if she'd overdone it. A red light was coming from one of the sockets. Liao Yu noticed that he looked rather unwell. There were a bunch of guys behind the camera, along with Liao Jun, who were watching the action, waiting for the climax. The man stiffened a little. The girl felt Su Xun's temperature rise. While she was worried about him, all he could see was her cleavage. His eyes were clouded by the sight, and the nose began to bleed because of the overabundance of sensations. But the phone no longer had an internet signal, which meant that it was working successfully. The camera was cut off at the most interesting moment, and they were very disappointed. Liao noticed that the internet was gone. Su Xun forcefully pushed the girl down on the bed. He tried to explain to her that she was too stupid not to notice the deception. Liao Yu didn't understand what he was talking about. He stormed out of the room, and he demanded to bring him more ice. But she still didn't understand exactly how they were trying to use her. A bodyguard broke into the apartment looking for President Su. Liao Yu was sitting on the sofa, explaining that the president was currently taking a shower. The man realized that the president quickly finished his business, and the girl was angry for his indecent joke. Su Xun stepped out of the shower wet, breathing heavily. The man continued to joke about his youth, but he ordered him to shut up and get busy. I asked him to find a hidden camera in the room. He immediately put all the blame on Liao Yu, but she didn't even have a clue about the camera. Su Xun ordered him to quickly find the camera while he was getting dressed. According to Liao Yu, she believed that she was putting sleeping pills in the water. But it was obvious to Su Xun that sleeping pills alone couldn't make interesting photos. So they put Liao Yu right under him for the sake of compromising information. She was horrified that she had been framed so basely. The bodyguard finally found the hidden camera in the wall outlet. Liao Yu was shaking with the realization that all of his words were true. Su Xun ordered a further search, suspecting that there was another camera in the bedroom. He imagined her feelings, how her own father was willing to sacrifice her for selfish ends. The girl was shocked that he knew their relationship. But that was just a guess, which was confirmed by her reaction. Liao Yu began to tell how her father had left her with a sick mother 15 years ago and gone to live with another woman. She had come here 3 years ago to earn money all by herself and had accidentally met her father, who already held one of the lower management positions. He'd helped her find a job, and she'd been able to avoid death because of it, but that still didn't excuse him. Su Xun understood that she couldn't refuse his request anyway. The girl said nothing, knowing that this was true. The bodyguard found 3 more cameras in the bedroom and 1 in the bathroom. He couldn't believe that they were going to slander President Su. Small cameras flew into Su Xun's hand. He showed them to Liao Yu so that she would no longer have any doubts about her father's identity. She clutched her head in panic, trying not to believe it. The bodyguard was furious that even after so much evidence, she didn't believe it. Su Xun was going to get rid of Hua, but he needed to get to Liao Jun first, but he would need Liao Yu's help. At this point, he prepared to leave. The bodyguard didn't know if everything was finished for the day. As they argued, Liao Yu began to cry softly. After a short time, she went to the office. Liao Yu stared at the cameras in her hand, and memories came flooding back. How she'd come here looking for a job, but they'd thrown her out without giving her a chance. How she sat on her knees without any skills. I cried on the asphalt in the rain, wishing I could go back to my mother. But her own father's voice suddenly called out to her from behind. Even so, she was willing to give him another chance, since he was the only person she had in her life. As she raised her hand to knock on the door, there were footsteps behind her. Everyone praised Liao Jun for his insensitivity over his own daughter, who he had used for 3 whole years. Liao Jun drank alcohol, telling the story of cheating his own daughter, how he made all the company bosses refuse her jobs in order to appear like a hero to her. All his drunken friends praised him for this tactic. They continued to discuss the video while the girl cried furiously outside the door. They drove back in the car. The bodyguard wondered why he didn't get rid of Liao Yu after such a betrayal, and he wondered. But he thought it was a fair decision, that it was easier for her to betray her boss than her own father. But he was surprised that even his private secretary turned out to be Hua's person. The man assured that he and his guys are completely loyal to the president. Su Xun was already satisfied with their hard work, not wanting to work with anyone he doubted. The man was deeply hurt by these words. He was impressed by his wisdom at such a young age that he can even trust his subordinates. How he didn't show any fear even before the onslaught of the enemy, and how he's frowning right now while solving business problems. The bodyguard cringed at the realization that there were such perfect people in the world. His phone was actually playing streams of a girl in a suit, but he didn't expect that now the streamers take the scary ones. They drove up to the house. Su Xun asked them to pick him up in the morning if they were free. He yawned, remembering that he only had 2 days left to complete the task from the system, but he wasn't panicking at all. He felt that he could handle serious problems easily, suspecting that this was a temperament given out by the system. Suddenly, someone called out to him from behind. It was a breathless Liao Yu who only wanted to talk to him for a few minutes. He invited her into the house. They went inside, and she sat down on the sofa. Liao Yu was completely furious with her father, realizing that she had been used all these years. She's even willing to get rid of him if he was willing to do it to her. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she wanted to follow Su Xun's instructions just to get revenge on Liao Jun. He put a hand on her shoulder. Su-jun was willing to help her without loss if she went over to his side. She looked up at him, her face filled with tears. Liao Yu realized that he was going to help her, and she pressed her lips together in sadness. In the morning, Liao Jun ordered them to wait for Su-shun to leave so that they wouldn't scare him off, and then take all the cameras out of the house. But they were held out to him, right in the palm of his hand. It was Liao Yu who already knew everything. He was shocked, not expecting to see her. She tried to get an explanation from him for his deception and secret surveillance. But he was trying to throw all the blame on Director Chen for doing this behind his back. Her eyes were blank as her father lied to her face again, even though he was trying to look like a caring parent. He promised her the position of director when he was done. He realized that Su-shun had discovered the cameras after all, but she wanted to talk inside. They started up the stairs to the house. Liao Jun already wanted to know how it went and whether Su-shun was caught, but she didn't say anything. On the second floor, they were met by his wife, who didn't know Liao Yu, but he pretended that she was just a colleague. She didn't want to see the woman at all, so she decided to talk in the study. When they came in, he was running out of patience and wanted to know the circumstances. She remembered Su-shun's advice that she needed to get to Jun's computer, and she immediately noticed the computer at his desk. He remembered that she hadn't given him the memory cards, but she wasn't going to give them away just like that, demanding 8 million from him. Liao Jun was angry at her blackmail, but she hinted that President Su would also be interested in this recording. He realized that she kept the things they needed, otherwise they wouldn't be able to deal with Su-shun. He knew they would have to agree to her terms, but he wasn't going to pay out of his own pocket. So I took out my phone. He was going to go outside to have a quick discussion with the boss. Liao Yu only gave him 10 minutes. He went out trying to contact Director Chen. While he was gone, Liao Yu reached for his computer with a USB stick, inserting it into the unit. Thanks to this, his computer was infected with a Trojan. Su-shun put his hand on the boy's shoulder. He promised him $8 million if he could find the information he needed there. The bodyguards were shocked by the amount. Liao Yu was nervous, afraid that her father would notice her. He was able to find one hidden folder, and cracking the password wasn't a problem for him. Liao Jun was already on his way back to the office, continuing his conversation with Director Chen. He finished the conversation about money and opened the door. But suddenly, he noticed Liao Yu's strange actions. She paced around the table and looked at the frames, disappointed at the lack of pictures of her and her mother. He didn't want to talk, demanding to see the recording, but Liao Yu was waiting for the money in advance. Liao Jun pondered over her words. Liao Yu began to hurry him, because her patience is not iron. He threatened her so that she wouldn't try to deceive him. As a result, he transferred the money to her, which made her smile on her face. But she turned around, not wanting to show her father such a video with her participation. Liao Yu knew that he just wanted to make Su-shun fall out with An Zijing, so she had already sent her the video. He grabbed her, not wanting to listen to these excuses, and ordered her to hand over the recording. Chunghua was looking out of his panoramic window and noticed something from below. A car appeared in the parking lot and An Zijing got out. He ordered his secretary to call a meeting of the interim board of directors. Su-shun was sitting in the study when there was a knock on the door. It was the secretary who had passed on the request to join the interim board of directors. He accepted his request and knew that this would be their final battle. Liao Yu fell to the ground. Her father grabbed her to give him information about the location of the memory cards. The phone in his pocket rang, and he let go of Liao Yu's neck. Director Chung called him and reported that he couldn't get the memory cards out yet. But Liao Yu had already sent these cards to An Jingjing. Liao Jun was shocked that An Jingjing had arrived at their company. Jianyang was shocked that the Qingyun company didn't respect Taishan, and its president cuckolded his sister. An Zijing made a show of crying while her brother tried to beat a word out of Su-shun. Chunghua was pleased that everyone was finally starting to notice this situation. Su-shun asked him to calm down and suggested that they talk quietly in private in his office. He was very surprised by his acting skills, how he threw mud at him so sincerely. Chunghua wanted to see for himself, wanting to get justice for President Su. Jianyang grinned at their words and gave someone a sign. At this moment, the door was torn open by reporters with cameras trying to interview Su-shun. Qinghua gave them permission to enter to demonstrate the integrity of their company. Su-shun stiffened, doubting that this would be a good idea. But Chunghua pretended that he was only trying to help him whiten his reputation. And Jingjing, tearful, took out her laptop, wanting to show the reporters the true picture of what had happened. Chunghua understood what she was going to show. He showed Liao Jun what would happen if he was contacted, but Liao Jun was very nervous after seeing the video. The laptop showed a hidden camera recording of their conversation as they arranged to deal with Old Man Zhao. Chunghua was shocked, sweating profusely, but no one listened to him. Liao Jun was very panicked. All the journalists realized that this was pure evidence of premeditated murder. Chunghua was dissatisfied with the security guards' work for not kicking out the reporters. But Su-shun had his own move. He signaled to his bodyguards. The man ordered Chunghua's security guards to be taken out, which interferes with the work of journalists. They beat up his guards. Su Jun tried to get Chung Hua to comment further on the case while the flashbulbs blinded him. Chung Hua couldn't believe that Liao Jun had set up a hidden camera for him, but he was only trying to protect himself, and he threw all the blame on Liao Yu. Mr. Li came in with the police, who arrested 2 men. The police took them away in handcuffs. It was finally over, and everyone was proud of their acting. The system congratulated him on completing the task, and now he needed to get a new identity of the week. He said the right command. His new identity was the best hitman. Now he was a hitman nicknamed the Lord, and he was popular all over the world. Any victim will not escape his fate. But when he retired, his enemy was on the trail, so we'll have to get back on track. His personality skills are stealth, disguise, and various combat skills. To complete the task, he needed to solve all the troubles and survive. All skills after extraction will remain valid until the end. Mr. Li said that the police were able to confirm the authenticity of the video, so that these 2 will not be able to escape from a life sentence. Su Jun suggested that they be sent to the death penalty. Mr. Li thought he heard it, but Su Jun was serious, wanting to send them to the death penalty, demanding to arrange it. Mr. Li accepted the order. As he left, he wondered how determined this guy was at such a young age, and how he would use the opportunity to get rid of the enemy. Mr. Li finally left the office. Su Jun looked at the pen and thought about something. He picked up a piece of paper between his fingers. He tossed some papers in the direction of the wall, and in the same direction he threw the pen, which instantly bit into the wall. 1 row of papers landed on the pen, and pierced through as on a skewer. Su Jun grinned, marveling at the skills of a professional hitman. The man didn't expect that President Su would decide to face off against him, and Su Jun asked me to hit him with all my strength. They were standing opposite each other in the study. He accepted that the rich often had their own quirks, and then he lunged at President Su with his fist. But Su Jun didn't even move. The fist flew with incredible speed and power, but he landed with a light kick to the shoulder. Su Jun didn't understand what had happened. The man jumped back, crying out in pain. Su Jun was annoyed by the way he overplayed it by pretending to break his arm, so he decided to find an opponent elsewhere. And then, he headed to the club. There was a match between 2 boxers. Su Jun watched from the crowd while wearing a hood. Boxers fought in the ring. He already felt that he could easily win them. His words were heard by a man nearby who couldn't believe what he was hearing. It was their coach who started yelling at him for saying that, but Su Jun didn't change his words, claiming that he could beat them easily. This greatly annoyed the man, so he challenged him to go against each other in the ring. Su Jun was glad that he suggested it and immediately agreed. They entered the ring. The man was surprised by his determination, being so frail, promising to close this place down if he couldn't win. Han Xiaocheng entered the building while everyone was nervous about his assessment of the place he had invested his money in. Suddenly, he noticed something. He saw Su Jun in the ring, not expecting to meet him. The fight is almost here. Su Jun thanked him for inviting him to the fight because he already wanted to test his strength. The man was extremely angry because of his calmness. Before the fight, an unknown person approached the man and whispered something in his ear. From this information, he was greatly surprised. Su Jun couldn't figure out what exactly was wrong. He didn't answer, but he looked nervous. It turns out that Han Xiaocheng placed a bet on his victory, intending to give him 1 million. Xiaocheng was sure that Su Jun would get smashed up, watching this with a smile. The man struck with his gloves, intending to win easily. He was incredibly motivated by the idea of a secure life. As they watched, Xiaocheng wanted to know more information about the fighter. He was told that he came from abroad for a lot of money, and his nickname was Wild Monster. He killed a lot of people in illegal fights. They were confident that 10 seconds would be enough for him to win. When the fight started, his eyes turned wild and he threw the first punch, but Su Jun easily dodged it. Wild Monster didn't expect this at all, as well as watching, blaming it on the bad fighter. The man assured that it was a simple accident and he would correct himself by threatening the fighter. He didn't understand how the kid had dodged the blow. But Su Jun only wanted to test his skills, so he asked him to fight at full strength. The man understood that he was an ordinary prankster, so I was willing to give up all my rage to teach him a lesson. He was willing to give him the death he had asked for. Everyone was filming the awakening of the monster, from which no one has yet survived. The man was sure that the boy would not survive after a fight with his fighter. Xiaocheng wanted to show him the consequences of taking the girl away from him. The monster threw one punch after another, but Su Jun calmly dodged, and even managed to make jokes about it. The monster was annoyed by its dodges, and it knew that the brat wouldn't dare hit it. But Su Jun decided to immediately comply with his request by swinging. Their gloved fists met. The man was shocked. The impact made his arm bend into a zigzag, as if his bones had turned to rubber. He screamed furiously in terrible pain, bleeding profusely. All the spectators were horrified by what they saw, not understanding how it happened. Xiaocheng spat all the water out of his mouth in shock, not believing his eyes. Su Jun himself couldn't believe his own strength as the monster begged for someone to call an ambulance. Xiaocheng decided to get out of the building before it was too late. But Su Jun noticed him and called out directly from the ring. He was terrified when Su Jun came down to see him. Xiaocheng tried to pretend that he hadn't noticed him. His guards were trying to shield Xiaocheng from him, but Su Jun held out his hands to them. and he smashed their heads together when he told them that he knew all about the words of the man sent by Xiao Cheng. He tried to make excuses, feeling very nervous, but he couldn't find any excuses. Su Xun hugged him while he was sweating in fear and gave him another chance. Otherwise, he would finish him off. He moved closer to his nervous face, telling him to remember what he was saying. He left the building and Xiao Cheng bowed low as he left. All the viewers immediately began to discuss the unknown person who was able to knock out the monster and 2 bodyguards. Xiao Cheng was extremely angry that people around him were discussing his disgrace and how he was considered a boy with a golden spoon in his mouth. He was walking down the street talking on the phone with Jing, inviting her to lunch, but she was at school and advised him to start attending classes. But he had already talked to the rector, intending to donate $3 million to the university for helping with the session. A girl and a guy were standing on the roof of a multi-story building. She was surprised that the master assassin was so young, but they were going to shoot him anyway. They trained their sights on him as he walked down the street, realizing how much time they had spent searching for him. But at this moment, Su Xun turned his head right at them. The girl was very surprised. The guy couldn't understand what had happened. She realized that he had noticed her, which also scared the guy. He didn't believe that he was able to spot them from such a distance and decided to take a look on his own. But he was no longer there. Su Xun hid behind a building when he sensed the dangerous atmosphere. He thought that Xiao Cheng had sent a hitman after him, but they appeared too quickly, so it led him to think about the old enemies of his new identity as a hitman. Armored cars were parked around the house with a bunch of security guards. The bodyguard added 30 more people to the security detail at Su Xun's request and installed infrared sensors around the house so that no one could approach the house. He praised them for their work and gave them permission to rest. Evening was coming, and the house was covered with guards all around. The guy noticed how he increased security. The girl was disappointed that the legendary lord used such primitive methods of defense. Su Xun was sitting on the sofa, reading a magazine. He was sure that this method should lull their vigilance so that they would be convinced that there was no serious defense, but he didn't know how to guess the right moment to lure them out. The phone received a call from an unknown number. Su Xun picked up the phone immediately. He was immediately called by his nickname, and he recognized the voice of Tony, the Overlord's agent. He didn't know why he decided to contact him, even though he had resigned. Su Xun stepped into the role, not understanding how he dared to call his main number. After all, this is not how things are done. He apologized, but he did it for a reason, offering him one big but easy order. So he decided to listen to it. The target was not far from it in China, and the customer is ready to pay $3.5 million. Su Xun was shocked that he was willing to pay such money, and he became interested in the goal. But Tony claimed that it was one president of a large corporation, and there was nothing serious about it. He was going to send him further information by email. Su Xun couldn't believe that the rich were willing to pay such money for one head as long as he opened the letter in the post office. The file contained his own file. He spat out the water in shock. Meanwhile, on the beach, happy people were running on the sand, enjoying the warmth. Tony lay on a blanket under the umbrella while his phone rang. He had received a call from Vladika, and Tony wanted to hear his feedback on the order. He immediately demanded the name of the customer from him. Tony was shocked to know that the information about the customer was strictly confidential. He began to rush him because he would get what he wanted anyway. And he began to threaten me, reminding me what he could do. Tony was nervous and decided to tell me everything he needed to know. He gave the customer's name as Han Xiaocheng, who was the son of one of the group's owners. Su Xun had no doubt that Xiaocheng wanted to die after all. The door swung open, and Jingqing burst into the house because she hadn't been able to reach him all this time. He didn't expect her to come to his house, but he'd forgotten how he'd invited her to dinner as a thank you, which had made her furious. She grabbed his arm sharply. It was very difficult for her to book a table at the restaurant, so she demanded compensation if they were late. When they went outside, Jingqing noticed a large number of people around the house while he was talking to the bodyguard. Su Xun asked me to take a couple of guys and follow them. They drove down the road to the restaurant. The guy offered to go after him, but it was too early to make a move. She guessed that he had spotted them, so she decided to wait for help. Jingqing was very upset because they were late for their table reservation after all. But Su Xun was already on the phone about the M Grand Hotel. She didn't understand what he was doing, but it turned out that he was buying this hotel and offered to eat here tomorrow. She was speechless. They came to her house and she decided to cook them noodles. No one was at home as my brother had gone abroad and my parents were at a meeting. But before she could finish, Su Xun put his arm around her from behind. She turned to look at him. Her face flushed, intending to scold him. But before she could say a word, he kissed her on the mouth. When they became estranged, the girl asked them not to do it. But Su Xun started to undo the lock on the back of her dress. He slammed her down on the bed. He lay on top of her while she tried to say no, but he promised to be gentle. They kissed again on the lips. But at that moment, the lights in the room turned on. It was her parents who had already returned from the meeting. My father couldn't believe what he was seeing. Zijing was terribly red, not expecting her parents to return. But it turned out that the meeting had been rescheduled, and my father was grateful that he was able to avoid this situation. They tried to justify that they accidentally fell on the sofa, and everything is not what it looks like. He pretended that he just didn't know where the light switch was. But his father wasn't stupid to see him unbutton his fly, so he wasn't fooled. Sushun then decided to just leave, pretending that he still had things to do. He was roughly thrown out the door. The bodyguards in the car noticed that the boss had already left the house. He was surprised that the boss had finished his business so quickly again. But there was no time for jokes and he ordered them to leave, leaving him alone. He slid behind the wheel in disgust. He stepped hard on the gas pedal. He was angry that even in the absence of security, the killers didn't show up, although he really wanted to take it out on someone. But he still had a way to release himself. He approached the door with a guard. The guard noticed Sushun coming over. He asked if Han Xiaocheng was here. The man didn't want to answer, trying to push it away. But Sushun clenched his fist. He pushed it away with one hand, spilling blood. The second guard was shocked by his power, but Sushun simply didn't know how to control his power. He pulled out a gun trying to kill the criminal, but Sushun put his hand on the gun. And for some reason, he couldn't shoot. So Sushun quickly knocked him out with a single blow to the neck. The Xiaocheng in the room had heard noises coming from outside the door while he was spending time with the two girls, so he was terribly displeased with the distraction. He opened the door, starting to yell at his bodyguards. But there was only a satisfied Sushun standing there. Xiaocheng opened his mouth in shock, as if he hadn't expected to see it. He went further into the apartment while Xiaocheng was trying to find out the reason for his visit. The girls screamed in fear. Sushun asked outsiders to come out. After all, it was a matter of personal revenge. As the girls frantically ran away, Sushun was surprised that he was missing one girl now. Xiaocheng offered him elite girls, trying to apologize for today's events. But that wasn't the reason he came. The bandits who were ready to fight for Xiaocheng appeared at the door. They laughed that he dared to come here alone. Sushun was surprised by his preparations for the visit. But Xiaocheng felt humiliated by the situation, unwilling to let it go. Sushun was happy about the circumstances. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been pleasant for him. He was sitting quietly in front of the huge gang that was protecting Xiaocheng. He gave them the order to beat him up so that he couldn't smile. One of them attacked Sushun with a machete, but he was immediately punched in the jaw, causing blood to flow out of his mouth. A second fist landed on my stomach. He threw out the bandits with his hands one by one. Xiaocheng was extremely angry as they couldn't defeat one guy. But Sushun beat everyone up, pinning one of them against the wall by the neck. Sushun waited for him to finish his sentence. He was horrified as he scattered the entire crowd in a couple of seconds. Sushun let go of the guy's neck, realizing that Xiaocheng no longer had any trump cards. And abruptly, Xiaocheng ordered him to kill him if he dared, reminding him that he couldn't guard Anziji all day long, who could easily be kidnapped. This caused Sushun to be filled with rage. He hit him, causing Xiaocheng to fall to the ground. Xiaocheng was already starting to cry, telling him not to hit him. Sushun was willing to make his life hell if he touched Anziji, but he wasn't afraid of him, because he was just the president of the company. Sushun reminded him of his $3.5 million bounty on his head. Xiaocheng couldn't believe that he knew about this, even though only an elite agent and hitman called Lord should know about it. He whispered in his ear that he was the master. Suddenly, he felt something behind him. Then he leapt sideways, dodging shots fired through the window. Xiaocheng screamed in fear, breaking out in sweat and tears. Sushun didn't expect Xiaocheng to prepare people outside as well, but he denied it, because his men wouldn't shoot at him. His hands were shaking as he tried to call the police. Sushun reached out his hand. I grabbed him by the hair, lifting his head in the face of a burst of bullets. He screamed in fear as bullets flew right in front of his face. Sushun was now certain that they weren't his men. Xiaocheng screamed and sobbed in fear. Sushun peeked out cautiously, suspecting that they might be the same stalkers. Even so, he was immediately shot. The bullet exploded against the wall. He could see them on the roof of the building directly opposite. The guy was in disbelief as he saw them running away from cover. He assumed that he wanted to have a duel. There was only one exit in the building, and he was watching it through the scope, waiting for it. But as time passed, Sushun still wasn't there. Suddenly, a wooden stick landed on his shoulder. He reached for it, trying to pull it out. But he couldn't believe he'd been shot with an ordinary chopstick. It was Sushun who was able to stab him with his wand with just one hand. The guy removed the pin from the grenade with his teeth. He threw the grenade at him, wondering how it had hit him at such a distance with a normal wand, like a rifle. The roof was filled with smoke from the grenade, and Sushun assumed that he would shamefully escape. The guy on a rope went down from the roof, remembering that it is better to hide from a strong opponent and try to survive. He went downstairs, covering his wound. He was afraid of what he was still capable of. But before he could take a step, he was knocked down by a kick. It was Sushun who didn't want to let him go until he had had enough of playing. The guy went flying against the wall with the trash can, but he pulled out his gun. He took aim, shooting at Sushun. But he was no longer in the same place. Sushun suddenly flew down from above, kicking him on the head with his foot. From his punch, blood flew out of his mouth in a stream. He took the guy by the neck, demanding to give out the identity of the customer. The guy was convinced of the professionalism of the king of killers. But Sushun proved that even in retirement, he continues to be one. He didn't want to listen to his nonsense. wanting to get an answer within 10 seconds, holding it over the edge of the roof. The guy gave a tentative agreement, but halfway through the sentence, he reached for the knife on his belt. Without saying anything, he swung the knife at the man's neck. At this moment, Sushun released his hand. The guy didn't expect this at all when he started flying down. He stared at him coolly, knowing that he would have to find his employer on his own. Suddenly, he noticed something. While the guy was flying down, a black van passed under him on the road. It landed right on the roof of the car. Identical cars pulled up behind her. Men in suits ran out with guns and immediately started shooting at Sushun, but he didn't care, so he turned around and left. The girl ordered to catch him, not allowing him to leave. The agents went after him while they were standing. She helped the injured guy down from the car, but according to him, he just broke a couple of bones. They reported from the roof that they had missed their target. The girl was angry that they couldn't catch him. The guy advised to leave, otherwise the police will arrive soon. All the agents got into their cars. The killers also got into the van. The guy tried to warn that he was very dangerous, so you should be very careful. She was only worried about how he would justify himself to the boss. They all got into their cars and drove away quickly, but there was something under one of the cars. It was Sushun, who got caught under the car and was driving with them. Later, they all arrived at the mansion to see the boss. He slammed his hand down on the table, annoyed at their incompetence. The injured guy stood forward and apologized for his self-will. He only asked for one more chance so that he could bring back the head of the Lord. The boss gave them a deadline of 3 days, since he would be leaving on his own liner at that time, and ordered them to resolve this issue. He gave the order and closed the hatch. They realized that they had no room for error and needed a thorough plan, and the girl suggested that they try to get close to him through his girlfriend. Meanwhile, Sushun was sitting in the bushes, spying on them. He recognized the boss, whose name was Kalen Wilson, who had lost a large sum to the master and lost his fingers. Even after 7 years, he's still trying to get revenge. But Sushun didn't mind at all. And Zijing was lying on the bed reading a magazine when the phone next to her rang. She was unhappy with his late call, but suddenly, he suggested that she go on a cruise. Her eyes immediately brightened at the idea. In the morning, already in a 5-star hotel, and Zijing happily ran out onto the huge balcony, and she marveled at the beautiful view from the high floor. She took pictures of herself on her phone while expressing her vivid emotions. But Sushun didn't see it as anything special. He pulled his hands to her waist. He pulled her close, telling her they could go anywhere. Zijing kissed him on the cheek. She laughed as she said they were going to the beach after a shower. Sushun wanted to eat first, but the girl didn't want to. Zijing went to take a shower. He could see it all through the glass booth, which made his nose bleed. Sushun went to eat and ordered many dishes. He slowly started eating and decided to call Liu Hu to find out the situation at home. Liu Hu reported that they were still managing to lead them by the nose. The agents were standing under the office, not noticing that Sushun had already left the building. But they were confident they could handle them while his doppelganger was in the office. Sushun was going to deal with the old man while they watched his doppelganger in the office, and the liner should arrive by tonight. Suddenly, an unknown girl approached his table. The girl named Yan Yuruo asked to sit next to her because there were no more empty tables in the hall. Sushun didn't mind at all. All the guys at the nearby tables were staring at Yan Yuruo. They saw what a beautiful face and figure she had. Even the guy who was on a date with his girlfriend couldn't look away. While all the guys were looking at her, Yan Yuruo was watching Sushun. She noticed that he didn't look at her once as she sat directly across from him. The girl assumed that he was just shy. Yuruo knew that he was trying to make himself look inaccessible, but she knew this kind of guy, so she just ate in silence. But then Sushun finished his dish and got up from the table. He started to walk away as she stared at him with shock on her face. Yuruo couldn't believe that he only looked at her once and wasn't interested. Sushun was walking along the port and couldn't understand why that stranger was staring at him like that, thinking that there was a stain on his shirt. When he passed the crowd at the window, they shouted about a certain golden ray. Sushun also turned around and looked out the window. According to the men, it was one of the most luxurious liners in the world, and they dreamed of taking a ride on it. The ship pulled up to the port while everyone looked at it with admiration. Everyone wanted to take a picture in front of him. Sushun smiled slyly as he realized that Wilson's airliner had finally arrived. When he arrived, people started swarming in on him while passengers' tickets were being checked. Zijing's eyes sparkled at the sight of such a beautiful liner. Sushun placed his hand on her waist. He suggested that she go inside, but she didn't expect them to be allowed in at all. Sushun put on different clothes so that he wouldn't be recognized immediately. She had heard that tickets could only be bought for a year, and she couldn't believe that he would have them. As they approached the airliner, Sushun bumped into someone's shoulder. He apologized, but the passerby reacted aggressively. Sushun just smiled, and out of nowhere I got 2 tickets. Zijing was shocked that he had stolen other people's tickets, but he covered her mouth so that she wouldn't attract too much attention. Moreover, he did not choose this guy as a victim for nothing, because he was engaged in illegal gambling and receives dirty money. Zijing pondered over his words, and I realized that this was a fair decision, wanting to get on the liner as soon as possible. She tugged on his arm to get on the ship as quickly as possible. Sushun was disappointed by her naivete. But from the looks of these passengers, they really weren't ordinary people. He noticed that no one had disembarked from it since the ship arrived, as if it were a private party. He was confident that he would beat Wilson in any case. The guy got hit in the face with a splash of wine. It was Wilson who was unhappy with his work while he was on the liner. After all, he still demanded the head of the Lord. The guy claimed that they had already prepared an ambush for him when he returned home from work. The boss didn't give him the right to make a mistake, otherwise he would destroy it. The girl reported that all passengers arrived on board. He picked up his wand. He got up from his chair to greet his guests. All the guests gathered in the main hall with a stage. Zijing didn't understand why all the people were gathered in the hall. Sushun had told her a rumor that there were secret, large-scale gambling games taking place here. The girl couldn't believe his words and wanted to leave immediately, but he calmed her down by being there for her. Around the corner in the hall, the same girl from the restaurant, Yuruo, peeked out. He recognized her, assuming that she had also come to play, but he didn't see any company with her. Finally, there was movement on the stage. Wilson appeared there, greeting the guests on his liner. Everyone was shouting his name happily. Sushun smiled, realizing that these were Wilson's last days. The girl suggested that the guests raise their rates, but the man refused. His opponent gave the same answer, but the third man decided to raise it. Zijing could see that they were playing landowner's badge. Sushun explained that they were just passing the time until the ship entered international waters. Sushun noticed the caution of Wilson, who only showed up for a couple of minutes, and on such a huge liner, it is impossible to find him. Suddenly, he noticed something out of the corner of his eye. At the next game table, Yuzo was jumping, which she was able to win. He was watching her closely. She ran around the table and offered to play again and again. Sujin assumed that she was an ordinary rich girl, but he found her quite cute. Wilson was informed that the ship would arrive in international waters in an hour. He was looking at the cameras and noticed Yu Ruo, asking for her identity. The employee immediately started checking the guest list, but Wilson decided to stop him. He didn't care who she was as long as she was on his ship. He thought she was his now. While Yuruo was playing, the guys in black came up to her and informed her that their boss had invited her for coffee. She turned around in disbelief, but she didn't know their boss, so she asked them to find someone else. They presented a knife to her leg, offering to use this opportunity to get acquainted. They asked me to follow them while the girl was shaking with fear. She started threatening them with her status, but he didn't care, and he hinted that the boss wouldn't take it. Two guys started to lead Yujo away. While Sushun was playing with Zijing, he secretly observed the events. The guy was watching the cameras. He noticed that she boarded the ship alone, because it was very brave. Suddenly, he noticed a familiar figure on one of the cameras, and he asked me to show the face of the guy in the hat closer. But none of the cameras could catch his face, which was very difficult to do. Even though he was sitting in one place, the cameras couldn't catch him. The employee was sure that this was not an accident, but professionalism. The guy was nervous, realizing that their target had his own bodyguard. Yuruo was dragged down the corridor against her will as she struggled to escape and screamed for help. The guy reported to the boss, bringing the girl to him. She was crying, trying to buy off the money. Sushun followed them, watching from a corner. He considered this a good time to come out, but suddenly a wire appeared in front of his face. He grabbed it with 2 fingers, not knowing what it was for. The guy pulled the wire sharply. He kicked Sushun's pelvis with his knee. Then Sushun wanted to show off his skills. He took a sharp step forward. I snatched the wire out of his hands and spun around. He took his hand. He knocked it to the floor. He fell to the ground, not expecting an ordinary bodyguard to have such skills. Sushun wanted to have more fun, ordering him to get up. The boy suddenly noticed his face, but he was already walking around the corner when the other agents found him on the floor. They were trying to figure out what had happened, but he just wondered where he'd seen it before. He ordered them to increase security, realizing that there was an enemy on the liner. Yurua pressed herself against the wall in fear as she was locked in the room with Mr. Wilson. He asked her not to be nervous, promising to be very gentle. Yurua was crying and begging her to let go, but he just laughed at her attempts to get out, getting closer and closer. The girl tried to dodge and hit the vase stand, causing it to fall to the floor. She screamed loudly for help. Wilson's agents came into the room. They asked if he was all right, but he only got angry at their extra worries, not wanting them to bother them again. They realized that they should just watch the door in silence. The girl was shouting for help when the old man was already very close. Wilson, on the other hand, liked how loudly she asked for help. Sushun walked down the rope to the window of his room, intending to teach him a lesson. I kicked open his picture window. The old man was shocked. He immediately ordered his agents to come to the rescue, but he still got punched in the face, causing blood to splash. The guards stood silently, not responding to any sound. They only discussed their stormy speeches. The old man was already on the ground with a tooth knocked out from just one blow. Yuruo was trying to figure out who her savior was. He took off his glasses, revealing his face so that she would remember her companion from the restaurant. The girl immediately rushed in his direction, and she sobbed wildly with gratitude that he had saved her by hugging him tightly. He hadn't expected her to react so violently. A voice was heard threatening the Lord to harm his girlfriend if he didn't come out to them. Meanwhile, outside the ship, they led An Zijing across the bridge through all the agents. The elevator door turned green. Everyone immediately pointed their guns at her, intending to shoot at the coming Vladika. But when the door opened, a completely different silhouette appeared. The elevator door opened, and Wilson ordered them to lower their weapons as he stood like a human shield. Sushun assessed the guy's abilities as he calculated his companion. The guy thanked him for his kind words, but it wasn't hard for him to watch the cameras. He held the muzzle to the terrified Zijing's temple. They thought it was a terrible mistake that he left the girl alone. But in Sushun's opinion, he had everything under control. The agents ordered him to wake up, because it was clear to everyone that he had no choice. Sushun noticed that they didn't listen to Wilson's order at all, and started to bring the knife to his neck, and he once again ordered them to lower the gun. But the agents didn't listen to him at all, even though he spoke directly to them. The guy apologized to his boss with a smile. The girl said that Johan was much more generous, so they decided to split his assets equally after Wilson's death, and it was a very lucrative offer. The boss was shouting in anger, after all. He had been following them for so many years. The guy didn't care, so he fired the shot, and Zijing screamed out of fear for Sushun. As the bullet flew, he ran back, hiding behind the wall on the other side, and left Wilson, who was shot in the head. They started firing bursts, but Sushun escaped. The agents ordered him to go out and accept death. He looked out, thinking about the system that still hadn't given notice of the building's completion. So he reached for the knife on his belt. Johan ordered them to attack him so that he wouldn't escape. The agents took off as ordered. He came out of hiding, throwing several knives in their direction, and hit all the daggers exactly to the agents in the heart. One of them started shooting at him with a machine gun, but Sushun charged in the other direction. He grabbed one of the wounded agents, covering himself with his body. Johan was shocked by the turn of events, and Zijing couldn't believe her eyes either. While he was running away with the corpse on his shoulder, he threw daggers with his other hand. He smashed 2 lanterns with the blades, and I ran towards them while they were panicking and couldn't see anything. He threw the daggers again, hitting the agents in the forehead, then in the heart. George was trying to stop the panic so that they could work together, because they only had one enemy. But here, he wasn't expecting this. Sushun had already put a dagger to his throat, having found out his location thanks to the voice. The agents heard his voice in the darkness, pointing their guns. They were about to shoot when George tried to stop them, but they did not respond to his order, and began to cover the darkness with bullets, shooting George through and through. The girl started shooting at him to avenge her brother, but he dodged every bullet, regretting having to kill such a beautiful woman. He reached up and cut her throat, knowing that Zijing was the most beautiful person in the world. The girl collapsed to her knees, bleeding profusely. Johan threatened not to move or he would shoot Zijing. A dagger flew sharply in his direction before he even finished speaking. I knocked the gun out of his hand. Sushun grinned. Johan was in complete shock, not understanding how a human could shoot so clearly in the dark. As he was saying this, Sushun was already at his back, explaining that this was why he was the Overlord. Johan turned cautiously, dying of fear. Sushun grabbed Zijing from his arms, deciding to explain why he decided to take the girl on board. He covered her eyes with his hand. With a single swipe of his dagger, he chopped off Johan's head, explaining that they didn't have a chance to harm her. Now, Sushun sighed calmly after completing the task. The system congratulated him on the task and asked him to extract the identity to get the identity of the week. He immediately uttered the command. Now he was an infallible fortune teller. He was now a fortune teller, able to communicate with spirits and connect with the sky from birth. He can guess by hand and calculate events. His task was to spread the news about himself throughout the province in a week for a mysterious reward. Sushun was becoming increasingly stressed by the system's secrets. Zijing interrupted his thoughts, trying to figure out why he was still covering her eyes. He opened them, explaining that he didn't want to show her so much blood. Sushun explained that it was just a bunch of bad people, but everything is safe now. A lot of police cars pulled up to the pier. The police officer on the loudspeaker ordered everyone to stay in their seats, having received information about illegal gambling. All the passengers were shocked that they were burned by the police. Sushun introduced himself to the staff as the president of Qingyun Corporation, explaining that he was the one who called the police. While they were talking to the employee, Yuzo was watching them from the side. The policeman offered to take them to the hotel. She pouted, remembering how he'd left her in that room. But Sushun directly told her that he had only saved her by pure chance. After all, she had originally boarded alone, which was already reckless. Even so, when she was standing right in front of him, he didn't look at her. They arrived at the hotel, and Sushun suggested that she sleep while he was in the next room. But she was afraid that bad people might come back for them. Sushun swore to her that no one would dare touch her. Zijing blushed sharply. She shyly explained that she couldn't sleep alone. Sushun suggested that he stand guard at her door so that she could sleep in peace. She was so angry that he didn't take the hint at all. I decided to tell them straight out, explaining that tomorrow they were going home, and today was their last chance. It was already morning. Zujing woke up and slowly opened her eyes. Sushun immediately appeared in front of her. She blushed, wondering when he'd woken up. Sushun said that he had already been waiting for her for half an hour. She didn't understand why he was waiting for her. He smiled slyly, implying that yesterday was not enough for him. The girl couldn't comprehend his words, but he was already reaching out to her, promising to be more affectionate. Later, they arrived at the university. Zijing left the car to go to school. Sushun asked her to call to meet him in the evening. The girl grinned before leaving, promising that she wouldn't let him go tonight. His mouth dropped open at the unexpected turn. On the stairs sat a man who asked passers-by not to pass by. He offered face reading and fortune-telling, but no one approached him. Next to one of the old men, a similar sign was inserted about infallible divination. It was Sushun who was wearing a fortune-teller's costume. The old man was sure that the younger generation didn't even know how to deceive people, but Sushun claimed that he had the gift of divination. The old man was angry that he was lying so blatantly. After all, he himself has been in this business for 30 years. He left looking very unhappy. There was a couple walking down the stairs, where the guy tried to persuade the girl to go to the movies, but she got tired of it. Suddenly, the girl noticed Sushun. Sushun suggested that she read fortunes for the future. She immediately fell in love with him after seeing his handsome face and wanted to see his fortune-telling abilities. The guy immediately began to dissuade her so that she would not be so naive, grabbing her shoulder. But Sushun suggested that they hear the divination first and then draw a conclusion. The girl wanted to try it, which really infuriated the guy. She held out her hand to him, knowing he was reading it. Sushun confirmed her words and reached for his hand, but the guy beat off the hand of his girlfriend, offering to get divination first. He began threatening to harm him if the prophecy didn't come true. I held out my hand. Sushun asked if he was really ready to beat him up. The guy was very angry, but the girl tried to lead him away. The old man laughed at him, knowing that the kid couldn't take away their way of earning money. Sushun agreed with him, giving him the right to do as he wished if nothing came of it. The boy laughed at his boldness. The girl was worried, not wanting to watch the fight. The guy wanted to know any immediate events for today, so that they could quickly resolve their dispute. Sushun claimed that there was bloodshed on his arm and the guy would be beaten up today. The guy started laughing out loud, realizing that no one could beat him with a taekwondo black belt. He promised to come back tomorrow to finish the argument. The girl had advised him not to come here again for caution's sake before leaving. But Sushun knew that everything would be resolved much faster. His ears were being listened to. When the guy left, the girl stopped on the spot. He was trying to drag her along to go to the movies, but the girl petulantly refused. He was angry but resigned. And as I was walking forward, I bumped my head against someone. The guy immediately started a dialogue with aggression, because he was already on edge. But an exasperated Liu Hu appeared above him. They were surrounded by the gang, and the pair crouched on the floor knowing they were finished. Sushun sat and stared at his phone. The old man advised him to pack his things before it was too late. But then, he heard the same guy shouting for Master Su. He suddenly knelt in front of him. The guy with the battered face started apologizing for not recognizing his genius earlier, wanting to get another prediction. Sushun wanted to get a full confession of his wrongdoing. The old man stared at it with his mouth hanging open. He explained that he didn't tell fortunes to one person more than once a day, but he was ready to tell fortunes to a girl. She held out her hand to him, and he wanted to know what she was interested in. The girl with red cheeks decided to hear about her financial well-being. Sushun looked at the hand carefully, and he asked me to tell him my full name and date of birth so that the prediction would be more accurate. She introduced herself as Wang Ying, born in 2002, and was a second-year student at the Pedagogical University. He saw that today she would receive the good news of money. The guy didn't understand what that meant. Suddenly, the phone in her bag rang. It was the headmaster who had told her the good news about the scholarship being approved. She hugged his hand in happiness, knowing that he was all-powerful. In fact, the director wasn't going to take care of this girl any further, and it was all for the sake of the performance. A huge crowd formed in front of him, wanting to receive divination from him. But he didn't want to talk too much about his gift, so he only saw 2 people a day. He left while the crowd tried to find out more about him. Sushun realized that the main thing was to warm up their interest, and they would do the rest themselves. Then, he drove to the office. And I was trying to understand the essence of the new skill medium. The system issued a notification that if you touch any object, you can open its memories. He didn't expect everything to have a soul, so he decided to test on the plant. Sushun touched the leaves of the plant with his palm. He was surprised that he actually felt a soul. The plant gave out all of its memories, which consisted of different views of Liao Yu in the workplace, especially the way she watered it. He snapped out of his memories in a sweat. Liao Yu was just passing by, thinking that he needed her, but he just turned around and left. She didn't know what was wrong with him. He abruptly ran out the door to catch his breath, and he realized that he was seeing the field of view of the object he had touched. He thought about it and realized what he could do with this ability, but he didn't want to allow himself such dirty thoughts. In the end, his thoughts took their toll, and he decided to try at least once. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out of his pocket, reading the message. Zijing wrote to him saying that she would like to introduce him to an uncle in the family circle who came from abroad for lunch. He didn't expect that today he was going to meet his parents officially. For lunch, the whole family sat down at a large table. Uncle was surprised by Zijing's change in just a couple of years while they were gone. The aunt laughed, happy that she had found a handsome boyfriend, asking him to take good care of her. Sushun promised that he would try his best as it was. The cousin, An Yu, came with her boyfriend, Li Hua. He hinted that they would soon become one family, wanting to exchange contacts with him for business development. Sushun smiled, wanting to help if possible. Then, Li Hua wanted to know where he worked. Sushun admitted that he has a small business. The guy pathetically adjusted his bangs, suggesting that he ask for help, since he even works with the Qingyun International Corporation. The entire An family was not at all surprised by this fact. Sushun smiled as he continued to accept his help and extended his hand. Li Hua smiled as he extended his hand in return. They clasped hands. And at that moment, Sushun activated the medium skill. His memories of asking the man to play a plausible game came back to him. The man pinned the crying girl in the corner, and Li Hua heroically stood up. The girl's parents entrusted their daughter to him, not worrying about her safety after this incident. And Yu refused to do anything before the wedding. How he went to the doctor to cure impotence, and how he asked the two men in suits to get down to business as soon as possible. Li Hua couldn't figure out what was wrong with his expression. Sushun looked at his face and felt sick. But Sushun only smiled awkwardly, trying to sit down on the chair as quickly as possible with his shaky legs. Zijing noticed his depressed state, which caused his appetite to abruptly disappear. He realized that Li Hua had a contentedly turbulent life, and knew that all of these points would lead to his public death. But because of his memories, his fantasies were transferred to Sushun's mind. Now, in his mind, not only Yu was lying on the bed, but also his girlfriend Zijing. These fantasies irritated him greatly. He pretended to forget to bring his phone and asked Li Hua for it. The guy boldly handed him the phone, dictating the password. Sushun thanked him brightly. Zijing knew that he had his own phone with him, knowing that he was up to something. He was opening one of the secret folders with a password. It clearly depicted his hobbies with other men. Zijing immediately turned away in shame, and Sushun was surprised by his entertainment. Li Hua didn't understand what he was talking about, until he turned the phone around to face his girlfriend's parents. And Yu was furious, and her parents were extremely angry, not suspecting anything. Sushun threw the phone right into his hands. But Li Hua was surprised that he somehow found out the password for the folder. Sushun didn't give away his secrets, leaving it to chance. Li Hua suddenly lifted the table with both hands, very angry at the setup. Zijing and her mother were shocked. The table flew at them, and Sushun immediately defended his girlfriend by kicking him back. It hit Li Hua, causing the table to crack in half and hit him. The guy hit the wall hard. He was bleeding profusely, shaking on the floor. Sushun had revealed all of his secrets, just as he had faked an attack on Yuya, counting on her family's property, so he also hid his impotence. Li Hua was shocked to hear his words. Yu's parents tried to calm her down, but her father was furious. He was shaking, not knowing how he knew all this. Sushun introduced himself as the president of Qingyun International Company, but he also didn't miss out on his new title of visionary. Yu chased after Li Hua with a knife, telling him to get out, not wanting to see him again. She tossed the cleaver in his direction, and it landed on the wall as Li Hua ran away. She began to sob loudly. Zijing tried to reassure her that she recognized his real face in time. Sushun apologized for the situation, but his father was even glad that he had revealed it. But they didn't understand how he could have so much information about Li Hua if he had just returned from abroad. Sushun confessed that he was a visionary, but a piece of paper flew into the back of his head. It was Zijing who didn't want to listen to this nonsense. She ordered him to sit down to eat. As he was walking down the street, he felt something behind him. He ordered them out, knowing that someone was following him. Around the corner, a nervous Yu was standing. He hadn't expected it to be her at all. She wondered if he was really a seer, because she needed help with evil. He was surprised by her request. In the evening, they reached the cabin. Yu said that after returning from abroad, they lived here. Sushun asked for more details about her situation. Yu started to get very nervous, but she started to talk about the second night of their stay. While she was sleeping, she heard some strange noises. The noise made her open her eyes. The sound was more like crying from an open window, and she got out of bed. She thought it was a normal wind and decided to close the window. Yu sleepily closed the curtains, but suddenly they turned into a silhouette as if someone was standing behind them. The girl was immediately startled. She was very nervous because she was sure that someone was there, but immediately disappeared. Sushun tensed up. He asked to be taken to his room to have a look at it. They entered, and she immediately pointed to the curtains behind which the ghost was standing. Sushun looked out the window, taking a good look around. He took hold of the curtain, activating the power of the medium. Then, the street began to be covered with flying lights, and among them, a ghost appeared in the direction of the forest. Sushun himself was very scared, not expecting to see such a thing. He decided to go outside, looking around. Yu, meanwhile, was sitting in the car, talking on the phone with her mother. She was worried about her daughter coming back to the cursed house, but she was confident that Sushun would be able to handle it. He was standing in the courtyard, worried that it might be dangerous to go there alone. But on the other hand, he had to deal with the spirit as a seer. Sushun tensed up a lot and his face was covered in sweat. Thanks to this, he was able to make out the ghost's silhouette. Instantly, I felt a piercing cold all over my body. He sensed her presence from behind. Sushun knew that the ghost had already appeared, about to attack. He spun around with the cross and seal leaping at her. The ghost girl let out a loud cry of fear. Sushun didn't expect it to be a girl at all, but he didn't have time to stop walking through it and falling to the ground face down. Even though he could see her, he couldn't touch her, which was a problem. The girl approached him, surprised that he could see her. He was afraid that she was going to move into his body to come to life, but she only hugged his hand, which surprised him as it became palpable. From the car, you could see Sushun waving his hands in the air in the distance. She decided to leave before it was too late, apologizing to her cousin. Sushun knew that she would run away when something went wrong. He took the girl by the scruff of the neck, intending to talk to her. Sushun started asking her questions, but she only enjoyed the touch that she hadn't felt in so long. He wasn't going to let her go until she answered everything. The ghost started saying that her name was Chinju, and she died after falling off a cliff. She decided to stay here because no one would see or hear her anyway, and she didn't want to scare anyone. He looked at her carefully. Sushun lowered her to her feet after she answered the questions. Then he offered to go with him, since he could see her. Kinju was very happy that he really wanted to take her with him. He decided to take her away because there was nothing for her to do here and offered to live with him. She immediately refused, not wanting to become a pet for him. But he could help her get revenge. After all, it is precisely the fact that she lives a quiet life that brings her out. The girl who threw her off the cliff. Chinju began to cry when she remembered this. They went to his house. He closed all the curtains while Chinju sat on the bed. Sushun asked her not to fly around the streets so as not to scare people. The girl didn't expect that she could sleep right here. He asked her to rest, so that in the morning they would go for revenge. Chinju agreed. She sat in the room in silence. Sushun was fast asleep in his bed. But something woke him up. It was Chinju who was sleeping with her arm around his side. He didn't know what she was doing here, but she was sad that he'd woken her up. She admitted that she was afraid to sleep alone in a new place. Sushun couldn't believe that even a ghost was scared. But he'd thrown the responsibility for her comfort off of him, since he'd taken her away, and laid it right on top of him. She lay down on his chest and immediately began to snore. Sushun didn't know what to do or how he ended up in this situation. In the morning, they went to work. He asked for directions to her killer's house. Then, the girl told him to turn left at the next intersection. Sushun was surprised that she was killed by her own best friend because of some guy. She started to cry, remembering how much she trusted her. Sushun didn't understand why she didn't try to take revenge earlier, but her friend had a certain amulet that prevented spirits from approaching. The guy was very interested in this detail. They arrived at her killer's huge house, and Sushun rang the doorbell. She was wondering how they were going to take revenge on them, but Sushun had his own plan without killing, so she just needed to help. The door was opened by an elderly woman who didn't know the unexpected guests, but he just walked past her, pretending to come to her husband. She started yelling at him because he came in without asking. The woman ran after him, trying to stop him, but Sushun didn't react. Her husband came down the stairs at the noise, trying to figure out what was going on. The woman tried to expel the impudent guy from the hall that came without an invitation. The man picked up a chair. He started yelling at Sushun to get lost, otherwise he would call the police. But Sushun considered himself the savior, not understanding their relationship. Suddenly, a bottle rose from the table in front of my eyes. It was Chinju who was helping him with the performance, as if he had paranormal powers. The couple opened their mouths in shock, not understanding what was going on. Sushun asked them to sit down to discuss a topic. The man was breathing heavily, not knowing what to do. He sat down nervously on the sofa, apologizing for his behavior. They realized that the savior does not come just like that. Sushun said that he noticed a blood spirit mark on their house, which meant that they lost their homes and loved ones for 3 days. The couple came to a terrible shock, realizing that their family is waiting for bad weather. Together, they fell to their knees. The man was begging for his help, intending to do anything to save him. Sushun asked if there were any other people in the house besides them. The man said that their daughter is in the house. He ordered her to be called here. The man called out to his daughter Zhao Zhao. Sushun smiled as he waited for her to appear. The girl came down, complaining of a headache, but something interrupted her words. She immediately saw her parents kneeling for no reason. So I decided to ask. My father didn't answer my questions and ordered me to come over. She walked into the hall, and Chinju recognized her immediately. Her mind flashed back to that fateful day when she'd thrown her off the cliff. Out of anger, she clenched her fist, wanting revenge. She immediately attacked her, because she wanted to get her life back. Sushun immediately noticed her aggression. The ghost girl pounced on Zhao Zhao, trying to strangle him. But there was an amulet around her neck. Sushun guessed that this was the ghost protection amulet. At this moment, a shield appeared around Zhao Zhao, which knocked Chinju away. She screamed in surprise as all her clothes tore. Sushun himself didn't expect this, causing blood to flow out of his nose like a waterfall. The couple was very scared for him, not understanding what was going on. He covered his nose with his hand. Chinju was crying with almost no clothes on, completely forgetting about the protective amulet due to her aggression. He was still holding her nose, telling her to stop whining. The girl agreed with him. The couple was very afraid, thinking that he had already started to fight with the spirit, even getting physical injuries. Zhao Zhao still couldn't understand what was going on here. Her parents didn't give her an answer, trying to get her to sit on their laps next to her. Sushun cleared his throat, explaining that the evil spirit wouldn't give up and he wouldn't be able to get rid of the blood mark. The man begged the master to do something for the sake of his family. Sushun explained that the mark originated because of their daughter, and it angered the evil spirit. Zhao Zhao was shocked to hear these words. The parents also opened their mouths in surprise and excitement. Zhao Zhao understood who she was talking about as she recalled what she had done. She stood up, her whole body shaking. She was sure that it was Chinju who did it. The woman didn't believe her, because she died a long time ago. Sushun pretended not to know about this incident, but now it was clear that her parents were aware of her wrongdoing. The father tried to make amends by trying to justify his daughter for accidentally throwing her friend off a cliff. Chinju was bursting with anger, knowing that this was all intentional. The man said about the guy that Jiao liked him, but he loved Chinju, and on this basis on the mountain they had a conflict, and their daughter committed irreparable things. Jiu interrupted him, bursting with anger, because she was sure the guy loved her. My mother couldn't believe that even after all these years, she wasn't admitting guilt. The girl screamed, trying to convince that the guy just found an easier option. For saying that, her father slapped her across the face with his palm. He considered it a waste of time, because their family was in real danger. Sushun confirmed his words, suggesting to return to the main problem. Qianzhi realized that the reason for the murder was just jealousy. The man agreed that it was better to help the living, and the dead could not be saved. Sushun explained that in the 3 years since her death, she had had time to attack them, but perhaps it was all because of the amulet. The father himself bought his daughter this amulet, which eventually saved their family. He looked at it, wondering where to buy it. The man told about the gift of a monk from a Taoist monastery in Yunling. He assumed that there were people besides him who understood spirits and did such things. Sushun explained that the amulet had lost its spiritual power during this time, so its properties had decreased, and offered to take the amulet for study, to which they gave the go-ahead. He said that the soul of the deceased has long turned into an evil spirit, so there was only a difficult decision. My father began to worry more, trying to get an answer. Sushun explained that the spirit has a thirst for revenge, and their daughter needs to surrender to the authorities. Then he can get rid of the spirit, and the family will find peace. The whole family was shocked, realizing that this was the only option. The man tried to find another way to solve the problem, offering a large amount. But it wasn't about the money, and Sushun felt disbelief in his words. He got up from the couch, and he began to leave, offering them to solve the problem on their own. The man got down on his knees, begging them not to leave. He hugged his leg, begging his daughter to give up. Jiao was extremely angry, not wanting to go to prison, and began to underestimate Sushun's strength. Her father used to gag her so that she wouldn't inadvertently expose their family to the evil spirit's will. Her mother would start crying, begging her to think about the fate of her little brother. But she wouldn't listen, pushing her mother right in the chest. She turned around and started running away. Her father took her in his arms so that she would not run away, because the whole fate of the family is on her shoulders. Sushun and Chinju watched this family tragedy together. The police arrived at their mansion. It was the father who called them to tell them about the murder that his daughter committed 3 years ago. Her mother tried to calm her down so that she wouldn't blame them for everything, because they had no other choice. The girl was incredibly angry, and she decided to turn in her parents, since they had been covering for her all these years, which was also a crime. Her father yelled at her, claiming they didn't know about it. Zhao was laughing madly as she tried to drag her parents along with her. The police looked at this with bewilderment, no longer understanding what was true and what was not. Sushun told the police the whole truth, how she threw her friend off a cliff and her parents covered it up. He even handed them a tape recorder with the evidence. The father realized that the savior was trying to turn them in, not understanding who he was. Sushun introduced himself to them by name, explaining that he was helping Chinju get revenge. The whole family realized that they had contacted a certain demon. They were led away by the police with their hands behind their backs as they fought demons and spirits. The policeman shook his hand, thanking him for his help in the investigation. The car drove away and took the whole family away. Sushun finished his task, wondering how Chinju was feeling. There was no anger left in her, but now she was even slightly upset. Sushun didn't understand why. But now she had no main goal and there was nothing left. He pinched her cheek. After all, she had a goal to help him. He asked her to become his pet for his help. She wiped away her tears and agreed. Now she called him master, ready to run errands of any kind, and decided to take off her clothes immediately to please the eye. But Sushun immediately stopped her. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to work. The girl burst into tears again that he had rejected her. But he didn't mean it, knowing that he had found himself another problem. The phone in his pocket rang. He picked up the phone, and it was Li Hu. Li Hu said that he slandered the journalist after seeing Sushun telling fortunes to people in the crosswalk, mistaking it for a performance. And now he wants to expose him, and Li Hu doesn't know what to do. Sushun smiled as he realized that his bait had worked, planning to go straight there. He had called Chinju to accompany him, since they were now partners. An unknown guy shouted in the streets that the seer was a charlatan. He introduced himself as an investigative journalist from the newspaper and came to expose the fraudster, showing it all on live TV. Viewers started donating to him on the stream, while others supported his idea. One of the men noticed the same seer. No one expected him to be so young, and everyone thought it was a lie. Sushun returned to his original position, and he sat down, intending to give everyone predictions. He asked who wanted to go first, and the journalist immediately expressed a desire to try his divination. Sushun suggested reading fortunes for personal life or material wealth. He didn't want to hear about the future, which would be hard to verify, but rather hear about his past. Sushun could easily do this because to see his past, all he had to do was touch it. The man thought the seer was panicking and held out his hand. Sushun touched his palm, intending to give him memories from the past. The boy's mother pulled his ear, because at such a large age he continues to go to the toilet in bed. How he cheated at school as a teenager, as he confessed to the girl, but she immediately turned him down. And how he peeked under the skirts of passing girls? The man poked him in the face, wanting to get confirmation of his fraud. Sushun told all of his files that his name was Li Yang, and he was born in Xiangyang village, and his father had his own cafe while his mother worked at the hospital. The man did not believe it, because it was publicly available information. He wanted to hear a more sensational thing. Sushun felt uneasy, not wanting to talk about the details. The man was glad that he didn't want to answer, and people ordered him to speak for proof. Back then, Sushun smilingly revealed all of his secrets as he slept in diapers until the age of 13. And how he cheated on exams, ran after dozens of girls at once, but they all refused him. And how he loved to spy on short skirts, storing them in a folder under one name along with a password. There should be no doubt in the man's mind now. He jumped in fear, stepping back, unsure if he was a human or a demon. But Sushun thought of himself as a human, because demons don't walk in broad daylight. The whole nation was shocked, not understanding whether this was true or not. And Sushun decided to give him a horoscope for the day, advising him to watch his step, because he is waiting for retribution for a conflict with a decent person. The man was very nervous, putting it all down to the usual coincidence. But then, Chinju tripped him from behind, and he fell right in front of the people, which again convinced them of the words of the seer. The crowd ran up to him with a request to tell fortunes on various topics. He asked them to get in line and come up one by one. Meanwhile, at the beach house, Yuruo was lying sadly on the bed, staring at her phone. Her maid tearfully begged to eat, otherwise she would have health problems, knowing that she was worried about that young man. But Yuruo still refused. Suddenly, in one of the articles about the seer, she recognized his face. And then I decided to try. Sushun was sitting in his office with his head tilted back. The bodyguards were listening outside the door, not understanding what the sounds were. They couldn't understand what was going on there, but the guy assumed that he was entertaining himself. The man did not believe that the boss would do this right in the office. Li Hu felt sad that the boss was getting very tired because of the company, and he needed to relieve his stress. Sushun sat with his eyes closed as he continued to make various noises. Chinju asked if he was pleased and received a positive response. While she was giving him a head massage, she decided to ask him why he was wasting his time on divination for other people, especially if he needed to do their future work on his own. He agreed with her, so he didn't take more than 3 people a day. Sushun saw that he was being discussed en masse on the internet, but the system didn't count the quest, so he had to find a way to become even more famous. There was a knock on the door. Liu ran into the room and reported some problems. Sushun inquired. She exposed the information that it was Master Zhou's job to expose the seer, inviting people to take a look at it tomorrow morning. Sushun had no idea who it was, but the appearance was extremely unconventional. Liu said that his name was Ming Chenggai, and he was a well-known Neo-Taoist metaphysician and physiognomist, and he was considered the best at what he did in their province. She was worried that he might ruin everything. Sushun pondered, realizing that he needed to meet him for sure. He wanted to use this opportunity to make his name even more recognizable. Liu advised him to disguise himself well so that the matter wouldn't affect the company in the future. He'd kicked her out because he already knew what to do. Liu left, asking him to be careful. Chinju called out sharply, and suddenly, she lifted Liu's skirt to show him. The girl whirled around, covering herself with her hands as Chinju asked for the grade. Liu blushed all over, not knowing what to say. Sushun swore that it wasn't him who did it. The guards heard their argument outside the door and how Liu was hitting him, but decided not to help. The next morning, he sat in his seat, waiting for Ming Chenggai. Chinju tried to figure out if he was angry or not because she thought that was what he wanted, especially since she liked him, but he just shut her up. The crowd began to support Master Zhou as he appeared. Sushun tensed up, intending to put on a show. He arrived in an expensive car while everyone was cheering on his arrival. Master Zhou now understood how he had become famous so quickly after seeing so many people. With his guards, he walked forward towards Su Xun. As they walked, they were surrounded by a crowd. He wanted to show the youngster who was the true demigod here. But at this moment, Qinju was running after him, reaching out her hand. She shoved him in the back as he came closer. Then Master Zhou fell to his knees along with his hat. Su Xun laughed that he didn't look at the ground at all. Security picked up the fallen Mr. Zhou. He was completely furious, wanting to repay him by exposing himself in front of a huge crowd. Su Xun pretended that there was nothing to expose here. One of the guards was angry that he was taking advantage of the gullibility of the people by going to watch Master Zhou's exposure. Su Xun wanted to know how he was going to do it. Master Zhou suggested that they read each other's fortunes to find out the truth. Su Xun agreed to his terms, intending to guess. He asked him to find out where the scar on his arm came from. The crowd was shocked, feeling that it was very hard. Su Xun asked for his hand, which surprised Master Zhou, since other scammers were falling apart at this point. He touched his hand while Master Zhou suggested that they leave before it was too late. Su Xun confidently recounted how when he was 3 years old, he went to the forest to get firewood, and the axe slipped off his hand, injuring him. Master Zhou was speechless, not understanding how he knew this. The crowd couldn't believe that this was true. Master Zhou was silent, his face sweating with nerves. But he still admitted it was a lie, because he hurt himself 3 years ago while chopping vegetables, and called him a fraud. Su Xun didn't tolerate him cheating to his face. Master Zhou was nervous, but decided to change the subject, offering to tell fortunes in return, but he could sense the killer's clear energy. Su Xun decided to ask about the age of his future marriage. Master Zhou began to assure him of his professionalism in this topic, that he guessed all the dates. He started looking at his hand, trying to find out everything from them. He reached for the hand, wanting to see more of it. Suddenly, he turned his palm toward himself. He was startled as he stepped back. Master Zhou nervously wanted to know his date of birth. Su Xun gave him this information, marveling at his unexpected politeness. He began to worry a lot, realizing that he had made a mistake. I looked at him in silence with nervous eyes. Unexpectedly, he bowed, loudly apologizing to Master Su for not recognizing his greatness. Su Xun didn't understand what was wrong. After all, he hadn't done anything yet. In fact, he really wanted to get divination from an expert, but Master Zhou was afraid of something. He shouted, admitting defeat. The crowd was shocked that Master Zhou was personally admitting defeat. Su Xun demanded an explanation from him, which made him jump to conclusions. Master Zhou became even more nervous, afraid to say it out loud, as if afraid to reveal his secret. But he bowed again, promising to keep his mouth shut for the rest of his life, and ran away, ceasing to answer questions from the public. They stood in complete silence as Su Xun tried to figure out what had happened. Everyone was looking at him intently, which made him feel pressured to speak out. He tried to explain that he couldn't work miracles at all, but people demanded divination. They begged him to solve all their problems, wanting to get their own. But he jumped down, running away from the crowd. Su Xun assumed that this was the limit of his popularity on the streets, so he didn't have to come back. Qinju was startled by her master's escape. He was getting conceited, admitting that it was nothing for the best hitman. Suddenly, a voice called out to him from behind and he was wildly startled. But a smiling Yuruo appeared in front of him and wanted to address fortune teller Su. He clarified her question, hoping she didn't recognize him. The girl asked him for help to find one person. Su Xun awkwardly asked her for the date and time of his birth, knowing what she was getting at. She blushed deeply as she explained that she had nothing but his portrait, and she took out a piece of paper with his drawing on it from behind her back. Yurua blushed profusely as she asked for help, and Qinju was surprised by the number of female fans he had. He took off his glasses, surrendering to her. Su Xun didn't expect her to find it, but the information on social media helped her. He realized that even with his abilities, a woman's intuition was stronger. She was surprised that he worked as a fortune teller, but it was just a hobby for him, and he wanted to understand why she was looking for it. Yuruo only wanted to say thank you for saving her on the liner, which he immediately dismissed. Qinju found him a terrible drag. She stuttered a lot and was nervous when she wanted to ask another question. The girl suddenly wondered if he had a girlfriend. Su Xun revealed that he was in a relationship with the girl he was on the ship with, and handed her a business card if she needed help. Yuruo was very upset, but it was to be expected. Su Xun tried to push back her compliments, which infuriated Qinju. Yuruo began to bombard him with questions about his relationship that he didn't want to answer. She thought that if they weren't already engaged, she might have a chance. So she happily ran away, intending to keep trying. Qinju's mind was now judging him, but he decided to change the subject and go out for lunch. Suddenly, Su Xun became thoughtful. After all, he had already taken out even Master Zhou, but the system still didn't complete the task, as if something bigger was waiting for him. Meanwhile, at the Wang family's home, the guy begged the master to drink tea. But the master could see that he wasn't just calling him for tea. Then, the guy fell to his knees, and he begged the monk to restore justice, since Su Xun had locked up his parents and sister. The monk specified what kind of ghost he was talking about on the phone. He shouted, explaining what his parents had said, that Su Xun had come to their house with the ghost of the deceased Qinju. The monk didn't expect that he could communicate with spirits, The guy said that he used to study with him when he was a loser, but then suddenly turned into the president of a large company. He concluded that he could not learn about the tragedy 3 years ago, except through the lips of the deceased girl. The monk wanted to know about the information about the sensational Master Su, but the guy only saw him on social networks. The man suspected that he and Su Shun were the same person. But the main thing was that his ghost of a dead person causes harm to the living, so he needs to be dealt with, especially if he serves him. Then he asked to be taken to Su Shun's place. Meanwhile, on the beach, Su Shun and Zijing were sitting under the awning. He was trying to catch a fish, but she doubted he could do it. He knew it took time and patience. But I already noticed a fish, but not in the sea. The monk was able to pinpoint its location. Zijing noticed Wang Teng approaching them. The guy was extremely angry that Su Shun had taken his girlfriend away from him, so he also put his entire family away. The monk remarked that the case would be very interesting. He immediately activated the spirit recognition technique. Qinju appeared in front of his eyes that she didn't expect this. Su Shun didn't know that Zhao was his sister. He felt that he would meet the main character today, which would help close the quest, but he didn't expect it to be Wang Teng. Wang Teng showed his Taoist monk that he would deal with him. Qinju hid behind Su Shun's back. She felt that the monk could see her, which meant the monk's actual skills. Su Shun handed him a Zhao amulet that was supposedly made by him. Qinju flew far away, fearing the amulet like it was on fire. The monk considered it a mere trinket compared to what he can do now. Then, he began to pull Qinju into his vortex. The girl held out her hand, asking Su Shun for help. He immediately grabbed her arm. Then he pulled her behind him. Zijing didn't understand what exactly was going on without seeing the ghosts. The monk wanted to punish the boy for helping spirits in sinister matters. Zijing was beginning to worry that there were spirits around them, but Su Shun only asked the monk to mind his own business. The monk was annoyed by his threats, so he wanted to use another spell. But then, a gun was brought to his head. Behind them were the guards, along with Li Hu. Su Shun reminded him that in their time, bullets would come out stronger than his techniques. The monk believed that this was against the rules of combat ethics. Li Hu brought the gun closer to the back of his head, ordering him to treat his boss with respect if he wants to live. He covered himself with his hands in fear, promising that it would never happen again. Wang Teng was shocked that the great monk was so easily scared by ordinary bullets. But the monk wasn't immortal either. Su Shun reminded them that they would have to settle their grievances now that he had come here. But Wang Teng fell to his knees in tears and tried to apologize. He asked Zijing for her opinion, but she just didn't want to see him again. Li Hu took him by the scruff of the neck on Su Shun's orders to take him to the police and put him in jail for covering up for his sister. As they carried him away, he screamed for help. Su Shun promised that he wouldn't kill anyone just because he wanted to talk to him. The monk obediently sat down, but considered himself unworthy of advice, as his abilities were much inferior. Su Shun said that he did not believe in the supernatural before, but the experience in 2 weeks changed his worldview. The monk was shocked at how he had achieved such results in 2 weeks. He only wanted to know more about the world of immortal cultivators. The man didn't expect him to ask such a question. But Su Shun was interested in this in his initial journey and would like to learn more. The monk felt that he had reread the fantasy since he was only a Taoist practitioner and couldn't possibly be an immortal. Only through practice can you fight evil, and there are techniques just to entertain people. Su Shun didn't understand why he was trying to grab Qinju, but the monk only wanted to take it for study. Qinju stuck out her tongue at him. The monk said that the spirits abruptly take a clear form, especially because they are afraid of sunlight, and Qinju looks as if she is alive. Su Shun also thought about it as he looked at her. She began to cry, afraid that he would send her to the experiments after all. But he wasn't ready to give away such a cute pet for experiments. She hugged his legs in gratitude. An angry Zijing who was watching their relationship appeared from behind. Su Shun understood and was about to let the monk go. He couldn't believe he was getting off so easily, but Su Shun didn't plan on doing anything to him. The monk was very surprised at his generosity, expecting the worst after that. But Su Shun had seen his abilities, so now they were colleagues, so they would have to help each other out. The monk stared at his outstretched hand in surprise, and suddenly he began to cry out of kindness. As he shook hands and wiped away his tears, he complained about the bad attitude of the Taoists, how their abilities were not appreciated and they were not allowed to earn money even for bread. Su Shun offered him $1 million to distribute to his colleagues. The monk was in a double shock. He was going to put up a statue of him in their temple and pray to heaven for him. Su Shun asked Zijing what she would like for dinner, but her appetite suddenly disappeared. He kissed her gently on the cheek, and he asked her not to be jealous because Qinju was just a ghost. She held up her phone, showing her wish on the screen. There was a disciple of the king of cuisine, Chen Fan. He was returning to his homeland and was in a luxurious 5-star restaurant, waiting for customers. Zijing said that he took awards one after another and recently opened a restaurant that is hard to get into. Su Shun was interested in his dishes and wanted to try them. In the evening, a huge queue formed in front of the restaurant. When they arrived, Su Shun ordered Qinju to wait for them in the car. Zijing doubted that they would be able to get into the restaurant through such a queue. But they started walking past the entire queue while he asked them not to jump to conclusions. He approached a random guy, asking him to give up his place in the queue for money. The couple immediately refused because they were standing here in the morning. But he handed me the check, asking me to look at the amount. The couple opened their mouths and exclaimed at the zeros on the check. They bowed, wishing them a good appetite. And the girl in the back scolded her boyfriend that they didn't come out earlier, and so they could get rich. They sat down at a chair and Zijing was worried that it was too provocative. But Sushun couldn't be more modest. The system suddenly congratulated him on completing the task, giving him the permanent skill medium, as well as a secret gift. Sushun smiled, wanting to open it. He assumed that the monk had told his colleagues about him, so he became famous. The secret gift was opened and contained a 300% charm boost. He looked at himself in the cell, even though he was still the same. Zijing blushed deeply as she confessed that she was inexplicably attracted to him. Under the table, she pulled her foot toward him. Sushun was surprised that his charm was like an aphrodisiac to girls. He was pleased with this gift, and at that moment the waiter came up to him. He wanted to try their signature dishes to prepare for the evening's physical activity. The waiter recommended a set meal from the chef, and Sushun agreed. Zijing felt shy when she heard about physical activity, but Sushun pretended that it was none of her business. The system suggested that he extract the current identity and gave him a new identity of the week, the king of the kitchen. He was now a gifted chef and had recently appeared to shake up the industry by winning over all the best in the country, but no one knew his name or background as he had disappeared unnoticed. His skills included various kitchens, pastry shops, sculpture, and dough modeling. The task was to open a restaurant that will become famous all over the world. This is given a month. Sushun was pleasantly surprised by the coincidence. The table was served with a set dinner from their chef. Zijing happily began to eat. Her eyes sparkled at how delicious it was. She ate with great gusto while Sushun encouraged her. But Sushun felt that none of this was up to his standards, and Puppy Chen was a terrible disgrace to him. The chef stepped out onto the balcony, noticing the new addition of customers. The manager assured that he would soon become the king of the kitchen, thanks to his skills, and would soon be ahead of his teacher. But Chen Fan didn't allow himself to speak of his teacher like that, since he was still a mere student. The manager agreed with him, but one day he will also become the king of the kitchen. Suddenly, Chen Fan noticed something. He saw Sushun, and Zijing asked why he wasn't eating, but he abruptly spat it all out in the trash. For him, it was terribly not tasty, which made all the customers angry. Chen Fan appeared on the balcony, mocking his words. Everyone was filming the chef on their phone to see how the chef would put him in his place. Sushun pretended that it wasn't about his food. He didn't expect the chef to have such a rumor. The chef asked the manager to talk to the security guards at the entrance, so that they would not let any more rednecks without taste into the restaurant. And he left, still laughing at him. But Sushun stopped him, saying that he had been too careful before and that his food was slop. The customers were in a terrible shock that such delicious food was insulted. Chen Fan clenched his fist in anger. He ordered him to repeat it if he wasn't a coward. Sushun explained that the dish should have everything perfect, but the color of the dishes only disgusted him. The visitors were very surprised, not knowing what to say. He explained that the combination of condiments was also worthless, and taking such money from customers does not give him the right to serve it. The manager decided that he was the problem, since other clients liked everything. Sushun told them about the marketing method, where they closed the eyes of the crowd to terrible food under a beautiful picture and a high price. The customers began to agree with him, thinking about it. Chen Fan tried to justify himself, because he was a disciple of the king of cuisine, and would not use such cheap methods. Sushun couldn't download all the memories at once. The chef was getting nervous, and suddenly, Sushun remembered. He wasn't a personal disciple at all, just said hello in the hotel hallway, and then started going on about it. The manager and the cook shouted that he was lying. Sushun knew that Chen Fan hoped that the king of the kitchen was secretive, that he would not expose him, and he hired PR people. The manager didn't understand why he had so much knowledge if the king of the kitchen was always in hiding. They were going to call the police on him and have him jailed for defamation. But Sushun directly said that he is the king of the kitchen. Zijing opened her mouth in surprise. The shocked guests did the same. Chen Fan almost fainted. Everyone immediately ran up to him, not understanding whether this was true or not. The manager was sure it was all a lie. But then, he decided to ask Chen Fan directly if they didn't believe him. He stood silent, sweating with fear. Chen Fan thought of the king of cuisine, without expecting him to show up at his restaurant. Although he couldn't see his face, the boy knew their meeting place, which meant one thing. The manager cautioned that the guy was telling the truth. Chen Fan still lied, as if he wasn't going to reveal his teacher's appearance, choosing to stand up to the end for the sake of his career. Sushun didn't expect anything else from him. Visitors offered to prove its status and arrange a battle between them. Chen Fan became very nervous, worried that this might be the king of the kitchen. He tried to get away with it, pretending that he didn't want to let the crook into his kitchen. People agreed with his concerns and didn't know what to do now. Sushun suggested opening a restaurant tomorrow and inviting everyone online to try out his dishes, as well as having a battle with him. Liu Yu was disappointed that President Su hadn't shown up for work for several days, as if he didn't care. Mr. Lee was passing by her desk. She immediately called out to him. He turned to her. The girl asked President Su because he hadn't been to work for a long time, which could have an impact on the company. Mr. Lee thought the same thing until I talked to him a couple of days ago. And now the president's words have completely changed his mind. He started relaying to her President Su's words that he didn't want to have a company, that he couldn't work like clockwork. Mr. Lee realized that the boss was looking into the distant future. Liao Yu understood now. The phone on the desk vibrated from President Su's call. The girl picked up the phone immediately, and he suddenly ordered her to come to a certain address immediately. Mr. Lee was afraid that something had happened to him, but she was going to leave right away. So she said her goodbyes and ran away. She understood that even if he looked like a slacker, he still worked more than them, so he must have a big project in mind, and she wanted to help him as much as she could. But when she arrived, Susun was standing in his chef's uniform. He presented her with his restaurant called Refuge of the King of Cuisine. She hadn't expected him to go missing because of his work at the coffee shop, but he thought the restaurant was only showing preparations for the opening. The girl sighed, realizing that she was a fool. But he admitted that he was lost because of divination to people in the transition. Susun called her out for help, but she didn't know how to cook at all. Later, he changed Liao Yu and Zijing into revealing waitress uniforms. He was going to work in the kitchen while they sorted out the hall. Zijing was outraged that he was the president of the company and couldn't hire waitresses, forcing her to do it. He explained that he had already put up a vacancy, but they would need their help for the first time. While they were standing at the entrance, they were approached by an unknown person who was looking for their boss. They were some bandits who wanted to see the owner of a new establishment, who opened it without meeting them. Zijing realized that they would try to rob them, so she decided to call the security chief. But Susun didn't want to kick out potential customers. He invited them to the table, specifying the order, but they only wanted to get paid for a restaurant in their area, otherwise they would get in the way. Susun offered to try his cuisine first, and if he didn't like it, he would pay more on top. The bandits were shocked with his reaction. One of the men was afraid that it might be a setup, but their boss wasn't afraid of anything. But he was very interested in his waitresses. Liao Yu didn't know that Susun could cook, but Zijing was sure that they couldn't do anything to him. But Liao Yu still couldn't relax, deciding to call the security service, knowing that there was no way he could handle it on his own. And then, she looked at the kitchen through the crack and was shocked. Susun deftly handled the frying pan in the fire, and Chinju was helping him by serving the ingredients. He reached for his cleaver, and right in the air, he started carving fish, divided into equal parts, separating the meat from the bones. Liao Yu couldn't believe that his true calling was cooking. The man was getting angry that there was no food for so long. But then, Susun appeared, and behind him were two waitresses with trays of food. He apologized for being late, as he hadn't cooked for a long time, and got some exercise. The man was outraged that he was going to test his cooking on them, but he was interrupted by the incredible aroma coming from the dishes on the table. The bandits stared at them with their mouths hanging open. Susun allowed them to start eating while waiting for their opinions. They began to get nervous, but they still condemned even the appearance, trying to get the promised money from him. But his drinking buddies attacked the plates like animals. The boss was extremely angry at their impatience. Susun and his friends were very surprised by their change of reaction. The bandits ate everything in their path, fighting for every crumb. In the end, the plates were brilliantly clean. The girls didn't believe they had polished them any better than the dishwasher. The men were sitting back, leaning back with pleasure and satiation. Susun could tell from their expressions that they were still delighted, but they immediately stood up, noticing that they had forgotten about their goal. They tried to say something bad about his food, but they couldn't find the right words. Susun was waiting for their verdict, but they began to cry, realizing that they couldn't lie so blatantly about such divine food. They left the restaurant even after paying generous sums. Suddenly, a voice was heard saying that it was interested in the waitress position. It was Yuzo who came from the ad. There was a huge queue in front of his restaurant. Chen Fan jumped up and down in anger that he was still able to screw him up. He received a call on his phone from the director. He couldn't believe that the scullion didn't recognize his own teacher, and he demanded the money back from the investment as the restaurant emptied out. Chen Fan didn't believe that he was the king of the kitchen, because the real one was long gone. The director didn't care who he was as long as his business continued to fail. Chen Fan promised to bring it to light tomorrow so that business would return to normal. He didn't care who this guy was anymore, as long as he was preventing him from making money. He stabbed the table, hitting Susun's picture, wishing him dead. There was still a queue outside Susun's restaurant. People didn't understand why they wanted to visit this restaurant. One of the people in the queue said that the whole internet was already buzzing about this place, and when you open it, everything will become clear. The doors began to open slowly. Everyone started shouting when they saw the three waitresses. Zijing greeted the guests at the King of Cuisine's retreat. All the guys immediately fell in love with them, promising to definitely eat at them. A huge crowd came through the doors without stopping. The waitresses laid out menus on all the tables as well as terminals. Check after check came out of the cash register. Susun calmly prepared with 4 hands. Chinju started to get confused about the receipts and orders. feeling the blockage. He didn't expect that the rich Yuruo would volunteer to work as a waitress. Everyone was sitting in the main hall after a hard day's work. They were waiting for the last customer at the next table to leave. He abruptly stood up and started to leave, and Yuruo gave him a hint to leave. The girls were glad that they could change their clothes and go home. But Sushun noticed something strange about the last guest. The next day came, and already in the early morning, guests were banging on the doors to finally open them. A police car pulled up to the building and suddenly announced the closure and sealing of the restaurant. Liu Yu burst into the room and informed Sushun, who had been waiting for them yesterday. She hadn't expected him to know about this at all. Sushun calmly called her to greet the guests. In front of the door, there were already journalists who reported on the arrival of the police squad. The officer went inside, intending to talk to their chief. Zijing wanted to understand what was going on and volunteered to answer their questions. Sushun came out of the room, announcing himself as the boss. The officer gave him a chance to confess for himself, but Sushun didn't understand what exactly was the matter. He thought they were mistaken. But Chen Fan came into the restaurant. He walked into the building with a smile, which was watched by journalists. They didn't expect that he was the one who would lead the police squad to his own teacher. Sushun was surprised that he only came to his teacher's restaurant a few days later. Chen Fan was sure that he wasn't the king of the kitchen, so he tried to expose him. But Sushun was pointing at the people who were queuing up in front of his delicious food. The crowd was against the charges, recognizing him as king. The policeman wanted to finally get the gist of it. And Chen Fan pointed at the room, talking about the condiment bag. Then the officer gave the order to search. Zijing didn't understand what was going on while Sushun suggested that they discuss everything. They sat down at the table and Sushun tried to understand the meaning of the search, but Chen Fan was sure that he knew everything and was already panicking. But the police found only one bag of condiments in which there was nothing. Chen Fan jumped off the table, not understanding how this was possible. Abruptly, he took the bag out of the cop's hand, starting to frantically inspect everything inside. Sushun wanted to understand what exactly his disciple was looking for. Chen Fan ordered him to shut up, because he was sure that it would destroy him. The policeman explained that he was rumored to have added poppy straws to his meals, which was addictive, but he wouldn't dare do that. Chen Fan couldn't find it, starting to get nervous. He was sure that he had simply hidden it away. Sushun suggested inviting the reporters inside and searching the entire restaurant right in front of them. Chen Fan took this as a challenge. They opened the door to journalists so that everyone could see proof of his honesty. Everyone started searching the kitchen inside and out, but there was nothing forbidden anywhere. Yuruo wondered how he could be so sure that the restaurant didn't have several bookmarks, but he knew that Mac was only in that bag. Yuruo didn't understand how he knew that, but he told about his high-quality camera, which is not wrong. The entire kitchen was searched. Chen Fan was sprawled on the floor, exhausted, because there was no poppy anywhere. Sushun walked in on him, watching him lose. He couldn't figure out where he had hidden it, but Sushun had no idea what he was talking about. The policeman was going to take him to the police station for making false statements. Then the police left the restaurant and met with an angry crowd that regretted their time spent. Before the police left, Sushun stopped them. And I decided to make a mutual accusation of using poppy straws. Chen Fan swore that he would never have dared to do such a thing. The police officer could not accept his statement without proof. But when they checked out his restaurant, they also had no proof other than words. He offered to check out Chen Fan's restaurant, taking responsibility for the false testimony. The policeman watched him get into the car. They arrived at his restaurant and got out of the car. Chen Fan was sure that his kitchen was completely clean, compared to his own. Sushun marveled at his self-confidence. The policeman suggested that he search it on his own, and he went into the kitchen to look around. Chen Fan was sure that this was just revenge, but the policeman wouldn't listen to him. Suddenly, Sushun noticed something. He took out a strange thing from one of the lockers. The policeman was sure it was a dried poppy flower. Chen Fan went into a terrible shock when he saw this. He was sure that Sushun had brought this with him, but he was asked to search everything himself, so it wasn't his fault. The police officer ordered the officers to search further. They started checking all the lockers. Chen Fan tried to convince them that he wasn't doing this, and it was just a setup. There was a safe in one of the upper cabinets. He was trying to figure out who it belonged to. Chen Fan pretended to keep his culinary secrets there. But Sushun had assumed that there was a poppy there, so Chen Fan was willing to prove otherwise. He knew that leaving Mac in the kitchen was the easiest thing to do, but no one else knew the password to the safe. And when he opened it, there was a whole bag of poppies on the bottom shelf. He was immediately tied up by employees. For this amount, he was threatened with a life sentence. He tried to explain that it was Sushun who did it, but the cop knew it was his personal safe. Even more so, who could have planted it other than himself, other than Chinju's ghost? When he got out of the car, the journalists immediately started filming him. They all started asking questions about why he revealed his identity after all these years, as well as how he combined his work as president. He just said that cooking is like a hobby for him, and left the rest of the questions without comment. All the girls in the crowd were starting to fall in love with his charisma. As he was surrounded by the crowd, another car pulled up nearby. The guy dispersed all the people. He was visited by people from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who wanted to bring him to prepare meals for a meeting with diplomats. Su-shun strictly refused them because he only cooked in his own restaurant. Moreover, there is a hungry queue in front of the restaurant, and they also need to wait for their own. He asked to pass this message on to his management and turned around. They hadn't expected such a harsh response. Su-shun went back to his restaurant. The crowd was in awe of his character. His assignment was to make his restaurant famous all over the world, so he wasn't interested in their banquets. Su-shun started being shown on the news, telling how all the foodies were flocking to his restaurant. They turned off the TV in exasperation. The men didn't know what to do about it. Lu Gui, the chairman of the National Culinary Association, was waiting for their suggestion. The guy said that more than 10 ambassadors had already expressed their desire to visit his restaurant, so it was too late to do anything. Lu Gui slapped the table viciously. After all, their association was one of the gems of the national treasure, and he didn't want to look pathetic in front of the eatery. The guy explained that the king of cuisine was already widely known, and they would have to put up with it. Lu Gui looked at him crazily. But he had an idea. He remembered that King of the Kitchen was only a nickname, not an official title, so he offered to confirm his qualifications. The guys were very surprised, realizing that they should not do this. He will instantly rise above them and become more important in the culinary growth. But Lu Gui noticed that he didn't have to go through it. The guy realized that this was a brilliant idea to embarrass him, and they would become an open organization. Lu Gui reminded about the upcoming arrival of the diplomatic mission from Japan, that he likes to always be first, so you need to ask them to bring the best chef to compete. But the guy took into account that this could hit the citizens of their country. But Lu Gui wasn't interested in such consequences. He only wanted to nail Su-shun to the board of shame. And here, he decided who would win and who wouldn't. Su-shun sneezed. Chinja thought that he had caught a cold, but he sensed that someone was plotting against him. Yuruo asked for a huge queue to wait, but they were already quite tired, and suggested to expand the area in the restaurant. An unknown bus appeared on the road. The foreigners who finally got to the restaurant got out of it. They started to disperse the crowd because all the seats were already booked, but the crowd was dissatisfied with this after standing for half a day. Yuruo asked Liao Yu to call Su-shun because something serious was happening. The guy threatened people from the queue without even introducing himself. He swung to strike, but Su-shun grabbed his shoulder, wanting to know who he was. The guy was terribly angry that he raised his hand against a civil servant, but Su-shun only put his hand on his shoulder, and he was already crying. The whole line laughed at him while he felt disgraced. Su-shun didn't notice the civil servant at all, but only the brazen brawler. All the people agreed with him, trying to kick him out. He didn't know what to do and panicked. Lu Gui appeared and stopped the fight. He started complaining about Su-shun for stopping him from dispersing the crowd, but Lu Gui just slapped him hard in the face because he wasn't good at talking to people at all. Su-shun watched in silence. Lu Gui didn't understand why people should leave since they came to eat, so he kicked the guy out. The girls were surprised by the decency of his boss, which keeps employees in a tight grip. But Liao Yu doubted it. He extended his hand to Su-shun, introducing himself as the chairman of the National Culinary Association. The entire queue was in shock, and they started filming as the chairman personally arrived to evaluate the king's cuisine. The chairman apologized for his subordinates, but Su-shun was delighted with his methods. He introduced foreign guests who would like to try his dishes and tried to find a solution to let them pass without waiting in line. But Su-shun maintained an equal rule that the queue moved the same way regardless of status, but they could negotiate with the people in the queue for money. The girls were perplexed. Lu Gui understood his position and went to explain to his guests. Su-shun gave the go-ahead. One of the guys was already ready to sell his place in the queue to the chairman, and then one by one. Zijing didn't expect him to send these people to the back of the queue, since it was possible to book their seats for another day. But Su-shun knew that the chairman didn't come here for food. It's to destroy it. The foreign guests ate while enjoying an incredible meal. Yuruo couldn't believe that they were foreigners, since they spoke good Chinese. But they were ordinary embassy employees, so they have been living in China for a long time and know the language. He was also very envious of Su-shun for selecting such beauties for the staff. Su-shun knew that this wasn't what he was here for, so he tried to force out an answer. He applauded him for his insight. Su-shun noticed his way of praising him, as he called him king by the people, which signified his lack of status in his higher community. Lu Gui was trying to get away with it when he was discovered. He still mentioned that his qualifications were never confirmed, and it would be unfair to consider him the king of the kitchen. Zijing clarified how he could confirm his title. Lu Gui grinned, knowing that they were being taken in. And he said that first you need to prove the huge contribution of Su-shun to the development of national cuisine, but did not have time to finish. How did Su-shun go to the toilet when he wasn't interested at all? Lu Gui tried to hook him by suggesting alternative ways, but he closed his eyes, just wanting to go to the bathroom and then talk. Yuruo apologized to the chairman for Su-shun's rudeness, but in reality, Lu Gui was angry, wanting to take revenge for today's humiliation. Chinja couldn't understand what exactly the chairman wanted. He managed to use the medium skill after learning that he would lose his seat, so he tries to trample on it. Chinju instantly flew away, wanting to hit him, but Sushun stopped her because he had his own plans. She didn't expect him to have an idea already. He was going to use this idiot to complete this task for worldwide popularity. Sushun gave her a goal to keep an eye on him and find out his purpose and report back immediately. Sushun returned and apologized for their interrupted conversation. But only then did he ask Zijing to call a plumber because they didn't have any water and he didn't wash his hands. Lu Gui stood in a stupor after shaking his hand. He sat down quietly, wiping his hands on napkins, and wanted to hear about another method. And at that moment, the box ran out of napkins. This annoyed Lu Gui greatly. He said that a diplomatic mission from Japan is coming soon, and he will bring with him the best chef Sadako Tsu, who wants to arrange a competition. Yuruo held back her laughter when she heard his name, which meant winter open. Sushun remembered that the best chef in Japan was Kosi Sai, but Lu Gui revealed the sad news that he passed away a few months ago due to heart problems. But according to rumors, his student Sadako Tsu was able to surpass his teacher. I asked him for his solution. Sushun agreed to the competition, but on one condition. Lu Gui clarified what he wanted. He didn't care about its terms. He only wanted to destroy it. He decided to hold a competition in his own restaurant, but they also had other plans to arrange a live fight on the site of the National Exhibition Center. Sushun nodded understandingly. He turned away, saying goodbye to his guest. Only then did Lu Gui agree to his terms. Sushun was very surprised and Lu Gui resigned himself. Only he remembered that his restaurant would be too small for a live broadcast because you need to fit the entire set. Lu Gui tried to suggest another option but was interrupted. But Sushun already had a solution, and all he needed was their financial assistance. He handed him the renovation project for his restaurant. He saw the name and was surprised that he handed him a plan to expand the building. Sushun had even already chosen a place in the best hotel in the city that only needed to be purchased. He began describing a swanky new restaurant that would be dusted with gold and marble to boost the country's reputation on live TV. Lu Gui tried to explain that they didn't have such a budget, but Sushun turned away, saying goodbye to his guest again. Back then, Lu Gui promised to get the right amount. He even shed a tear at his generosity and asked me to transfer him 70 million, and in a week everything will be ready. Lu Gui was also crying, but not out of happiness. All the foreign guests have left. Yuruo didn't understand why she needed to ask for his money, but he only wanted to get back at him financially. Lu Gui was just furious at the amount while making the call. The caller picked up the phone. He called the chef to make sure he was prepared 100%. Lu Gui already knows how to get that money back, but the main goal was to win. At night, at Sushun's house, he was lying on the bed, sleeping like a log. There were soft footsteps at the door. Yuzo suddenly appeared above the bed. While he was sleeping, she held out her hand to him. But he immediately took out the knife with his other hand. I threw her down on the bed so she wouldn't run away. He couldn't understand what she was doing here if she had to sleep in a restaurant, but she was too scared to sleep there, so Zijing allowed her to stay here. She let out a sharp cry of fear as Sushun tried to calm her down. A disgruntled Zijing who was worried about Yuruo burst into the room after hearing her crying. But Sushun swore that he didn't do anything to her, and she started hitting him with her shirt because she was sure that he was guilty. On the street, journalists told everyone about the opening of the new King's Cuisine restaurant that they were about to open, but people came not for the sake of it, but for the sake of the fight. Lu Gui was already tired of everyone calling Sushun the king of the kitchen. He wished Sadako Tsu good luck, intending to help him win. Everyone noticed the chef's appearance and immediately covered it with fan shouts. They reported that Sadako Tsu had arrived, but Sushun was nowhere to be seen, so he must be busy preparing for a fight. There was still an hour left before the competition, while Sushun was sleeping in bed with the two girls. He opened his eyes when he heard a voice. Sushun jumped at the ghost, but Chinju asked him to get used to it. The girls were annoyed that he had woken them up before the alarm went off. Chinju was surprised that they were already in the same bed after a couple of weeks of dating, but he explained that only his room had air conditioning. Sushun didn't expect her to come back while watching Lu Gui, but he had completely forgotten about everything. After all, it is today that the fight with the Japanese chef is taking place. People were waiting for the competition, and it was still 5 minutes away, but Sushun's table was empty. The jury was terribly annoyed that he didn't even show up. Lu Gui was already prepared to throw mud at him if he didn't show up. The host counted the minutes, and if it was late, the jury would have to cancel it. But before she could finish, the second reporter called out loudly to Sushun. He came to the competition. Sadako Tsu clicked his tongue with a smile. The host thought it was some kind of psychological trick on the opponent, that he came at the last minute, but really, he just overslept. His response caused everyone to be shocked. The journalist was sure that this is a kind of pressure on the opponent, and shows how he surpasses the opponent even after a dream. Sushun didn't mean it, but the crowd didn't listen to him. Sadako Tsu clenched his fist in anger. Lu Gui asked everyone to keep quiet as the competition would start soon, and they were ready to announce the beginning. The participants were asked to bring their own food, but the entire Sushun team was horrified because they forgot to prepare the food. Sushun stood there, yawning. The audience was shocked that even now he wasn't in a hurry. A girl carrying Sadako Tsu's groceries arrived with a tray. And in a couple of seconds, people will know what he is going to cook. Under the secret was a chilled golden lystra. The jury noticed that this is not a simple fish, but winter lystra himi, that you can catch only 100 pieces per season. The host showed the audience that Sadako Tsu had carefully prepared for the competition and spared no expense while waiting for Sushun's response. But Sushun suddenly went to his desk as if he wanted to say something. He began to examine the fish carefully. Sushun saw that this fish was worth at least 3 million, not expecting such an investment in the competition. He asked for a piece, since he didn't need all the fish, but Sadako Tsu just laughed at him. Sushun was offended by his harsh reaction, but Sadako waited for his ingredients to be taken out. The host could not understand the meaning of their interaction, considering it as another psychological trick. They saw the obvious annoyance on Sadako's face. Sushun called out to Zijing to take a look in the refrigerator and bring some leftover food. She knew that there was no fresh food, but Yuruo hoped to bring something. After a while, they brought back some of the food they found. Zijing offered to run to the store, but that was enough for Sushun. Sadako Tsu smiled slyly, knowing that he had already won. Sushun noticed that 1 million dishes were prepared from these foods every day, and the only point was to feed people. The journalist agreed with him 100%. All the people laughed at Sadako, and as an answer, they shut him up. But he wanted to show the world that Japanese culinary art has no equal. The host announced the start of the competition. Sadako Tsu immediately began carving the fish with his sharpened knife, which passed through the fish in seconds. Sushun responded by tossing his fish into the air and butchering it in one fell swoop. The jury noticed that the competitors are not inferior to each other. Lugui smiled, knowing that Sushun would soon be finished. Sadako Tsu finished his dish by making a secret recipe for sashimi, serving it like a statue. The fish looked as if it hadn't been butchered, which impressed the jury. They saw how thinly sliced the fish and preserved the appearance, so the taste remained original and fresh. The jury couldn't hide their sympathies, feeling the fish melt in their mouths, and wanted to know the secret ingredient. All the judges gave Sadako Tsu the maximum score. The host sadly reported that now Sushun should at least hope for a draw, but this will end his reputation as the king of the kitchen. Sadako Tsu confessed how easy it was to destroy it, but Sushun asked him to wait for the jury's evaluation of his dish. He asked the girls to serve the dishes to the jury, while Sadako Tsu laughed and joked loudly. Zijing asked if everything was fine, but Sushun was as calm as possible. They were carrying plates of homemade carpfish soup. When the bowl was opened, there was an incredible stew underneath. Sadako Tsu laughed at his squalor, making ordinary soup for the competition. Sushun hinted that he needed to cover his mouth at least a little. The host agreed that such a simple dish could greatly influence the jury's decision. They all ate 1 spoonful of soup, and suddenly they felt something. Their faces suddenly changed, and they didn't express any comments as if everything was too bad. The man wept, realizing that they had no right to evaluate the food of the gods. The presenter did not expect such a turn that the judge would consider themselves unworthy of evaluation. But suddenly, one of the judges gave 9 points. It was Lu Guyi who didn't see anything special in the dish. Sadako Tsu laughed out loud that the king of the kitchen had lost. The host herself was surprised by this situation, that the chairman of the National Culinary Association can help out in the direction of his participant. But Lu Guyi considered himself a chef, and he wanted to see the strongest, so his assessment was as honest as possible. All of a sudden, there was a clap in the hall. It was Sushun who slammed his speech as he judged the chefs as honestly and impartially as possible, admiring his moral qualities. But they couldn't know that they hadn't met Sadako Tsu before, and hadn't faked his victory. Lu Guyi laughed at his speculation. After all, they had never met Sadako. But Sushun played a video on his phone of Lu Guyi, asking Sadako Tsu to destroy him in the competition, waiting for an explanation. Lu Guyi was shocked, not understanding how this was possible. A hidden video was shown on huge screens, in which the confession of Kosi-sai's murder sounds, that he humiliated Sadako Tsu, thereby did him a favor and asked her in return. The host couldn't believe that the chairman had entered into a conspiracy and even committed murder. Sadako slapped the table angrily, and suddenly he attacked Sushun with a knife, wishing him dead. The host tried to warn him. Sadako Tsu was going to kill him for setting him up like this. But Sushun abruptly turned around. With just 2 fingers, he stopped the knife blade. The host was shocked, because of which she had no words left for commenting. With the same fingers, he snapped the blade in half. Sadako Tsu trembled in fear, knowing that the blade was made of a 1,000-year-old meteorite iron, and he had only broken it with his hand. Then Sushun punched him in the face. It flew straight towards the set. Sushun gave him a direct answer. Everyone saw the deformations from the powerful impact. Sushun walked over to the jury table. I was waiting for Lu Gui's comments, but he was still smiling at his careful preparation for this, but he knew he could get back to work with his connections. Sushun stared at him in silence. Then he was going to take revenge, knowing that he couldn't protect his girlfriends for days on end. Lu Gui looked at his expression as if he wanted to hit him and provoked him. After all, it wouldn't count as self-defense. He kept saying that everyone would know him as a pleasant and polite gentleman, while people tried not to look in his direction. He saw it as he stopped laughing. Sushun didn't intend to hit him, but now he heard the threats. He tried to stop him, pretending it was all a joke. Lu Guyi screamed for help as Sushun pounded him. The latest news was the chairman's case on suspicion of murder, which was brought to trial, and Sushun is now officially recognized as the king of the kitchen. Evening came. He saw that the video from the competition was spread all over the internet, which means that the task will be completed very soon. There was a voice outside the door. It was Zijing that suddenly entered his room. She closed the door behind her. Let them know that they are ready to reward him for the victory. He stood up on the bed, starting to take off his shorts. But suddenly he understood the plural of her words. Yuruo, who was also going to participate, also came to pick her up. Sushun couldn't believe this was happening to him. So he pinched his cheek, which hurt terribly. Then he realized that this wasn't a dream at all, and he smiled broadly. He got out of bed, enjoying this life. Ziying woke up, not expecting to see him so early, but he was going to make breakfast for them. But he still didn't understand what she'd done yesterday. She didn't see it as a big deal if he deserved it. Then he asked her to thank him again. She threw a pillow at him in anger to get him to leave. Zijing looked at Yuruo, and she asked me not to pretend that she wasn't sleeping. The girl covered herself with a blanket, embarrassed to listen to their dialogues on such a topic, especially since she felt like a third extra. But Zijing calmed her down, knowing that many people liked Sushun, so she decided to choose a girl according to her taste, so that all sorts of people wouldn't hang out with him. So I suggested that we count each other as sisters. Yuruo smiled as she called her sister. She suddenly remembered that Liao Yu also liked Sushun. If she wanted to join, they would have to do something. Zijing was worried that things might get out of hand. Sushun was singing in the kitchen while preparing breakfast. Kinju was extremely pouty with anger. She wasn't happy that these girls deserved to sleep with him, even though she had contributed more to his victory. Sushun was surprised by her suggestions, but the girl tried to deny it. He explained that they will never be together because they are literally from different worlds. The girl had tears in her eyes because she considered herself unworthy only because of her role as a ghost. Sushun tried to explain to her in a different way, but she had already flown away. He sensed how difficult it would be with her. The system congratulated him on completing the task, for which he was given a permanent reward in the form of cooking Chinese dishes, but he did not like the reward, and ordered the system to extract the identity to get a better identity. The system gave him the identity of a paranormal investigator. Now he could hear the voices of the dead, and he could solve cases at the click of a finger, becoming a legend. Now he's back on track, which is a direct threat to the villains. His skills were the ability to hear the dead, see clearly, and read minds. And the task was to help the police solve 3 crimes in 2 weeks. Sushun became very interested. Meanwhile, in Jiangnan City, a hotel is being investigated. The staff sat with their heads in their hands over their work. Chen Yu, the deputy head of the department, said that during the week of investigation they had not made any progress. Then he decided to brainstorm, studying every detail. The guy didn't know where to get the evidence if there were no cameras and the autopsy didn't show anything. The man offered to turn to the best in this business. The guy didn't know what he was talking about if their entire team couldn't find anything in a week. He decided to tell them about the legend of the detective that he could hear the dead. The guy was shocked to realize who he was talking about. Everyone thought he was just a regular horror story character because that doesn't happen. But the man met him in reality when he helped them solve a dead-end case. The guy believed him, but they didn't know where to find him after all these years. The man found out that he lives in Jiangnan and leads a rather public life. In the morning, they drove to the place. It was the Qingyun International Corporation. The man did not expect that he would work for the company. When they reached the entrance, they were met by a security guard. They provided him with their investigation department documents, wanting to talk to President Su. The guard asked them to wait. The man was shocked that he tried to meet with the president, to whom the authorities register for 6 months. But he decided not to worry ahead of time. Liao Yu came to the table and poured Sushun another cup of tea. Yuruo could clearly see that Liao Yu had plans for Sushun, which made Zijing annoyed. She didn't want to lose to her. Sushun sat silently on the phone, sipping his tea. The girl stood in front of him, and Zijing suggested that he relax a little. He was tense, sensing something in the air. Girls started offering him massages to help him relax after working on the phone. Liao Yu decided to leave them and leave. But when she opened the door, a nervous voice came from behind her. Li Hu ran into the room, loudly announcing the arrival of the cops, offering to take him out the back door. Everyone didn't understand why the police had come to see him, but Li Hu grabbed his hand, not wanting to waste precious time on escaping. But Sushun was sure that there was nothing wrong. He asked Liao Yu to arrange them in the guest hall. The staff were sitting in the guest room. The man assumed that he had gone into hiding for so many years and did not want to reveal his identity. But the deputy was asked to calm down and wait for his appearance. Sushun entered the office with Liao Yu, apologizing for being late. The deputy shook his hand, and Sushun would like to know the reason for their visit. But he didn't answer the questions, just stood there in silence. The man was shocked that he hadn't changed at all in so many years. The deputy couldn't believe that President Su was the detective. The man reminded him of a 13-year-old case in which he helped his team find the villain. And from that moment on, he was no longer seen, but recently he saw a report about the king of cuisine, that he was also the president of the corporation. Liu Yu had inadvertently mentioned that he was also a fortune teller, but Su Xun considered it just a hobby. The deputy told me about a triple homicide case number 513. He wasn't sure that such a young guy could be a good detective. Su Xun hadn't heard anything about him, so he was handed the collected materials. The deputy nervously told how in the evening in one village, a family of 3 people was killed, and the house was completely robbed. The woman experienced a group action, the man had multiple stab wounds, and the child was simply crushed. They read it all in horror. The man slapped the couch while talking about their investigation, but there were no cameras in the village and it was raining that day, so the tracks were washed away. Even though they had 4 suspects, the rest was quiet. So they asked for his help in solving the problem. Su Xun agreed to help them and asked them to take them to the corpses. They went to the morgue. The man suggested calling a forensic doctor, but Su Xun didn't need to, so he took the cloth off the corpse. The deputy was shocked that he didn't need a doctor, as if he was going to open the body himself. Su Xun immediately used the ability to hear the dead. I touched his forehead to talk to him. He promised him to avenge the suffering of his family so that he would answer his questions. And suddenly I felt something. The deputy didn't understand what he was doing. The man offered to touch other victims, but it was enough for him. Su Xun had already obtained the key information and asked to be taken to the crime scene, and he started to leave, which greatly surprised the deputy. Su Xun felt his pain and rage as he promised to punish the 4 criminals. They arrived at the old house. The man said that the family was killed in the house, and the man was lying at the door, offering to enter the house. But Su Xun needed to look around outside. While he was walking around the garden, he was told that the tracks were washed by the rain. The man had warned him that it was very dirty, but he leaned forward, as if examining something. Su Xun cheered loudly at the discovery. He picked it up carefully with his napkin. It was someone's cigarette butt. They noticed that it was a rather expensive stamp, which the victim would hardly have been able to afford. They remembered that the family didn't smoke at all, so the killer might have dropped the evidence. Even through the mud, it would be possible to extract the DNA, and Su Xun asked to be sent to the lab as soon as possible. The man immediately ran away with the package to the car. The deputy was surprised by the guy's professionalism that he was able to find the most important piece of evidence. Su Xun shared the deceased's story that the villain dropped the cigarette butt and tried to push it into the ground. Zam couldn't believe that the stories about his abilities weren't all lies. 5 whole days had passed. While Su Xun was playing sports, Chinju flew up to him with a ringing sound on her phone. He got off the treadmill and answered the phone. He was happily informed that thanks to the cigarette butt, they were able to identify the killers, that they were the suspects, and that they were planned to be captured in the evening. He was invited to attend the capture. Su Xun immediately agreed. Chinju was looking at the kettlebell with interest when Su Xun decided to take it with him. She got in the car with him, thinking they were going to have fun, but it was serious. He needed something from her. They drove up to the place. The man met his car. All 4 of them were in this building, and they tried to set up an ambush, but the criminals were more cunning, taking a hostage. Su Xun promised that they would be able to think of something. The police were talking over the loudspeaker, telling them to go down, because this is the only way out for them. He and Su Xun approached the disgruntled Deputy Chen. He shook his hand, apologizing for such a situation, since the criminals took an 8-year-old girl hostage. Su Xun asked which floor they were on, and it turned out to be the 5th floor. He offered to go up to them for negotiations, wanting to exchange himself for the girl. The police were shocked that he was going to exchange hostages. The deputy did not want to involve him in such a serious adventure, especially such a weak guy. But Su Xun just passed by. He slammed his fist into the wall, leaving a hole in it. The fence collapsed after his blow, and the man was worried that he was really going to do it. The deputy was now sure that he wasn't in such great danger. The man was afraid for such a famous person. The deputy considered this a plus, which can lull the vigilance of criminals, especially since he can talk to corpses, so he will definitely cope. Su Xun went up behind the special forces while the criminals ordered them to leave, otherwise something would happen to the girl. He moved the SWAT team, wanting to move forward. Su Xun greeted the criminals. The boys didn't know who he was, holding a knife to the girl's throat while she cried loudly. He didn't expect that they wouldn't recognize him by introducing themselves as the president of Qingyun Corporation. They didn't expect to meet him here. The guy didn't know why he was here. Su Xun lied that the girl was related to him, and he wanted to negotiate with them to let her go, offering them 5 million. But they were not ready to let her go for any money, because the police were standing outside, but they offered to change places with her. Su Xun smiled and agreed. The men stood in shock at his simple agreement. He sat down on a chair and held the knife hand to his throat. Su Xun thought it was the right thing to do, since it was better to hold a billionaire hostage. The girl ran away and was met by her mother. The man was very worried, not realizing that he was holding the billionaire by a thread from life. But Su Xun wanted to talk to them in private, ordering Chinju to close the door. The door slammed shut with a loud bang. They got scared and started threatening him. But Su Xun wasn't afraid of him, seeing the criminal's hand tremble. He tried to stab him, but Su Xun was already gone. Then he punched him in the face, Everyone immediately jumped on him with weapons to kill him. Sushun dodged, reminding that the first strike he made was for killing a child. And then, he dodged the second blow by slapping another man in the face for the dead woman, and the third was hit from the knee for the dead man. He stood there shaking, remembering that they'd only killed 3 people and he was safe. But Sushun didn't give him that hope, and took him by the hair for a little girl being held hostage. After that, he wiped his fist with a wet cloth. The criminals lay on the floor until he realized who he was. But Sushun was only a responsible citizen, doing things that the police couldn't. The fat man wasn't going to admit guilt even after being tortured. He was sure that when even one of them came out, they would blow up his company. Sushun looked at him coolly. Fatty knew that he couldn't kill them here, so he had no choice. But Sushun didn't give them such a simple care, suggesting that Chinju take care of them. He closed the door behind him. The special forces were about to rush in, but Sushun decided to give them some time. The criminals were sitting on the floor, not understanding where he had gone. At this moment, the room was filled with a dark aura, and an unknown sound appeared. The man turned slowly, feeling a slight chill on his body. Chinju breathed directly into his ear, which made him freeze in fear. They started shouting loudly, which surprised the squad. The news showed the arrest of criminals in the sensational case of 513, which shouted about the ghost. The deputy suggested that they were simply tormented by conscience and began to see their victims, intending to return them to an adequate state for trial. Sushun was sure that no one would have believed it if it wasn't the police chief who said it. A satisfied Chinju appeared abruptly, waiting for praise for her work. Sushun praised her, and the girl immediately demanded a reward. She begged her to hurry, or she wouldn't talk to him again. Then he kissed her on the lips, hoping she wouldn't take his life. But then she pushed him down on the couch. She blushed deeply as she confessed her desire. He was in shock, fearing for his own safety. Chinju started to pull off his t-shirt, wanting to get what his girlfriend's got. The phone on the desk vibrated. He found a reason to run away while answering the phone. It was Liao Yu who saved him from Chinju. But Liao Yu screamed into the phone, asking for his help. She walked down the dark street, looking around cautiously. The girl saw that an unknown man in a cap was following her. She ran towards the park, but he wasn't going to let her go. As she ran, he followed her. He reached into his pocket for some reason. He suddenly took out an unknown handkerchief, rapidly approaching her. When he grabbed her from the back, Liao Yu started screaming for help, but he put a handkerchief to her face, covering her nose, so she lost consciousness. But suddenly, the culprit heard a voice from behind saying that too many scum had gotten divorced this year. It was Sushun with Li Hu, who was going to take revenge on him for the attempted murder of his man. The guy held the knife up to her, telling them to stay away. But the knife snapped out of his hand. It landed in Sushun's hand. The criminal bared his teeth in anger. But he took Liao Yu from his hands, pointing his own knife at him while he was shaking with fear. The guy was taken to a warehouse tied up with ropes, and they put him on his knees in front of Sushun. Li Hu reported that the handkerchief was soaked in diethyl ether. Sushun appreciated his approach, not understanding what he was trying to do. The criminal tried to pretend that it was just a robbery, but then the knife landed right on his leg, and he screamed in hellish pain. Sushun decided to ask again what he wanted to achieve. The criminal confessed to his original plan, where he wanted to drag the unconscious girl to a secluded place. Sushun was interested in the number of such crimes. It turned out that he had already done this 6 times, but swore to turn himself into the police. Li Hu recalled the news about the 6 corpses of women in the city that were also desecrated before they died. But Sushun knew that turning himself in would not justify the 6 lives lost, so he was going to charge him in full for their suffering. The guys held him down, and he gave orders to Li Hu to find 6 tough guys for him. As he was leaving, the guy was shouting for help. Liao Yu was shaking and crying in the car, but Sushun assured her that she was safe. He noticed that she was very scared, so taking her to an empty apartment is not an option. Sushun suggested that she go to his house. They went to his house. Zijing and Yuruo were sitting on the sofa, resting, but he had brought Liao Yu home, and they were all hung up on it. He brought her to the guest bedroom so that she could sleep in peace. But she hugged him sharply, not wanting to be alone. Morning came. Sushun stretched as he left the room. Next to the door, Zijing was swinging a cleaver, trying to kill the flies. She continued to kick them with her slippers while Sushun looked on awkwardly. As he was standing, Yuro splashed water on him from behind. He was extremely angry, but she was just pouring the extra water out of the pot. But it was boiling water, and he didn't understand why she wasn't pouring it down the sink. Zijing crept up behind him, asking grimly why he had brought Liao Yu here, as if he wanted a third one as well. Back then, they had furiously tried to deal with him, but he had insisted that he was only comforting her. They dealt with him while Liao Yu lay contentedly in bed. Zijing talked to her friends at the university. But I noticed something. It was Sushun who came to her with a bouquet. But she walked past him, ignoring his questions. He sighed, not knowing what to do with women. Zijing wasn't ready to forgive him over some broom. But suddenly, he grabbed her hands and picked it up, taking it with him. The girls were jealous that she had such a strong boyfriend. She asked to be released. He brought her to the restaurant while she was still resentful. Sujun handed her a fork of meat to eat, but she refused. He swore that nothing happened last night, but she covered her ears, not wanting to listen. There was a car parked outside the restaurant. Lee Hoo blamed his boss for being so cool, but he still looked like his girlfriend. The guy next to him was on the phone, having no interest in discussing it. He noticed that he had a new phone, also an old model. It turned out that it was the phone of yesterday's maniac, which he decided to search until he threw out. Lee Hoo was furious with him for what he had done, because the police might track them down, and the boss would get into trouble. But then he noticed something. While they were explaining to Zijing that Liao Yu was a simple worker, Lee Hoo ran towards him. He handed him the phone, revealing the details. Lee Hoo showed him something on his phone and sent people to search the area. He assumed that he had run away after taking the picture. His phone chat showed a picture of Zijing and Su Shun in a restaurant 5 minutes earlier, who were marked with a new target. They walked down the street while Zijing looked around in fear. Su Shun asked her to go quietly. Lee Hoo radioed to the team, but there was no one around. He was angry that the culprit had left. Lee Hoo promised the boss that their team would keep him safe. Su Shun realized that the maniac from yesterday was far from alone, and the other 5 were unaware that one of them had already been killed. They didn't know how badly they were hit yet, and he was going to do his duty. Lee Hoo suggested sending a message to the group to test the waters, but so far only one person in the group has written, so it's better to keep quiet. The guy was angry that the maniac had previously cleared the history of correspondence. Su Shun would like to find his corpse, which they threw into the cage and drowned. He immediately wanted to go to him, but Lee Hoo clarified that there were no leads on him, but Su Shun only wanted to talk to him. They came to him, fishing the cage out of the water, and they started opening it. Lee Hoo covered his nose in disgust at the smell of it, but Su Shun didn't care. He touched his protruding arm and activated the ability of insightful vision. Then he was able to see his memories where he was part of a group of masked men. He let go of his hand. It turned out that they didn't even know each other's identities, which made Lee Hoo surprised. Su Shun said that they met on the internet and sent photos to the general group to determine the next victim. He got into the car, knowing they needed to answer. He wrote in the chat on behalf of the maniac that he was already able to determine the address of their next target, intending to attack tomorrow. All the maniacs started to unsubscribe, happy that he finally showed up. He hung up the phone, intending to give them a warm welcome tomorrow. Lee Hoo offered to destroy them immediately, but Su Shun wanted to bring them before the law. He has 2 more cases to solve, and they come right to hand. The next day, they arrived at the issued address. Men in animal masks asked if this was the right cottage. The rat they had been waiting for appeared behind them. They followed him, rubbing their hands together in the excitement of the next entertainment. The 6 of them crept inside the cottage. They walked quietly into the room. The horse noticed that the light that had been on earlier had gone out in the room. Suddenly, guns were pointed at his head, and the light came on. The entire room was surrounded by agents holding them at gunpoint. Lee Hoo grinned, implying that they had chosen the wrong house, and the order was given to take them away. Later, they headed to an abandoned building. They were hung from ropes and begged for mercy. They noticed that there was no rat with them, assuming that he had turned them in, but that was impossible. But everyone else was here. The doors to the room opened. Agents brought the body of a guy with a rat mask into the room, and they abandoned the soulless carcass. Everyone was afraid that he had been beaten up too badly. Lee Hoo lit a cigarette, reminding them of the atrocities they had committed. The guy realized that they were torturing a rat, so he wasn't there, and noticed that he didn't move. He was kicked, hinting at his dead state. The guy screamed in fear, calling them murderers. But Lee Hoo reminded him who the real maniac was. He reminded them of the murder of 6 women and wished them the same fate. But the fortune teller told him not to kill more than 5 people, so he gave them the choice to spare one. One of them swore that he just watched and didn't touch anyone. Others framed him, reminding him how he climbed first. Everyone was trying to justify themselves so as not to die. They slandered each other. Everyone wanted to put themselves in a good light by burying a friend. Lee Hoo listened to all their confessions while being shocked by their actions. Eventually, they were tired and trying to catch their breath. Lee Hoo was already tired of waiting on the chair. The man had already realized that he wasn't going to let any of them go. But Lee Hoo considered himself a law-abiding citizen, not considering murder humane. Su Shun, who had brought Chief Chung with him, came into the room and listened to all their confessions. He had heard enough to give each of them 100 executions. The chief ordered the suspects taken away and the body taken to the morgue in the Zijing house. According to news reports, according to the results of the investigation managed to capture a group of criminals, and he promised that they would not escape punishment. Zijing couldn't believe that they would do such a thing without even knowing each other's faces. The Zijing family entered the house and they immediately moved away from each other. Mom wanted to cook them fish, but he came to invite them all to the restaurant, not wanting to become a burden. But she did not support his idea, advising him to eat at home, otherwise after the wedding you cannot always eat in restaurants. Zijing was against discussing the wedding, considering herself too young. But my mother said that one day I will have to grow up, calling her to help in the kitchen. She petulantly refused, deciding to show Su Shun her room instead. Jianyun also tried to escape, but his mother gave him a task to wash the fish. Sushun remembered that he had seen her room before. Zijing closed the door. He suggested that she better help her mother downstairs, but she jumped at him sharply, not wanting to hear it. Sushun was very surprised by her freedom, and she advised him not to make her angry, otherwise she would punish him. Sushun came down with a toothpick in his mouth, grinning. Jianyun waited for them to finish. He knew they weren't just looking at her room, but he didn't like that they were doing it right in the same house as their family. Sushun laughed awkwardly, deciding to change the subject. Jianyun was extremely angry that the bastard was released. He was talking about Mr. Chen Tai'an, who was released due to lack of evidence. He was furious, considering it a disgrace. Sushun became interested in this case, and he said that this scumbag slept with the wife of his employee and forced him to kill himself, and he is being released. He didn't expect the guy to know so much, but Jun had mutual acquaintances. Chen Tai'an made a joyful speech, pretending that he hadn't committed a crime. But suddenly, a raw egg flew into his face. The mother of the deceased accused him of debauchery with the wife of his son, who worked for him for years, and drove him to suicide. She wanted to get justice while the guards took her away. The girl wiped the egg from her face as Tai'an explained the court's decision. Considering himself a kind person, he promised to pay her compensation for the loss of her breadwinner, but the woman was completely furious at his pleased face. Tai'an walked to the car, holding his assistant by the waist. He was laughing out loud. Jianyun was also furious that such bastards were on the loose. Sushun watched this gloomily. Meanwhile, at the Tsingyun Corporation, Liu Yu announced Chief Chen's visit. Sushun asked him to sit down when he came to apologize. After all, he helped them solve 2 big cases, but the public doesn't know about it. But Sushun himself wanted to help on the condition of anonymity, thanking them for keeping it a secret. Chief Chen introduced the chief of Jiangdong City, Wu Jing. Sushun immediately guessed that he was here for Chen Tai'an's business. He was quite surprised that he understood it right away. Sushun knew that the culprit had been released right in the courtroom, and that would have angered any decent chief, and they had turned to him for the sake of justice. Wu Jing clenched his fist in anger, feeling terribly humiliated after this incident, so they would like to punish the bastard. Sushun wanted the same thing, and would like to get a detailed description of the case. Wu Jing began to talk. The dead man's name was Lan Yang, who worked for Tai'an Corporation as a senior sales manager, and his wife's name was Lai Man, who is exceptionally beautiful. Half a year ago, Lan Yang started going on business trips too often, but he felt that the management had a lot of faith in him, so he tried. But one day, his flight was postponed to another day, so when he returned home he found something shocking. How his wife had cheated on him for the past 6 months with Chen Tai'an, who had taken the opportunity to get him out of the house. He started making a fuss in the office to get justice. After that incident, no one saw him, thinking that the boss paid him a sum for silence. But no one knew about it until his body was found. Sushun assumed that the main suspect was Chen Tai'an, who had both motive and opportunity. The chief confirmed his words. At this moment, he received an equally shocking call that Lan Yang's mother had been shot to death. He remembered her when he was watching TV. Sushun was so sad that even the poor woman was removed, and they didn't even detain the driver who ran away and left the car in the river. Suddenly, Sushun jumped up and called out to Liu Yu. He ordered to book the best hotel in Jiangdong City, because in 2 hours he will go there for a meeting. The chief doubted that they would be able to get there in just 2 hours, and the journey took at least 5, suggesting that the meeting be rescheduled. But Sushun was so filled with anger that he couldn't wait any longer. So a helicopter flew up to the building. They all flew together, and Liu Yu had already contacted Chen Tai'an's secretary. The 2 chefs sat there in shock, watching them. Liu Yu was starting to worry that he wouldn't want to meet, but Sushun was sure that he wouldn't dodge. Tai'an's secretary settled all the issues so that there were no leads at all. He reached for her feet, offering to reward her for her good work. With a trembling voice, she reported that she had received a call from the Tsingyun Corporation. She told him that President Su wanted to meet him at the hotel. Chen Tai'an was immediately surprised. He thought about it, not understanding the reason for the meeting. After all, there was no business between them, except for commercial ones. The girl offered to ignore his meeting, taking off her stockings, offering to do something more fun. But he was already stressed out, knowing that he couldn't say no to President Su, which could sink his company. The receptionist immediately apologized for her stupidity. He knew that the Tsingyun Corporation was many times larger, and such people should not be denied, but he still felt the catch. But he tried to stay positive, waiting for an offer of a joint project that would boost his business. They were already sitting at the table, doubting that Tai'an would dare to come. Sushun knew that as a businessman, he would only see this meeting as an opportunity. There was a knock on the door. Tai'an entered the hall, bringing the best wine to an important meeting, but Sushun was indifferent to alcohol. Tai'an was prepared for his refusal. He invited her in. A receptionist dressed in an open rabbit costume walked into the hall and greeted Sushun. Tai'an offered it to him, praising its qualities, but he had a better secretary, so he decided to show him what she should look like. She bowed and did as she was asked. Liu Yu appeared in the hall and immediately fell in love with Tai'an and his beauty. The receptionist felt that Liu Yu looked much better than she did. even without the strange costumes. Taeyeon realized that he wasn't hitting the right spots and offered tea, but Sushun turned the glass over. This surprised Taeyeon greatly. Both chiefs were surprised by his ways of humiliating a man at such a young age. Taeyeon put the kettle on, trying to figure out what he was trying to do. But he didn't want to drink anything from his hands, not wanting to end up like Lan Yang's mother. Taeyeon tensed, but didn't show it, waiting for an explanation. Sushun stood up, intending to explain more clearly. He moved closer to him, reminding him of how he had killed his subordinate's mother. Sushun touched his shoulder and used the mind-reading skill. Taeyeon pushed his hand away, trying to get away with it because he had no proof. But Sushun understood everything from his sharp reaction, especially since this small touch was enough for him. Sushun decided to get down to business and list all his remaining options. The first option he offered was to put pressure on his corporation so that by the end of the month he would remain bankrupt. And the second option was to turn in all your crimes right now, since the police are already here. Taeyeon had no idea what kind of police he was talking about. The chief offered to provide him with an ID card. Taeyeon laughed and sank into a chair, thinking that he would be offered cooperation. The receptionist ordered him to apologize for the false accusations, otherwise he would have to face their lawyers. Sushun didn't want to take advice from her. She was immediately startled, trying to explain herself. He covered her mouth to keep her quiet. Taeyeon finished his glass and tried to calm Sushun down, since he could raise his subordinates by himself. But Sushun immediately slapped him across the face with his palm. The bosses were surprised by his action. He noticed that he couldn't even control himself, let alone his subordinates. Taeyeon aggressively reminded that they were in his territory and he could do anything to him. But Sushun reminded him about using his employees' wives right in his office. Taeyeon hesitated, not understanding how he knew about the study, counting words at random. But Sushun responded to that as well, saying, at random, how he forced Lan Yang to commit suicide by threatening to kill his wife and child. It dawned on the chief that it was suicide, but he was driven to it. Sushun recalled the situation 3 years ago, how he used his bullies to force the family to sign an agreement to demolish their house, after which he stuffed the compensation into his pocket, and how he tricked them into winning the tender for the construction of the bridge, but did it on a dead giveaway. Taeyeon accused him of slander, waiting for proof. Sushun suddenly said 6 numbers. It turned out to be his password for his personal safe. When Taeyeon heard this, his heart stopped for a moment. He slumped to his knees, and I could not answer anymore, worshipping him. The chief couldn't believe his eyes that the culprit Chen Taeyeon was now on his knees admitting guilt. He begged for mercy, promising to be his personal dog. But Sushun didn't appreciate the suggestion and decided to give this conversation to the police officers. He gritted his teeth but accepted it. As he sat there eating, Taeyeon took out a knife, swinging at Sushun from behind. The 2 chefs jumped up trying to stop it, but Sushun slapped him across the face, from which he flew against the wall and passed out. Later, he was carried away by medics on a stretcher. Everyone looked at his swollen face in horror, as if he had been hit by a car. The chief shook his hand, not doubting his ability to solve crimes. He was going to conduct a thorough investigation and wasn't going to let the intruder go. The system congratulated him on completing the task, and the reward was a permanent mind-reading skill. They ended the meeting. We pulled out of the parking lot. Sushun stretched, tired of flying in the helicopter, and Shinju was playing on her phone, cursing everyone. Behind the wheel, Lee Hu offered to give the boss a relaxing massage, but he waved his hand, only wanting to get home, and mentally used identity extraction. His new identity was the Mercenary King. He was now a patron at all times, having fast abilities. 4 years ago, the mission failed and his team was killed, leaving only 3 people who wanted revenge but could not find the enemy and dispersed. The personality's abilities were planning, scouting, driving, thermal weapons, and survival. According to the mission, he needed to find out the truth and avenge his comrades. He didn't expect it to be an entire war now. Suddenly, Lee Hu noticed armored vehicles behind them. He told number 2 to find out the reason for the harassment. Sushun didn't understand what was going on, but these cars were chasing them right from the office. Number 2 rode in the back, letting Lee Hu pass, trying to stop them. But the armored car started firing. They began to shoot down the wheels, which interfered with the movement of the car. He turned around to see his car pull over to the side of the road. Lee Hu realized that they might not be simple robbers, but targeted assassins. They deftly dodged all the bullets. Lee Hu was ordering his men to head for Hongjiang Road. He took the phone away from Chinju, who was playing games, but he offered her a more interesting toy, as they were followed by real enemies with guns. She was immediately interested in his offer, and she immediately flew to investigate. The guy was not happy with how they do not fall. Suddenly, Chinju appeared at his side. It made him cry out in fear, and he turned the steering wheel. His car immediately hit a pole. The second car passed by the accident. The man was shocked at how incompetent they were, and the second one came out on the roof with a bomb gun. Sushun suggested that he might have killed his father, so they were unhappy. The man was going to shoot directly at their car, and he was aiming his gun. But just as he was about to fire, the treacherous Chinju came out in front of the scope. This caused him to shoot up, jumping up in fright. They saw that the bomb had gone straight up, and it was clear that it would soon fall down. The bomb spun around, heading straight for their car. He hugged Shinju, praising her for her good work. They came home, and Chief Chen promised that these criminals would be caught. He put guards on it to protect it around the clock. But Li Hu promised that they would always stand by the boss and not put him in danger. Chief Chen didn't understand what the problem was. Su Shun ordered him to get out because he wasn't allowed to talk to Chief Chen. He promised that the staff would no longer talk to him like that and that the police were not needed here. But Chief Chen wasn't going to leave until this was over. There was a loud shout at the door. A tearful Zijing and Yuruo, who were not allowed in, ran into the house. They hugged him tightly, deeply worried. But he asked them to calm down because the police were watching. Chief Chen wanted to leave, but Su Shun decided to leave first. Zijing started peppering him with questions, but he didn't know who they were. The girls grabbed both of his hands and told him not to leave the house again. The two of them threw him on the bed, and they decided to keep him at home by taking off his outer clothing. The girls decided to keep him in bed. He was confused, wondering if there was any celebration going on today. But then, he got a call. It was Liao Yu. He hadn't expected her to want to join in at all. Zijing didn't understand what he was implying, but he blushed, distracted by the call. Suddenly, a startled Liao Yu screamed into the phone. He immediately interceded, trying to get them to leave her alone. The voice on the phone gave him 20 minutes to arrive at the office while Liao Yu was strapped to a chair. The girl begged him through her tears not to come, but his accomplice put her hand over her mouth. Su Shun immediately rushed to the office without answering the girls' questions. He ordered Li Hu to take his brothers and defend Zijing with Yu Ruo, but he asked him to take someone with him. Su Shun refused and warned them not to let even a hair fall out of their heads. Li Hu clearly understood the order. Su Shun immediately went to the office. He took the elevator to the headmaster's office. His hand went to the handle, but the door wouldn't budge. The girl started toward the door. She opened it abruptly, pointing the gun at him. But to her surprise, there was no one behind her. Abruptly, he pounced on top of her. He kicked the girl away. The man ran at him, swinging. But Su Shun stopped him with a fist. With his other hand, he grabbed his head, and the man was caught with a hand behind his back. The girl pointed her gun at him, intending to shoot him. But the man stopped her with a shout, deciding to give up. He knew that if they made a move, they would lose their lives. They thought that he wouldn't be so strong if he surrounded himself with bodyguards. Su Shun dismissed the man, explaining that he was still in shape for the likes of them. Liao Yu didn't understand what was going on. In his memories, they were a team in the past. He didn't know what they were doing here again, since he'd made it clear last time that they weren't allowed to see each other. Su Shun gently rubbed the wound on Liao Yu's mouth. While he was untying her, she wanted to know the identity of these two. The girl decided to introduce herself first, calling herself Mandala, which was Su Shun's mistress. Liao Yu was very surprised, but according to him, you can't believe it. He chased her out of the office so they could talk in private. He closed the door behind him. He wanted to know why they had come back to him, and he was willing to help with the money. But they didn't come here for the money. They had information about the man who betrayed them 4 years ago. Mandala held a personal grudge against him, not only for the loss of her comrades, but also for the trauma that caused her to go through an ovarian removal operation. Su Shun doubted the reliability of the source. The man understood that he had already managed to get used to an easy, rich life, not wanting to get involved with them. But he interrupted, wondering when they were leaving. Mandala was immediately happy, knowing that he wanted to go with them. Su Shun was furious that his comrades had died 4 years ago, so he wanted to pay back with blood. She bumped into him in happiness, knocking over a chair. He held her back, asking her about the target. But the girl moved away from the topic because of strong feelings. The man said that everything will start tomorrow, but first they need to finish the escort mission that will revive their team, and the information about the traitor also came from the escort target. Su Shun was surprised that someone was still giving their mission commands when there were only 3 of them left. The employer turned out to be a princess of a Mid-Eastern trading company, and one of the fees is information. The girl sat down on the table trying to seduce Su Shun, but the man left the room anyway, leaving them alone. When he came out, a terrified Liao Yu was sitting at the reception desk. He immediately apologized for the situation. She didn't hold a grudge against him. The next day came. Su Shun called the elevator to the floor. He didn't expect them to send the princess directly to the hotel, but there was no place safer than the Dragon Kingdom. Su Shun wasn't sure if that was the case when he talked about yesterday's attack. There was a big bounty on him, so he wanted to find out who was involved. When the elevator door opened, Su Shun was shocked. Beyond it was a corridor of armed agents. They didn't expect that the princess guards would cover the entire floor. The man pointed to the right room. When he knocked, a voice stopped them. It was Agent Jones with a swarm of security guards. He told him that he had brought a man in at the request of their boss, but he didn't want to let the stranger into the princess' house until they searched it. Su Shun assumed that they didn't know his identity. Jones didn't care if he was God or Satan, and he needed to be searched. Mandala reminded that he really is Satan, being the leader of their squad and the king of mercenaries. The man pulled away from him out of fear. He didn't want to fall into the mud right in front of his men so that he wouldn't lose face. Sushun ordered me to knock on the door and ask her for an explanation. Jones muttered discontent under his breath, not expecting him to treat him so arrogantly. Sushun heard his words while asking again, but the man immediately pointed a gun at him, suggesting that he was the reason for the collapse of their deadly strike squad. Sushun abruptly took the weapon out of his hands. I pointed the muzzle directly at his forehead. His men aimed back at him, forcing him to lower his weapons. Sushun gave them a menacing look, hinting that pointing a weapon in his direction wasn't a good idea. Everyone was shaking with fear. The princess behind the door gave them permission to enter. The man reported this to Sushun. He taunted them like they were losing their own weapons. With one movement, the gun started to fall apart and fell to the floor in a disassembled form. And they went away, leaving the man on the ground. The agents were shocked when he took the gun apart with just one hand. The man didn't know what to say as he remained on the ground in a shocked state. They walked in, and the man introduced Sushun to Miss Kelly. Sushun couldn't believe his eyes. Miss Kelly confessed that she had heard a lot about him. The girl was relying on him, wanting to be completely safe under their protection. Sushun wanted to know if she knew the identity of their traitor from before. She was ready to give this information for a successful road to the point. Sushun wanted to have guarantees of her response. Ms. Kelly said that one of yesterday's attackers is a member of the Wild Wolves mercenary group. Mandela explained that they were created about 2 years ago and have a very rich patron. Miss Kelly had never expected to discover that the king of assassins, God, the king of mercenaries, and Satan were all one person. Sushun immediately remembered Wilson. I assumed that was their goal. The agents were shocked by his quick thinking. She considered this enough information to motivate her. He was fascinated by her, how their Middle Eastern trading company could take the last penny from him. But still, she needs protection to get back in. Sushun wanted to know the identities of her enemies, and perhaps the Middle Eastern trading company couldn't handle them. Her opponent was her own older brother. Sushun was surprised by their family drama. She was afraid that he might do something, being blinded by her radiance, which hurt his dignity. He shook her hand, promising to do everything he could to keep her safe. After a while, they were already on the plane. Qinju yawned, not understanding such an early rise. While she wanted to sleep, Sushun was actively working on the laptop. The man said that there were 20 minutes left before the jump. They didn't expect to be infiltrating by skydiving. Sushun ordered them not to suck up and take responsibility, as they couldn't put the princess in danger while jumping. Mandela convinced him that she has been going to special training sessions since childhood, so jumping for the princess is just a trifle. Suddenly, Qinju noticed something. She whirled around. She reported that someone was looking at him very strangely, and he asked for a description. Qinju described a man with brown hair, a hooked nose, and a scar on his right eye. It was the same Agent Jones that was shamed by Sushun. He realized that he still didn't believe in it. Miss Kelly suddenly came to the table with 2 glasses. I wanted to know who he was talking about. He dropped the subject, praising her dress. The girl was embarrassed, thanking him for the compliment. They clinked glasses together for the meeting. The man watched viciously. The captain reported that they would soon enter the target airspace, so it was time to prepare for the jump. Sushun stood up, saying goodbye to Miss Kelly. They all parachuted down, and Sushun slowly landed. He immediately inquired about the princess' condition. The Mandala reported that they had landed successfully. Sushun saw from the map that they had landed right on the spot, and he was waiting for the convoy that was going to pick up Miss Kelly. Mandala asked where he was, but the man had no signal, so he decided to move away. Sushun ordered them to watch Miss Kelly. Suddenly, as Miss Kelly was taking off her costume, the Mandala noticed something. It was a red dot right on the princess's chest, so she jumped on it to protect it. Sushun noticed the enemy and everyone went for cover. Mandala put the princess on the ground, protecting her. The man shot from cover at the enemy with a rifle. A fire broke out behind a tree and a scream was heard. Sushun brandished the grenade, ordering them to leave. Mandala led the princess, quickly running away. Sushun ordered them to block their path with fire to buy time. The princess suddenly stumbled, but the Mandala held her back. She couldn't understand how they knew about the landing site if it was only known to a small circle of people. Sushun deduced that there was a traitor lurking among them. The girl was shocked, suspecting that it might be him. But Agent Jones was already pointing his gun at them. He tried to stop Sushun. Miss Kelly could not believe that he had betrayed her firm trust, but he felt resentful. Having run for her for so many years, she was never nice to him as well. Didn't even give him a glass of water. Sushun offered to bring him 2 tons of water since he was thirsty, but the man shut up the joke. Jones took aim, intending to kill him. But a furious Qinju appeared in front of him, intending to teach him a lesson. He screamed in fear when he saw the ghost. Mandala abruptly pushed the princess so that they fell to the ground, and Sushun took out a knife, throwing it directly into Jones' hand, knocking the automatic out of his hands. He dropped the shotgun, falling in pain and shock. Sushun kicked him hard in the face, and he wanted to know how many of his people were around. But Jones did not want to give up, intending to continue to fight like real men. Sushun pointed his gun at him, not wanting to answer the call. He fell to his knees in fear, determined to tell her everything. There were 300 men stationed around the perimeter, on 3 levels, and the base was located in the river valley to the west. Sushun decided to give Miss Kelly a choice so that she could choose his sentence. Jones smiled awkwardly, waiting for a favor. But Miss Kelly deftly shot him through the head. She couldn't stand traitors and wished them all dead. Sushun realized that she deserved to be the heir to a global corporation. The man came running, saying that the mercenaries had surrounded the entire area and they couldn't get through. Sushun suggested hiding in the dense forest. He reached for the princess with a knife, unfortunately telling her that her outfit wasn't exactly suitable for running away. He began to slowly cut the bottom of the dress. The girl blushed with embarrassment, but he only did it for their safety, so that it wouldn't get stuck in the hem. Miss Kelly understood, and Sushun entrusted the princess' life to Mandala. The man decided to go out to investigate. At this moment, Sushun summoned Chinju. He asked her to find the camp according to Jones' instructions, and he looked menacingly, imagining the next events. Cars with flashlights drove through the dark forest. They watched them from behind the trees. Mandala has noticed that they are reducing their search area, and they will soon be discovered. He suggested that we escape while it was dark, otherwise it would be difficult to escape at dawn. But Sushun sat as relaxed as possible, not moving from his seat. Mrs. Kelly said their traitor was a former senior member of the international security company North Africa, Fernanda Delis. Everyone was shocked, not believing that it could have been him. She said that after the suspension, he held a grudge and decided to hand over their plans before retirement, especially since he had been cooperating with them for a long time, so he knew everything. Sushun didn't understand why she had already mentioned this if they hadn't fulfilled the contract yet. The girl was desperate, knowing that they would not be able to leave, so she asked them to leave her here. Mandala didn't expect the girl to sacrifice herself. She started crying, just wanting to say goodbye to her parents. Sushun wiped away her tears, promising to do his duty and deliver her. Miss Kelly was surprised that they didn't want to run away. But Sushun wanted to destroy them, not run away. They didn't expect it, but even for them, 300 people was an impossible task. Chinju whispered readiness in his ear, for which he thanked her. Miss Kelly didn't know who he was talking to, but it was time to go. Meanwhile, in the enemy camp, the commander was furious that they couldn't find a couple of people for almost a day. But they were sure that they would not run through the infrared sensors, so they just had to wait. The man wanted to destroy Satan himself with his own hands. One of the agents was standing on the tower, and at one point he yawned. At that moment, a bullet pierced through his temple. It was Sushun and his partner who were running under the tower. One of the guys was lighting a cigarette when he noticed the enemies. He shouted as he drew his weapon, but before he could finish speaking, Sushun shot him. The commander saw a huge explosion that knocked all his soldiers away. One of the guys was able to report that Satan had come. He was shocked that they decided to attack first. One after another was shot in the back. The team ran around the camp, shooting soldiers. Another team arrived, preparing to join the battle. We only took one step. Because of this, they were instantly horrified. The entire crowd was instantly torn apart by a landmine. The commander couldn't believe that the explosions were happening on their own. One of the wounded said that their camp was booby-trapped, although no one knew about it. The commander ordered the release of equipment to delay the enemies. A man in an armored car with a gun drove in their direction. He aimed at them, intending to destroy them, but there was glue inside the muzzle that kept it from firing. So the cannon exploded on its own, throwing him off into the distance. They knew they couldn't shoot. All of them suddenly lost their magazines, leaving no guns. As they stood there in disbelief, one by one they were shot. Everyone fell to the ground while dodging the sniper, but they were clearly visible and it was too late to hide. Miss Kelly didn't understand why they didn't shoot back. But Mandala thought Sushun was a wizard. The commander did not understand where all the artillery was, that it could not kill one sniper, but all the muzzles were filled with glue. At that moment, a grenade flew out from under the car. Everything turned into a huge explosion, and the soldiers were lying in a heap on the ground. The bloody hand struggled to get out. The commander crawled with the last of his strength, bleeding profusely, but a silhouette appeared in front of him, causing him to shake. Sushun aimed at him, not letting go. He didn't know how they'd managed it. But Sushun didn't answer the question as he fired a bullet. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of a Middle Eastern trading company, the guy smashed the bottle on the ground because his plan did not work and soon Miss Kelly will return, which will bury him in the grave. He gave orders to the butler to kill her, or else he would also lie down. The butler promised not to disappoint him. In the afternoon, they drove through a deserted area. Miss Kelly asked Sushun questions, still surprised at their victory. But he only wanted to say 3 words to her. He whispered in my ear that it was classified information. Miss Kelly laughed at his joke, which made the Mandala sit in a bad mood. The man said that they need to refuel, offering either to stop in the city or continue on foot. Sushun knew that there was one city on the way, so it was possible to refuel there. While he and the princess were fighting, she bit his arm. He was surprised, but she considered it a punishment. They entered the city and drove through the narrow streets. Mandala warned that enemies can attack in the city, so you need to be on the lookout. They were already quite close to their destination, so the enemies only had a chance to attack here, so they might arrive even earlier. Mandala suggested driving faster and without stopping, but Sushun didn't want to hide when the enemies wanted to fight. They stopped the car. And we arrived at the gas station. A man got out of it, who was surprised at the dimensions of the car. Mandala hurried him to get the job done faster. The man liked it very much, and he offered to drink with him, and then fill them up for free, showing the gun. But Sushun advised him not to stare at her, otherwise he might shoot her. He turned on him, threatening not to talk to him so that he could leave alive. Miss Kelly sat looking the other way. The man suddenly reached out to her, marveling at her beauty. But he was punched in the face for his impudence. It fell to the ground, threatening him. And he called his gang, who were going to kill them. But he immediately pulled out a submachine gun, and he aimed at the crowd, which immediately stopped wanting to attack. Sushun cautiously asked them to put down their weapons because they were at a gas station. The man agreed with him, offering to solve everything without guns. Sushun gagged him, ordering him to take them to Tony's place. He didn't expect them to know the boss. The case continued in the casino, where everyone was playing and having fun. The boss was sitting behind the sofa, enjoying himself. A frightened subordinate approached him. He told me that Tom had brought people from the Dragon Kingdom from the gas station who wanted to talk to him. He jumped out of hatred for the people of the Dragon Kingdom, but they keep bringing them to him. But a voice from behind stopped him from complaining. He turned cautiously, recognizing the voice. Behind him was Sushun, who was appraising his casino. Tony was immediately taken aback when he saw Satan himself, but the subordinate had no idea. Sushun hugged his neck as if they weren't old friends. The guards immediately ran at him so that he wouldn't touch the boss, but he immediately chased them out with a loud shout. They bowed, apologizing for their mistake. Tony poured him alcohol, asking about his affairs, pretending to miss him a lot. But Sushun clearly heard about his hatred for the people of the Dragon Kingdom. He started praising him from head to toe out of fear, trying to suck up to him. Sushun was just about to ask him a favor. It was already sunset, and the city was bustling with activity. The commander ordered to hide cars and surround the building. Many soldiers ran out of their vehicles, surrounding the area. One of the cars pulled into the alley. He was told that the target would arrive in about half an hour, and then it would be impossible to leave, because the shooting would be conducted from two sides. He had already apologized to Miss Kelly, advising her to abstain from power in the next life. But suddenly, the entire street was covered in a huge explosion. They gave the order for everyone to return immediately. Soldiers reported that the buildings were booby-trapped. While he was running for cover, he was shot in the back. The commander realized that it was a trap, and over the radio he ordered to build a defensive line. The soldiers tried to return, but they were covered with a hail of bullets. One after another was shot in the head. Miss Kelly watched from the window of the building, reminding them that Fai Long's men were professional mercenaries, and when they reacted, the power would be incredible. But Sushun hadn't used his main weapon yet. Their vehicles continued to be shelled, and they were pinned down. The butler announced the arrival of reinforcements, advising them to be careful. They tried to hide behind cars, watching the explosions. A group of cars came out of the fire, and they were glad to have reinforcements, considering it a victory. The butler lit a cigar, glad to be out of town and confident of his own safety. But all the cars along the way started exploding. He was shocked to think that they were mines again. The soldiers didn't understand what the sounds were, but there was a huge tank in the battle. Miss Kelly was in shock, not understanding what was going on. She hadn't expected such power to listen to him, but he'd already intercepted Tony's transport. He just let him live, using their old friendship. All the reinforcements began to turn around, and the butler ordered an attack so that the tanks would not approach. The tank shot towards them with strong power. From what they were thrown back from a strong explosion. After a while, the butler was already tied up with ropes and was on his knees. Tony said they found him in the sewer. Miss Kelly was sure it was him. Suchin didn't expect her to know him, but it was her brother's butler and personal assistant who led the team to kill her. Sushun realized that he had already lost. He was begging for mercy, in return for information about her brother. Tony handed him the phone they found on him, so Sushun let them do whatever they wanted. The butler begged Miss Kelly for mercy, offering to become her loyal dog. But the girl took the gun out of its case, and I turned on him, knowing that he had no moral principles at all. Then, she shot him in the forehead. Sushun caught Miss Kelly panting, but that wasn't the end of it. He reminded her that she could now return home. But when they turned around, they were stopped. It was Tony, who was hinting at his current strength thanks to tanks and men with guns. Sushun didn't understand what he was getting at. He recalled how they had destroyed his people, and how much their power had increased since then. Sushun pretended not to understand. He aimed at him, forcing him to stop pretending. When he showed up, Tony's business was barely afloat and offered to even the score. Sushun reminded him that he had let him live because he was a simple guy. Tony couldn't believe he was talking to him like that in this situation, but one of the soldiers noticed something on his face. When he turned around, he was informed about the sniper rifle scope. Sushun clarified that it was an infrared howitzer with a range of 10 meters. Everyone abruptly backed away from Tony when they heard about the howitzer, but he tried to be brave. His teammates were aiming from a distance, knowing that this was Sushun's original plan. Sushun suggested that Tony shoot him if he didn't believe him, but the gun fell from his hand. He smiled broadly, pretending that he was only joking. Tony dropped to his knees, begging for his forgiveness in an innocent tone. Sushun was willing to let him live for one more favor. After a couple of minutes, he was already filming it on his phone, making him smile. On camera, he filmed a crowd of his men in women's underwear. He gave the phone number to Miss Kelly as dirt so that they would always solve her problems. And they left, leaving them on the road. As they got into the car, Mandela asked him why he was looking so far into Miss Kelly's future problems if it wasn't his job to do so. But Sushun only wanted to tease them a little. The man was sure that he just liked Miss Kelly, so he gave her up for protection. The girl blushed, but Sushun didn't give a clear answer. They started making jokes about the son-in-law of the owner of a Middle Eastern trading company, and he promised to throw them out of the car for such jokes. Finally, they came to the city of Thorley, to the headquarters of the World Trading Company. They had a sense of foreboding as they approached the building. But Miss Kelly was sure that inside the headquarters was another world of her father's, where no one would dare to harm her. Sushun also hoped so. In her father's office, meanwhile, her older brother was begging for his inheritance, trying to prove himself better than Kelly. But his father knew exactly what he was doing. After all, his actions had disappointed his father for a very long time, and he wasn't even worth Kelly's finger. But he wasn't going to disinherit him, and decided to take his life by pointing a revolver. As they entered the building, Miss Kelly was praised for her good work. She was informed that her boss had asked her to rest until the meeting, but she wanted to see him urgently, and the man assumed that it was about Mr. Filong, who we shouldn't worry about anymore. He had already died 5 minutes ago. Miss Kelly was taken aback. The Mandela pointed out something interesting to Sushun. Doctors were coming out of the elevator with a stretcher on which a body lay under a sheet. A hand with a pentagram tattoo protruded from it. Miss Kelly recognized her brother immediately, knowing that he was indeed dead. The man didn't expect his father to step in and execute his own son. Sushun deduced that Fei Long was no longer needed because he had lost the inheritance, and in order to avoid the scorn of his partners, he got rid of him. They had to go further. Miss Kelly was bursting into tears, but Sushun asked her to be strong, understanding her heaviness. But the door was closed by security, preventing them from entering the office. The boss only wanted to see Satan when he sent Miss Kelly home. The man complained, not wanting to listen to someone else's boss. His partners didn't want to let him go, offering to at least wait for him, but he asked to accompany the princess home. He sent them off, promising them that everything would be all right. Miss Kelly was beginning to worry too. The door to the office opened and the boss was informed of Satan's arrival. The man hadn't expected him to be so young. Sushun joked that he was actually over 50 years old. He complimented him on the joke and asked him to sit down. Sushun sat down on the sofa, knowing that this wasn't all for fun, suggesting that he get straight to the point. The boss was surprised that Kelly hired the mercenary king himself to accompany her, and because of his appearance, he killed his own son. So now he is in grief. Sushun chuckled, not expecting this incident to be his fault. But he was not going to let him go, ordering him to serve him for 5 years in honor of compensation, and for this he would pay him to revive his squad. Sushun reminded him that he really didn't like threats in his direction. The boss laughed, not even hiding the presence of threats in his sentences. He noticed a lot of dots on his body, and the boss warned him that any sudden movement would tear him apart. Sushun reminded him that he could also kill him at any time. The boss laughed, reminding them that they had searched them and found no weapons. But suddenly an ashtray flew right in front of his eyes. He jumped in fear, not understanding what was going on. Sushun moved his hand for show, hinting that there were many unknown things in the world. While the ashtray was flying, it was Chinju who was running around. And Sushun abruptly moved his hand, causing the ashtray to crack right in front of him. He admitted that he wanted to keep a low profile, but after the weapons, he decided to show off his abilities. The cigar came out of its case, lifting the lighter to ignite, and he pulled it to him, setting it on fire in his hands, and invited Mr. Niels to sit down. He was sweating in fear, not knowing how he was doing it, but Sushun decided to cool down the room since he was sweaty all over. Chinju started to use her abilities, and she began to perform a dance that covered everything with ice. Ice and frost covered the room as she danced. Mr. Niels crouched in a corner, watching in horror. Sushun scoffed as he couldn't get back on his feet. Previously bragging about his might, he immediately knelt down, begging for his forgiveness. The master offered to become his loyal servant, but Sushun didn't think he was qualified enough. Miss Kelly came running into the room, trying to stop her father. But she was speechless, and Sushun also fell into a stupor when she caught them. He picked up Mr. Niels, pretending that he had just dropped a coin. Miss Kelly didn't understand what was going on. Mr. Niels remembered that he liked Kelly and decided to let them be together so that he could get her pregnant. Sushun decided not to disturb them as he turned towards the door. But Mr. Niels insisted that Kelly accompany him. He chased her out of the office, ordering her to invite him to dinner, socialize, and sleep, not letting her leave. Night had already fallen. The Mandela was lying on a cot, taking a break from the latest events, since Miss Kelly had insisted that they stay another 2 days. The man suggested that Sushun go to Dallas, but he didn't want to rush into getting to the United States first. They were distracted by a voice from behind. It was the smartly dressed Miss Kelly who shyly invited Sushun to dinner. Later, they went to a restaurant. The table was set with many dishes, and they were not inferior to the Dragon Kingdom. Sushun appreciated the juicy steak. He held out his glass, noticing something. Miss Kelly was already slightly drunk, looking at him with a relaxed gaze. He tried to figure out what was wrong with her, but she pretended that everything was fine. The girl blushed, offering to meet again. He didn't expect her to leave so quickly, and she confessed her liking for him. Sushun appreciated her taste in men, but he admitted to having a girlfriend. But she didn't mean that at all. She understood that she was not destined to marry, otherwise she would have to pass on the family property as an heiress. And she offered to come to her, promising not to molest her. Jinju was angry at her suggestion, considering herself much better. Sushun didn't expect that even with this, she needed to consult her parents and swung the plate around. When the saucer landed in the bushes, there was a light cry. Miss Kelly jumped, afraid they were being followed. But it turned out to be her father, who was discovered behind the surveillance. Sushun offered to sit down and have dinner with them, but he wanted to pass something to Kelly and leave. He handed her the shield that he had already made a hole in for confidence. Kelly blushed, not expecting this from her father. Her father asked her not to miss out on her happiness, preparing to give him all her possessions if she liked him. And then, he left. The girl blushed with shame because she did not know about her father and confessed about his desire for their marriage. And she cried, knowing she wasn't good enough for him. Sushun gently hugged her so that she wouldn't cry, and he offered to walk her home because it was already cold outside. Miss Kelly smiled fondly. Mr. Nils went home. It was his plan so that Sushun couldn't get rid of him after Kelly's pregnancy. But his car was met by Sushun, who saw him being followed again. I was just about to ask him two things at once. In the morning, at the Wilson International Finance Building, the car pulled out of the underground parking lot as security guards escorted it out. In it sat the new head of the Wilson family, Entwistle, who had been informed of the disappearance of his men who had gone missing in the Dragon Kingdom. He ordered to get the head of Satan in 10 days, otherwise he would bury them. And he was dissatisfied with the work of brainless wards. The girl next to him offered to cool him down by giving him a hug. He reached out to her, telling her to do it in the car. But at that moment, the car stopped abruptly, sending them flying forward. Entwistle was very angry with his driver, who couldn't drive properly. But the driver nervously reported that there was a man standing on the road. There was a silhouette standing in the middle of the road with its back turned. Entwistle ordered them to run him down at full speed because he had enough money to buy his life. But their car was hit by another that flew to the edge of the highway. Entwistle and his girlfriend screamed at the crash. And behind the wheel sat a partner who was happy about the success. He realized that this was all a plan to get back at them, and he boasted about his bulletproof car, which could withstand even tank shots. On the way out of the building drove cars with his guards that came to protect. But the first car was covered in flames, causing everyone to turn sharply. All the cars caught fire, exploding in turn. One of them reported a sniper, Mandela, blocked the Wilson building, preventing them from leaving. And Whistle continued to threaten them with his men, but the driver got a call from security. Now they knew that the guards had been too badly damaged by the fire to leave. The man got out of the car with a gun, realizing that he was no longer laughing. Wilson didn't finish with threats, being too confident in himself. The man tried to shoot through the window with a shotgun, but Entwistle knew they couldn't hit his car with an ordinary rifle. He was angry at his taunts, but Sushun calmed him down, deciding to warn him by saying that he had 30 seconds left. And in his hands was an ordinary pistol. He aimed at the window, and Entwistle continued to laugh at his weapon. Sushun leaned the muzzle, starting to shoot. Wilson relaxed, putting his arm around her, knowing it wouldn't break through his window. But at this moment, Sushun started to cover the window with a lot of bullets. He fired without stopping, and suddenly, one of the bullets was in the glass, cracking it. Entwistle was getting very nervous now, and one of the bullets flew through the window, hitting Wilson in the stomach. Sushun reminded him that there were only 5 seconds left. Entwistle ran out of the car, begging for help. Then he began to climb slowly to another track. He was trying to escape right down the busy road. While Sushun was making a report, one of the cars drove straight at him. He only had time to turn in her direction. A huge Kamaz truck hit him at speed. The girl and the driver begged him for mercy, explaining that they were not guilty of anything. Sushun promised not to kill them, but he asked me to give something to the Wilson family. He asked me to tell him that he didn't care about the identity of the next head of the family, but he didn't mind wiping the Wilsons out of the world. The family was nervous, realizing that Entwistle had contacted the wrong person and ordered to declare his military service to the King of Assassins. When they were eating at the restaurant, the Mandala suggested that they demolish their building, but Sushun's goal was to gain authority and benefit. They didn't expect to hear this from the Assassin King. Mandala started joking about their protection with Miss Kelly, but Sushun wasn't ashamed of the fact that he didn't use her. She knew he was buying into the old man's tricks, and she reminded him what would happen if Kelly got pregnant. But Sushun hinted at his careful process, and the Mandala hugged his hand, wanting a demonstration tonight. The man noticed that she was already going overboard with her flirting, which made Mandala sigh in displeasure. Sushun received a call which made him slightly gloomy and was about to leave somewhere. He finished their meal, ordering them to return. The man wanted to finish his steak quickly. Sujin decided to leave him to finish his meal while he and Mandela went to take revenge. He said that he had received information about Fernand Delis and that he would attend the company's meeting tomorrow. The man bit through a piece of meat in anger. Girls were walking the streets, offering their services to every passerby, and their car stopped just on this street. Mandela didn't understand why he was staying so far from Helios, but he had everything under control. All the girls immediately stuck to him, offering their services even at a discount. But he hugged Mandela, pretending that she was his girlfriend. He pointed a finger at his partner, who was single and rich. This immediately attached all the girls to it while they were leaving with Mandela. Sushun knew that the guy needed to relax a little. The girl was incredibly red when Susun called her his girlfriend. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of the North African security company, Sunflower Manor, they were watching the gate. The mandala saw Delis through the binoculars, ready to punch him in the head. But in Sushun's opinion, this was too little punishment. At this moment, the partner returned. He was covered in kisses, cursing women. Sushun noticed that he had been missing for a full 40 minutes and praised him. Mandela reported that the banquet had already started and they had to leave soon. Sushun received a call from Mr. Niels, who informed him that the work was completed. They didn't know what task he had given him, but it was already time to go. When they reached the gate, they were stopped by security guards with automatic weapons. Sushun revealed that they were attending a party. They didn't recognize them, and they couldn't let them in because an internal company event was being held there. But Sushun suggested that they take a closer look. One of the guards was horrified. He immediately greeted him respectfully as he took a stance. I missed it right away. The second guard had no idea who it was, while the first one breathed a sigh of relief. He reminded him of the fact that their security company had become third-rate. He knew the answer to that question as the Deathstroke squad was destroyed and the company disbanded. But the squad was not completely destroyed, leaving 3 people alive, and one of them was named Satan. And here he was. Sushun grabbed a glass of alcohol from the tray. The mandala pointed to Delis' location. He was standing under an umbrella, chatting with his friend, surrounded by smart girls. Later, one of the men was cooing to one of the girls. At that moment, someone grazed his shoulder from behind, and the glass in his hand moved, drenching him. He turned around viciously, about to start a conflict. Suddenly, he noticed Sushun standing there. He immediately took a fighting stance, greeting him respectfully. The others immediately noticed it when they saw Sushun. And then, he announced his return. Everyone greeted him at once, standing in a crouch. The boss turned around in surprise. I gave him a big hug, congratulating him on his return. He decided to give him the best men so that he could rebuild the squad. Sushun sensed that someone wasn't particularly happy about him. Delis laughed at him, reminding him how he had failed his mission and left the company without understanding why he had come. Sushun gloomily admitted that he had come to kill him. He was terrified, and the boss didn't like the jokes. But Sushun had discovered the secret of their squad's death, just as Delis had set up an ambush 4 years ago. Delis denied these accusations, demanding proof because he was the head of the company and could not do so. People didn't believe in his words, thinking that Delis didn't have any sense to do this, because it only brought a minus to the company. The boss also demanded proof, but Satan didn't need a reason to kill anyone. Delis clenched his teeth in anger. The boss started threatening him, forbidding him to kill people just like that. Delis ordered the arrest of all 3 of them, and all the agents obeyed him, pointing their guns at them. Sushun doubted that they would dare to shoot him, but they had a task that they had to complete. Sushun made the call, wanting to give them a surprise. His team had received their orders and started a fire. Warheads began to fly over them in flames. They all started landing on the territory. Everyone fell to the ground, shouting for help as Sushun watched. They were informed that the estate was surrounded and gunfire was being fired from helicopters. Sushun reminded him that proof was not required if there was a strong desire to kill. They all looked up at the sky in a dazed state. The soldiers could not believe in such a strong power, knowing that they did not have much time left. Sushun started to wipe the gun, reminding him that he was willing to kill for no reason. Delis tried to threaten him, even though his voice was shaking. He promised to restore justice if he fired, but the bullet passed right next to him, grazing his ear. Sushun was waiting for the consequences of his words once he fired. Delis' ear started to bleed and he screamed in pain and fear. He fell to his knees, begging Satan to spare him. The boss was shocked by his plaintive tone and words. The soldiers couldn't believe that he was admitting his guilt in that tragedy. Everyone cheered for him to destroy this monster. Delis tearfully hugged his leg, begging for mercy. The boss asked Sushun to give him some time to think, but Sushun didn't want to hear any other answer, because it wouldn't suit his dead brothers anymore. The boss said to leave, taking his midges, if he does not put it in anything. At this point, a bullet hits the back of the head. Delis fell to the ground right in front of the boss and the people, bleeding profusely from Sushun's bullet. The boss's patience was running out. The system popped up in front of him. She congratulated him on completing his tasks and presented him with a driving skill. Sushun threw out the gun, declaring the goal accomplished, and decided to leave the rest to them. But the voice stopped him. The boss wanted an explanation from him, not letting him go. But Sushun didn't think it was necessary. The boss became enraged, pointing a revolver at him, intending to declare war between them. Sushun reminded him that Deathstroke held the company, not the squad company, so without it, they were nothing. He shot out of anger, tired of listening to this nonsense. But as he fired one after another, it was as if Sushun had teleported from place to place. And suddenly, I was at his side and grabbed his hand. The gun immediately fell out of his hands. The boss started threatening that the Assassin King had reappeared and would kill him for hire. But Sushun decided to tell him a little secret that he wasn't just Satan, but also the king of assassins and mercenaries. The boss was nervous, but he didn't want to believe it. Sushun gave him a chance to check it out, reminding him that the Wilsons had long appreciated all of his other personalities. They turned around and Sushun gave the order to kill people. They headed for the car. As they sat down, a voice interrupted them. Sushun didn't understand why they were here. A group of soldiers stood nearby, and he assumed that they had come for revenge. But in reality, they wanted to join his squad, wanting to leave the North African service. Sushun decided to refuse, not wanting to step on the same rake again. But they begged him, swearing fealty to the end of their lives. Mandela advised to take them into care, but Sushun didn't want to get so many mercenaries from the authorities afterwards. Then he decided to help them leave the North African service and try to sponsor a new company. They all thanked him profusely for his kindness. He sent his agents to Niels to find a place in capital for the new company. Mandela didn't know what he was going to do until they were gone. But Sushun awkwardly showed the messages from Zijing that she was angry about his long departure, so he quickly left. 2 days later, he finally made it home. As they walked around the house, Chinju wondered why they didn't enter through the main entrance. Sushun wanted to surprise the girls, but all the windows were tightly closed. Chinju pouted that he never did anything for her, even though she always helped him. But he knew that every night she crawled under the covers with him. She insisted that she had only held him in her sleep, which he hoped she would. Sushun was able to open the bathroom window, and when I got in, one of the girls was swimming. He wanted to surprise her, trying to figure out if it was Zijing or Yuruo. But when he was sitting under the window, the girls were walking outside. He was nervous, realizing that someone else was in the bathroom. A hand appeared behind the curtain, and Sushun was shocked. When it opened, it revealed Liao Yu. She immediately blushed and opened her mouth. Sushun closed his eyes, swearing that he didn't have time to see anything. And just at that moment, the voices of the girls on the street noticed the open bathroom window. He knew that if they found him at such a moment, he would be in great pain. So Liao Yu quickly grabbed him by the collar. She pulled me into the bathroom. The girls peeked through the window to make sure Liao Yu was safe. She explained that she had opened the window for easy ventilation. The girls decided to close the window and asked not to open it again while Sushun hid behind the curtain. Yuruo called her careless for opening the window on the first floor like that. They sat down on the floor, and Sushun thanked her for covering up. He didn't know she would be here. Liao Yu said that the girls were bored in his absence, so they called her to their house, but today she will leave, since he has already arrived. But Sushun didn't kick her out at all, just inquired. Liao Yu was surprised that he didn't want her to leave. He didn't know how to respond without being awkward, so he decided to leave before it was too late. But suddenly, Liao Yu gave him a sharp kiss on the lips, and when I got away, I started breathing hard. She immediately stood up, apologizing for what she had done, and decided to leave. But Sushun grabbed her arm. He wasn't ready to let go of the girl who took the initiative first. After all, then he will be a lousy man. The next day came. Sushun was lying on the bed with Liao Yu sleeping in his arms. He recalled the events of last night, how he lost his head, and now he needed to explain himself to Ziying and Yuruo somehow. Liao Yu woke up abruptly, wanting to hear his excuse in front of his girls. She didn't want to hurt them, but she liked him too, so she would have to leave if they refused. Sushun started to get dressed, intending to talk to them about this topic, and asked them not to tell them anything. He assumed that they were already awake and wanted to pretend their arrival. But behind him, there was already a gloomy Zijing who was not surprised at all. And now she was waiting for him to give her a reasonable explanation for what he had left in Liao Yu's room. And behind her, Yuruo was no less furious that she remembered his return yesterday. They complained that 2 girls weren't enough for him anymore. He tried to explain himself, promising not to repeat it. But Zijing put her foot right in front of his face. She held him down until he shouted out his promise. Yuruo sighed, explaining that he shouldn't stop at Liao Yu. Suddenly, it dawned on him. Zijing was a little upset, realizing that he wasn't an ordinary man at all, so she would have to put up with it, but just for one request. She had ordered him to put her first, and tonight he would be with her. Yuruo picked up, booking it for tomorrow, and they left to prepare breakfast. When they opened the door, Liao Yu was standing behind it. The girl blushed deeply, pretending that she wasn't eavesdropping. Zijing asked to be called her sister, putting her hand on her shoulder. Sushun found it strange that they just accepted her. He realized that she wanted a lot of girls for him, but at this moment, he was hit with a glass on the forehead for such words. During the night, thunder broke out. He stared at the sleeping Zijing, enjoying the view, knowing that he didn't need anything else. Then he remembered that he needed to extract the old identity. His new identity was the king of hackers, whose abilities were hacking skills with incredible speed and intelligence. The task was to establish yourself as the king of hackers in 5 days. Sushun recalled that the past personalities were fully prepared, but now he has to build his career on his own. It was even more interesting that way. While he was sitting at his laptop, Yuruo brought him goji berry tea. She looked up, curious about what he was doing. Yuruo didn't expect him to be able to write code, but it wasn't for nothing. I clicked on Done to demonstrate. Meanwhile, at the largest streaming company in Shanghai, the conference reported that their app already has more than 10 million users, which makes 300,000 yuan a day. At that moment, the screen went blank, as if there was a problem. But then everything was filled with an unknown profile that claimed to be the king of hackers. The app was filled with pictures of the king hacker, who was underestimated, which is why it did not work. Everyone thought it was too crazy a name, and people decided to watch it. The application opened a stream of the king of hackers, which was going to demonstrate minor data thefts and major hacks of systems in different countries. The girl appreciated his voice as he condemned the app for its boring simplicity. The guy was disappointed that a person with such skills opened donations for communication for money. Someone treated with distrust, asking for proof, and someone has already fallen in love. He was willing to grant their wishes if they asked. And during this time, he decided to block a couple of accounts on request. Sushun said that he has blocked 15 accounts and is now going to unblock them. By clicking on the button, he reset everything. Everyone in the chat started spamming about the blocking of their account, proving his words. The people at the conference didn't understand what was going on and why the main page of their app had changed. Their programmer nervously tried to get everything back. They couldn't understand what exactly had happened. He said with fear that his permission to edit was taken away, so he is powerless. The director was extremely angry at this disgrace to their company, ordering them to report it to the management department. The management department received a call. He picked up the phone while he was eating, and they told him the breaking news about a hacker guy who had taken over their network. Yuruo didn't know what exactly he was waiting for. And then, he showed her the screen. A warning from moderation appeared in the chat that they were threatening to block his number. But Sujun decided to do it first, intending to block the moderator. He laughed at his words, thinking that it was impossible. But at that moment, he was blocked. He was sweating with shock, not understanding how it had happened. The director came out in shock that all the administrators had lost their rights. The girl confirmed that it must be a tough burglar. The director ordered everyone to get their rights back, otherwise he would destroy their platform. Everyone in the chat was waiting for him to be blocked. But all the moderators suddenly disappeared, and the company received information that the director had lost all his rights. He didn't want to receive any money or gifts from them, but he was willing to comply with their wishes. Programmers understood that viewers would demand a lot of things that could not be leaked to the network. The old specialists were taken out of the way. After all, 5 tigers of entrepreneurship arrived, who sat down at their laptops to solve the situation because the site was created by them. Sujin noticed that there were masters online, but he knew that resistance against him was futile. All 5 experts were shocked at once. The director wanted to understand why their computers had broken down at such an important moment. They explained that he was remotely hacking their systems, but they didn't even bother to close their IP addresses. The director frowned, ordering the police to be called immediately. The stream continued. All the viewers supported the powerful Hacker King while the company begged him not to cause harm. Sushun considered this the best time to start the case, asking Yu Ruo for his opinion. She suggested checking the national-level files for an action plan or similar. Then he decided to check out one of the countries. Meanwhile, in the intelligence service, the ICBM office, all the specialists ran, ordering them to immediately disconnect from the network and close the servers. They were informed that the door to the control room was locked with a code. Meanwhile, in the chief's office, he couldn't do anything but watch helplessly how hundreds of gigabytes of data gradually fell into the wrong hands. Then he leaked a couple of important files to the main forum for people, deciding to finish the stream until tomorrow. All the people started going through the leaked files, finding out that the congressman cheated on his wife. Sushun stretched, and Yuruo was surprised by his hacking abilities. Then he grabbed her arm. Then he pulled her toward him. The girl fell on top of him and he offered to take up his free time. But at that moment, the phone rang. He was extremely angry that it didn't happen at the right time. The voice on the other end of the line was glad he'd answered it. After all, something important had happened in the office, and he needed to get there right away. The next day, he went to the Qingyan company. Mr. Li revealed that it would soon be the company's 10th anniversary, so they called Star Wang Tingfeng to celebrate. And they've already signed a contract, but he awkwardly revealed that the singer had cut his finger, so he was hospitalized. And for this reason, he called him to the company to offer to postpone the celebration for a couple of days. They couldn't believe the guy had gone to the hospital because of a scratch, but Mr. Li handed him the phone so they could see for themselves. The post included his post from the hospital, thanking fans for their concern, and telling them about the postponement of the performance in Qingyan. All the commentators wanted to sue his staff for carelessness, since he was injured, worrying about the idol. They didn't expect it to be so dramatic. Mr. Lee had already contacted Ting Feng's agent, asking for an additional 200 yuan fee for his performance with the injury, but Su Shun wasn't willing to pay them money for their whims, so he asked them to send them to hell. Mr. Lee was afraid that they might hold a grudge for rejecting a popular artist. But for Su Shun, business was not an ordinary friendship, and it was only a substitute for a person. It wasn't that serious. Mr. Lee then agreed to contact Ting Feng's agent, and Su Shun asked her to come to their office for a private conversation. 40 minutes later, the door to the office opened. Ting Feng's agent, who was delayed due to traffic jams, went there. But Mr. Lee wanted to get straight to the point. She tried to explain everything about Ting Feng's performance with the injury, but was interrupted. Su Shun tried to explain to her that it wasn't because of the injury, but because of Ting Feng's inappropriate style, which caused them to break the contract. She couldn't believe what she was hearing, and she began to remind me about the consequences of this decision. Su Shun explained that they weren't going to postpone the company's anniversary because of this. The agent decided to remind them of their good relationship with the chairman. Su Shun remembered this very well, but he wasn't going to change his mind. She stood up grimly, ordering the papers to be prepared and delivered. When she was about to leave, Su Shun stopped her, calling it a misunderstanding. She smiled, thinking that he'd fallen for it after all. She turned around, pretending not to be interested. But Su Shun reminded her how they had announced the postponement of the performance, and even without compensation claims, they were complaining about the breach of contract as if it was their fault. The girl just decided to take it as a life lesson. She left the office loudly in her high heels. Mr. Lee cautioned that Xiaoping had a lot of influence, and Ting Feng was also on good terms with Lu Xun, who might cause trouble. But getting criticized for such a small thing shows their level, so he's not going to lose. The agent informed Ting Feng that they had terminated their contract with him. He clenched his fist in anger, trying to persuade the girl to do something. Then she suggested making a tweet on social media to bring up the topic and defame Qingyan's name. He grabbed her hand abruptly, kissing her on the lips and declaring his love. The girl hinted that in love you need to act, so he grabbed her, pulling her onto the bed. He pressed her against the bed, reminding her how much he'd saved up for her. A nervous Liao Yu burst into the room, announcing their corporation's tweet. She said that they act too suspiciously, since they are trying to blacken the reputation of their company. Ting Feng, in his tweet, tried to pretend that he was the victim of a failed contract. All his fans were going to spam and throw mud at the company for terminating the contract. The girls were shocked that people are ready to listen to any of his words. Liao Yu suggested that we step in and clear things up, otherwise things will go too far. But Su Shun decided to continue playing the big game if they were so insistent. At that moment, he made a call. He called Mr. Lu, introducing himself to him. Lu Xiong, meanwhile, was sitting in the middle of a group of girls. Realizing that the call was about Ting Feng, Su Shun decided to get straight to the point, explaining that it was worth reining in his artist who was trying to tarnish their reputation. But, according to Liu Xiong, Ting Feng's tweet did not contain a single negative word towards Qingyan. He knew they were plotting something against him. But the man decided to just laugh, waiting for proof of this accusation. He denounced him for being too young, intending to help only in the business council. Then Su Shun hung up. He found it strange how Liu Xiong defended a small artist with all his might. Then he started typing the code quickly. Yuruo realized that he was trying to hack into Ting Feng and Xiaoping's phones to get information. The phone was lying on the bedsheet, and Su Shun connected to the camera. At this moment, Ting Feng and Xiaoping were busy with personal matters while he tried to get compliments. The girls blushed, judging them for having such a relationship with such an age difference. While Xiaoping praised Ting Feng and compared him to her husband, Su Shun realized that Xiaoping's husband didn't know anything, so he could be the catalyst. At this moment, he was sitting in the gym, wiping off his sweat. He received a message from Xiaoping, where she called him to the ward of Ting Feng, who was many times his capable. The man grumbled, intending to deal with them. Zijing called him a villain, but he didn't think so. After all, he only helped them have fun and raise their spirits. Zijing screamed in terror, wanting to get it out of her sight. Yuruo recalled how Ting Feng always said how hard it was for him to go so far. But in fact, it turned out that he was working on two fronts. But Su Shun recalled how he tried to cheat with a few other actresses. He read the correspondence as he continued to molest girls even after rejections. Zijing was extremely displeased with his actions. Liao Yu was waiting for Su Shun's next move. He decided to copy all the data and put it on the internet. So they decided to send the media to the hospital to see Ting Feng with the film crew. Everyone was shocked when they noticed new information about their favorite artist. On the main page of the forum, there was a picture of Ting Feng with Liu Xun, pretending to be a movie trailer. In the comments, half of the users were shocked by the discovery of its orientation, while others expected it initially. At this moment, in the hospital, Xiaoping told Ting Feng that the internet had exploded from his tweet, so they would be in big trouble, and he considered it a well-deserved punishment. The girl started praising him again. At that moment, the door to the ward was opened with a kick. It was Xiaoping's husband who came to them with a bat. Xiaoping was shocked, not expecting him to be here at all. He swung at them, intending to kill her. He started beating them up when the media arrived on time and started filming the sensation. The battered couple lay on the bed, begging not to hit again. After a while Liu Xiong was chatting with the girls, a ward came running to him with the news. He tried to explain that he would rather look in social networks. Liu Xiong picked up the phone, and the main headlines were only about Tingfeng, his infidelities and affairs. He was very angry that someone was spreading rumors about him. And also, Qingyan's communications department gave an answer about breaking the contract with Tingfeng. All the commenters took their side because they tried to raise the fee thanks to a small scratch. Liu Xiong watched the entire situation in silence, not knowing what to do. At that moment, an unfamiliar number called him. It was Su Xun, who hadn't expected so much news during this time. Liu Xiong was sure that he had done it himself, but Su Xun didn't hide it. The man was going to get back at him when he cleared up all the problems. But Su Xun wasn't going to let him decide all this. He was going to say it directly. Liu Xiong didn't expect him to act so globally after a small problem. But Su Xun respected people, and he respected their corporation. If they don't respect him, then it's considered an insult. On the computer, there was a correspondence between Mr. Liu and a small artist, Xiao Luo, who he was willing to arrange a role for in return. Su Xun didn't expect him to be completely unreasonable for his age. Li Qiong realized that he could only get such personal information from a hacker. He reminded that times are changing, so it would be better for him to take advice from a professional. Liu Xiong paid him before ending the call. He dropped the phone against the glasses on the table. Qinju reported that the corporation admitted tax evasion, and now they were ready to be punished and pay their taxes. But she understood that they wouldn't apologize and would attack Qingyan. Qinju explained that they already suspected the hacker as an employee of Qingyan Corporation because their company was hacked too easily. She handed him her phone so that he could read the discussions on the internet. In the comments, everyone suspected that the hacker must be connected to the Qingyan company, and some were unhappy with such methods. Sukun realized that this was an enemy corporation that was trying to stay afloat. I decided I was going to give them a big present tomorrow. Suddenly, Qinju hugged him from behind, wanting to receive a gift as well. After all, his other girlfriends have it and she does not, but he categorically refused her. He was going to take a shower, and she offered to go with him, pushing him into the bathroom. She started to take off her dress while Su Xun thought it was a sin. Director Ye was informed of the news about the Hacker King. He was surprised that they were able to find anything. After investigating, they began to suspect a connection between Mr. Su of Qingyang and the Hacker King. Then, he decided to go to his company right tomorrow morning. In the morning, they met up with Su Xun. He introduced himself as Director Ye Wu and would have liked to hear an introduction in return, but he was interrupted. Su Xun was immediately interested in the reason for his unexpected visit. He admitted that he had come to talk about the Hacker King. Su Xun didn't mind and was willing to answer any questions. Director Ye didn't hesitate to ask directly if he was the king of hackers. He tensed, waiting for an answer. Su Xun pretended to have no idea what he was talking about, but according to Director Ye's information, he hired the king of hackers to get into the internal affairs. Su Xun realized that he was talking about the Bright Star Corporation. He recalled that there was a conflict between their companies, so they decided to put a brand on it. Director Ye asked why he continued the conversation about the Hacker King when he initially warned about the topic, but Su Xun already saw that he would talk to him about it no matter what. Director Ye was surprised at his shrewdness. Su Xun deduced that a refusal would show him to be either characterless or secretive, and he confessed that he is not the king and is not related to him. He was not allowed to reveal his identity, so he decided to speak directly with the director, trying to express sincerity. Director Ye noticed that his face was honest, and he didn't look away. There were no signs of lying. He decided to ask again, but Su Xun definitely wasn't familiar with such a successful person. And he didn't know at all why he had invaded Bright Star. Perhaps it was just a coincidence. Director Ye then apologized for the insult to his face. I decided to end the meeting. At this moment, they said their goodbyes. Qinju could already imagine his reaction if he found out that Su Xun was the Hacker King. He tugged at her cheek, teasing her. Abruptly, she reached out and kissed him on the cheek. At this moment, the door to the study was opened by Liao Yu. Qinju was furious that they were being interrupted at such an opportune moment, but Su Xun reminded her of how many opportunities they had. Liao Yu couldn't understand what was wrong with him. Su Xun inquired about the affairs of the Bright Star Corporation. She reported that Liu Xiong's actions were being condemned and discussed in the national debate. The demise of their company is already a foregone conclusion. He understood that after the collapse of the company, tens of thousands of people would be out of work. And then, he decided to buy a Bright Star on the cheap, which will give prosperity in the field of recreation and reduce the burden of employment. The girls were urgently reporting on the new Qingyan Corporation post. Su Xun issued the post, regretting the heavy blow to the Bright Star Company, realizing that they were about to go bankrupt. But also he thought about the employees who will lose their jobs. So he announced the decision to take the company under his leadership. The girls were in awe of Mr. Su, who genuinely cared about the employees. Everyone in the comments supported him and his decision, rejoicing in his thinking. One of the directors felt that Su Xun's statement undermines moral principles. The second director also felt that Su Shun had only shown his hand, and the public had done their job. The headmistress felt that Bright Star had condemned themselves to death because of the insult, so it was best not to mess with Qing Yan, otherwise they might end up in their shoes. In the evening, at Liu Xiong's office, he was breaking dishes when he heard the news about Su Shun's purchase of their company. One of the employees handed him a tablet with a contract on it. He was shaking with anger that he had created this situation and made himself a hero to buy their company. The man's mouth dropped open in rage when he opened the post. All the comments were filled with insults directed at him, trying to drive him away. The man couldn't stand it, and he started to bleed sharply from his mouth. There was no way he was willing to sell the company, even if they went bankrupt. At that moment, the door to his office opened. It turned out to be the police that were going to arrest Liu Xiong for suspicion of several crimes. His hands were cuffed. He knew that this was the end of him, and he couldn't even declare the company in bankruptcy. Liu Xiong fell to his knees, shouting in rage at Su Shun. As he was being led away, there were many reporters on the scene who were trying to get his opinion on Su Shun and his actions. Su Shun knew that he wasn't ashamed of his actions at all. He called Mr. Li to complete the process of acquiring the Bright Star. The next day, the girls were worried that the Hacker King still hadn't started broadcasting. People were hoping that nothing had happened to him, waiting for him to stream all night. And then they remembered that the events at Bright Star were his business. Director Ye ordered action immediately after the broadcast began. Su Shun opened his eyes while Qinju was sleeping on top of him. He jumped up, causing Qinju to fall on the bed. And he could see that she was only pretending to be asleep. She blushed with embarrassment, but he remembered that she wasn't exactly shy last night. Then, she put her hand over his mouth. Su Shun asked her to get up because it was time to start streaming the Hacker King. Finally, his stream started, and people were already going to send him donations. He thanked them for their support and decided to show them something interesting in private messages. There were messages with insults, where his skills were devalued, asking him to hack his country. He was asked to accept the challenge to show off his power. Su Shun decided to comply with his request and hack the country. In one beautiful country, their security system was suddenly attacked, and they are trying to prevent data copying. Su Shun posted more important information on the forum for viewers to check. They didn't expect him to be able to receive such confidential things. The head was horrified, ordering him to stop immediately. Qinju had never seen such an outrageous request in all this time, but Su Shun decided to immediately follow through with the challenges. In the private messages, a message from Director Ye Wu suddenly appeared. He clicked on the chat. There, Director Ye introduced himself to him and decided to invite him to serve in his country to prove his status as a good person. Su Shun didn't expect that he would look for him for the sake of this. He remembered hiding his identity right in front of him when the director showed up at his office. Then, he decided to politely decline, wanting to be free. He answered it, not wanting to join its ranks. Director Ye was shocked that he chose to be an ordinary streamer, even though there were a lot of unusual things about him. He was informed that the Hacker King had blocked them, so they wouldn't be able to give him an answer. The director decided to report on the situation, waiting for a response from someone above. In the international news, there is a message about the god of the internet, which puts the world in shock. His chat was filled with various strange requests. But Su Shun didn't agree to deal with money because he could use money from any bank. Someone was trying to train their sisters to become like him. Su Shun was willing to give all the information to the public, sending medicine and food to the poor areas of the country. The chat was filled with positive comments that supported his charity. The system announced the completion of the task, for which he was presented with hacking skills. Su Shun was satisfied that he had completed the task. Now that he had leaked the information, he thanked the audience for their support and announced his latest broadcast. Everyone was terrified, not wanting to say goodbye to him. He was going to donate all the money he had collected, wanting to meet them again. Su Shun ended the stream with a sigh of relief. At this moment, Qinju was standing in front of him, waiting for him to give her some time. He begged her to give him a break. At that moment, Liao Yu burst into the room. Qinju was already fuming as this girl picked the most awkward moment. Su Shun assumed that she had brought some important papers. But it turns out that a relative of Yuzo's has arrived at their house, with whom they are now quarreling. Su Shun didn't understand what was going on, so he decided to go down. Liao Yu pulled his hand to show him everything. As they descended, shouts were heard on the first floor. Yuruo was fighting with her brother, who tried to take her home forcibly. He wanted to talk to the jerk who'd charmed her into staying with him. Su Shun coughed, and brother Yuruo frowned at him. Suddenly, his demeanor changed, and he greeted him respectfully, introducing himself as Yan Yulin. He apologized for the trouble, calling his sister mean. Su Shun heard all of his words, assuming that the jerk in his words was him. He tried to apologize for his emotions, not wanting to leave his sister here so that she wouldn't give him any more trouble. Yuruo ran up to him, holding out a glass of water. Yulin couldn't believe that she was calling him master, but the girl didn't see anything wrong with it. During all this time, his sister didn't offer him any water or a seat, so these nicknames also made him very uncomfortable. Su Shun invited him to sit down and asked Yuruo to pour him some water, but she smiled and said he wasn't thirsty. Yulin resentfully shouted what he wanted. Su Shun asked to leave them alone so they could talk. Yoruo agreed and left, causing Yulin to open his mouth in shock. He didn't understand how he had managed to subdue his capricious sister, but this was all Yujo's initiative. He couldn't believe what he was saying. Sushun guessed that it was all because of his beauty. Liao Yu was afraid that Sushun might have problems, but she thought Sushun was smart enough to maintain a good relationship with the Yan family, which would bring more benefits. At this moment, Brother Yulin was about to leave for the plane and asked to behave himself, and then he asked her to be more careful about delicate matters, which made her blush. Yulin said goodbye to Sushun, asking him to call if he needed anything. Early in the morning, Sushun was sleeping with Liao Yu and Yuruo in his arms. When he opened his eyes, he remembered that today was the beginning of the day with a new identity. He asked the system to extract the identity, and she gave out a new identity for the week, the villain. According to the rules of mortals, you can't disturb a non-drinking young man sitting in a karaoke corner with a serious face. And you can't laugh at a young man who buys a house and clothes from a sale. And if you provoke any of these two, you will be hit with a flurry of bragging rights. There are heroes and villains in the world, where Sushun has become a villain who will constantly be confronted by the main character. He now existed for the sake of fighting a hero, humiliating them and beating them to death. The qualities became arrogance, recklessness, jokes on others. His mission was to find the main character to win and change his fate. He considered this a good complication of his task. But now the question was how to find the main character. At the same time, in the Qingyan conference, he was making a speech, wanting to move on to questions. Sushun gave reporters the right to ask questions. The first journalist asked if he was going to continue working in the same direction with the purchase of the new Bright Star Corporation. He decided to make it clear that the name Bright Star will also change to Qingyan, and now he will strive to create good movies and TV shows. The second journalist had heard about the beautiful girls next to him, wanting to know their relationship. But Sushun originally only asked for questions related to Bright Star. The man tried to ask the same question, taking the lack of an answer as a positive answer. Then, Sushun ordered the man to be escorted out of the hall. Security immediately gave way. They started taking him out while he was fighting for his rights as a journalist. Sushun apologized for the inconvenience, preparing to continue answering. All the journalists started asking about the criteria for choosing actors and questions about reading digital lines. At this point, the journalist was thrown out of the building. He was on his knees, promising revenge, but they broke his arm from behind because he took something with him. The man didn't understand what he wanted. Li Hu took out a taser from his pocket, and again he threw it to the ground, letting go. Sushun ordered him to find out who the journalist was. He still couldn't find even a clue on the main character. Liao Yu noticed that the enemies used the journalist, but their plan was immediately revealed. He considered it a test from the enemy, or a provocation. But he couldn't think of any enemy who could have done such a thing. After all, he considered himself to be truly kind, believing that he had no enemies until Liao Yu could remember them all. Li Hu burst into the room, having found out about the news reporter Zhang Zhou. But they couldn't continue their investigations because they were covered. Sushun wanted to get information about them and who their boss was. Li Hu reported that the Kanglong Association is mysterious. So few people know about it, and their power is not small, so he suggested asking Nantian, who knows a little about it. In the evening, Zijing was offended by him as he had forgotten about her existence, but he was too busy buying Bright Star. He went inside, and Nantian invited him to sit down. Sushun confessed that he had come to ask something. He wanted to know about the Kanglong Business Association. The man was startled, not understanding how he knew about them, and Sushun told him about their little problems. Nantian was horrified when he heard about the conflict with Kanglong because Qingyan was too vulnerable. Sushun tried to calm him down, explaining that they were just making a big fuss at his conference. Nantian knew that there would be problems if it was really Kanglong, and Sushun wanted to know the origin story of her. He first heard about them 5 years ago, when it included more than 10 cities in Jiangzhou province. Sushun realized that for many years, little Jiangzhou had been hiding very powerful individuals. He asked if his uncle knew anyone from the association. Nantian confirmed his words after accumulating connections over so many years. He introduced him to the home of the head of Tiancheng Corporation, Liu Chenggong. He didn't expect that head Tiancheng was also a member of the Kanglong Association. Nantian announced the birthday of Li Xiaofeng, Cheng's wife, so they came to visit to make a good impression. He opened the door wide for them. The guy already knew Director Su, even though they didn't know each other personally. A voice behind him was telling him how long it had taken him to open the door for the guests. Nantian introduced his son-in-law that he would marry his second daughter. He lived off their family's wealth, so they didn't like him. A crowd of people gathered in the hall, and suddenly he noticed a girl next to Ye Feng. It was his college teacher Liu Yun, who also recognized Su Shun. Chenggong greeted Mr. An along with his wife. Yinantian introduced them to Su Shun, whom they didn't immediately recognize. Even she knew who President Su was, even though she didn't know anything about business. He was glad of their kindness and handed her a small gift. The woman laughed, considering his visit an honor. Everyone immediately wanted to see his gift. Su Shun allowed her to show everyone the gift. So she put the box down on the table, about to open it. Inside was a jade bracelet. She felt that he was completely the opposite of Ye Feng's son-in-law, that he didn't show any promise. So she began to dream of Mr. Su as a son-in-law. Everyone was waiting for a gift from Ye Feng, who was celebrating his mother's birthday for the first time, so he had to prepare. But he drank the water in silence. Everyone was looking at him, waiting for an answer, but he didn't say a word. The woman did not expect a gift from him, ordering him to find a normal job so that he would stop using their help. She hoped that he would be at least 1% like Su Shun. She saw in him an elegant appearance, a reserved character and career, an enviable man. Suddenly, Su Shun realized that this was the main character. He realized that this was the perfect candidate, the one who was despised by his mother-in-law and should be a humiliation for him. Everyone in the room started comparing him to Mr. Su, humiliating him. He hoped they wouldn't involve him in their suggestions. The man suddenly ordered everyone to be quiet. Everyone immediately calmed down. He didn't understand why he would make such a fuss over a single gift. But Ye Feng put the glass down on the table, reminding that he didn't deny having a gift. Su Shun knew that he had to prove himself now. He opened the small box, wishing her a happy birthday. The woman was speechless from his gift. He was sure that this gift was as good as a jade bracelet. Su Shun was holding back, but inside he felt hurt for insulting him. No one could believe that he had prepared a gift after all. Ye Feng's manner was very similar to that of the right main character. He wanted to have the opportunity to share Ye Feng's memories to make sure of this. The girl was sure that the decoration is an ordinary fake. Everyone was sure that he didn't have enough money for such purchases. The woman tossed the box back to him, fearing it was a trap. But Ye Feng claimed that it wasn't fake. Even Xiao Yun begged him to stop, but he stood his ground. Su Shun offered to help as he knew a little about jade. He touched him on the shoulder, inviting him to inspect the jewelry while looking through his memories. It turned out that Ye Feng was Liu Xiong's nephew and was the chairman. He hadn't expected his uncle to commit such crimes. Ye Feng was unhappy that Su Shun took everything and didn't pay the price in return, ruining his impeccable reputation. He told me to get in touch with the news and send someone to his presentation. At this moment, Ye Feng removed his hand, offering him a look. It turned out that Ye Feng was the president of the Kanglong Business Association. The most surprising thing is that the past incidents were also his doing, as revenge for his uncle. Now, with this information, the problem of changing the villain's fate completely disappears. Everyone was waiting for his evaluation of the jade pendant. He had condemned him for cheating on his aunt's birthday. Ye Feng didn't expect that he couldn't tell the difference between real jade and fake jade. But Su Shun might have broken it empty-handed, whereas he can claim that it's not fake. Ye Feng was sure that it was a real ancient jade, taking it as a joke. It claimed that it couldn't be broken, but at this moment, Su Shun clenched it in his hands and it broke into pieces. Ye Feng was shocked, not understanding how this had happened. Su Shun knew that real jade couldn't be broken with his hands, but as the king of assassins, he could break ancient jade with ease. He continued to humiliate him, reminding him that it was a pure fake. Ye Feng clenched his fist in anger, wishing him dead. But the woman slapped him in the face for saying that. She couldn't stand it anymore and ordered him to pack his things. Ye Feng didn't expect Su Shun to be strong enough to break the jade at all. Xiao Yun wept at the shame. The woman started running away as Su Shun tried to stop her. The man ordered Ye Feng to run after her instead of standing there. Everyone humiliated him again until he didn't want to help his teacher. Cheng Gong apologized to Nanchen for the performance. Su Shun found the teacher crying on the bench, trying to find out how she was feeling. She knew that Ye Feng didn't have the opportunity, but he kept showing off and shaming her for the whole family. Ye Feng intervened and ordered her to leave. Su Shun was just trying to calm her down, but Ye Feng didn't want him to calm his wife down. Ye Feng tried to explain to her that it was a real jade, but Su Shun broke it to embarrass her. Su Shun ingratiated himself with the teacher, reminding her that he didn't look like a lying person, especially since if it was real, he wouldn't be able to break it with his bare hands. She was terribly disappointed that even now he was blaming others. She started to leave while Ye Feng tried to justify himself. Su Shun touched his shoulder again, telling him to leave her alone and used the medium skill. But Ye Feng immediately knocked his hand away. He managed to find out that he was the illegitimate son of Tianlong, the head of the Ye family. Ye Feng wanted to build a new Ye family without recognizing his ancestors. Tianlong hoped that he would return to the family, but he didn't expect such a rude rejection from him. Then he began to threaten him, intending to abandon him as a son. Suddenly, a voice came from behind. It was Nantian, suggesting that he inquire about the details of the Kanglong Business Association next time. Su Shun agreed, and they left together. He wanted to take a walk and think, and his uncle promised to take care of everything together. He called Li Hu so that he could find out the phone number of Ye Tianlong's family head. Ye Feng suggested that she take the shard to an expert if she didn't believe in the authenticity of the jade. She was no longer interested because today's action had disappointed her greatly, and she wanted a divorce. He couldn't figure out what the reason was. The girl saw him not as a man, but as a housewife who did not even try to find a job. Ye Feng didn't expect that she wanted to help him, but she just wanted to see the ambition in him. He had decided not to spend the night at home, and tomorrow he was going to show her something. She didn't understand what he was talking about. Ye Feng made a call, ordering Qingyun Company to go bankrupt within 3 days. He wanted to take revenge on his abuser Su Xun for shaming him. Meanwhile, Tianlong received a call. He received a call from Su Xun, who introduced himself as the head of Qingyang. He'd heard about it, and he got straight to the point. Su Xun knew that Ye Feng was his son, but Tianlong reacted aggressively, not wanting to consider him his son because he didn't show respect to his family. Su Xun asked him not to be angry, intending to teach him a lesson. Tianlong considered this a mistake, not wanting to intentionally harm his son. But Su Xun only wanted to save their family. His experience as a fortune teller told him that he needed to say something interesting. Tianlong could hear the collusion in his voice. Su Xun gave him the advice to announce to the public that he wouldn't do anything to do with Ye Feng. Then, he dropped the call. He immediately blocked Tianlong's phone number. Qinju didn't understand his plan, but he wanted to leave Tianlong puzzled and anxious at the same time. This seemed more interesting to him than just winning, because he wanted to sow despair on Ye Feng. He received an urgent call from a concerned Mr. Li. He noticed a sharp militia from several companies that threatened to cancel cooperation. Su Xun realized that he shouldn't underestimate Kanglong's power. He asked Mr. Li not to panic and let the situation take its course, and he asked me to run errands for him. Back then, he released an anonymous post about the Hacker King who was a member of the Kanglong Chamber of Commerce and told everyone about the Kanglong Association. Now he was playing by his own rules. The post immediately became popular and comments appeared under it. All the indigenous people had no idea what kind of association it was. Qinju was sure that any post about the Hacker King would become popular, and then he decided to delete all the entries to make the discussion even more lively. Netizens were in deep thought, assuming that this was true. Everyone thought that the Hacker King personally deleted the post for some reason, as if there was something to hide. People started actively discussing the Kanglong Association, trying to find out the truth. He knew that the official organizations of the Long Country were as powerful as the Kanglong. I was going to get their attention so they could start studying this organization. After all, even it does not have the same power as the state. Qinju praised his plan under the use of state power. Meanwhile, in the meeting room of the police station, everyone was trying to figure out where the Kanglong Association came from. Director Ye was told about the creation of Kanglong 7 years ago, which includes the most famous enterprises in the city. He was given information about Ye Feng, who once worked as a mercenary but is now the head of an overseas company. He slammed his fist down on the table, realizing that Ye Feng was up to no good, trying to set up a similar company to run a large business. He ordered a thorough investigation of all the members of the Kanglong Association and document all illegal actions. He didn't care if the Hacker King was there, but it was a really important matter. He was going to keep an eye on Ye Feng at all times, planning to settle things with him once all the information was gathered. Tianlong himself didn't expect to reveal Ye Feng as the president of the Changlong Association. The butler knew that he was going to die, just like Lord Tianlong himself. He jumped, realizing that Su Xun was right, and he needed to settle things with Ye Feng so as not to implicate the family. Tianlong was afraid that someone would find out about Ye Feng's support and cause problems. He ordered Mr. Air to go to Zhangzhou immediately. In the morning, Su Xun was sleeping peacefully next to Qinju when he received the call. He picked up the phone. It was Ye Feng who gave him until 9 o'clock to come and kneel down to give the Qingyuan organization a chance to exist further. He hung up immediately. He felt like a god, because Su Xun had already lost his professionalism. I was ready to help him take off his rose-colored glasses. Su Xun was extremely angry that he called him in the morning for such nonsense. Kana woke up to see him leaving to attend the show. The girl liked the words about show, so she immediately decided to go for it. They went to the Liu family's villa. The family was shocked by what they saw. Ye Feng got out of the expensive car in a suit. They couldn't believe it was him. Everyone thought he was a terrible son-in-law, but in an instant he became a big shot. But we knew that many business magnates provided him with a field of activity. The man pondered, knowing that most of the tycoons were members of the Kanglong Association, which is suggestive. Ye Feng walked up to Xiaoyun, showing his true self as a successful man. But at that moment, another car crashed into one of the cars. Everyone looked back at the accident. Su Xun, who was dissatisfied with their parking spot right in the middle of the road, got out of it. Ye Feng smiled as he waited for his performance on his knees. Su Xun ordered the cars to be removed from the road. Everyone was shocked by his words. At this moment, several bulldozers drove into the road, which began to demolish cars. The guards ordered them to stop. Ye Feng couldn't believe that Su Xun was so confident. Su Xun reminded him that he wasn't invulnerable. He started threatening him, reminding him who he was threatening. He immediately introduced himself as the chairman of the Kanglong Association, warning that he could destroy it with one hand. The whole family was shocked that he was the chairman. Xiaoyun didn't know how powerful this association was, but her father explained to her how many powerful people there were. She understood what he'd said last night, and the whole family was still trying to figure it out. Ye Feng grinned, waiting for them to apologize, not wanting to hide his status any longer. He gave Su Xun another 5 minutes to carry out his order, and if he begged for mercy, then he would allow Qingyuan Company to exist. Xiaowen asked him not to go too far because Su Xun was her disciple, but her mother silenced her, now siding with her dear brother-in-law. Ye Feng repeated his words, intending to close the company today. Su Xun offered him something else, ordering him to grovel in front of him for the sake of one piece of information. Ye Feng didn't understand his stubbornness, threatening him with a coffin. But Su Xun was only going to see his coffin. Ye Feng was greatly surprised by his words. Many police cars arrived at the Liu family home. The family didn't understand what was going on. Employees reported that the house was surrounded, and they ordered me to lie down on the ground and not resist. Liu's family considered this a mistake, not understanding the reason for the arrest. Ye Feng immediately knew that this was Su Xun's doing. Then, Su Xun snapped his fingers, and he waved to the policemen, introducing himself to them and ordering them to be arrested. The entire family was immediately thrown to the ground and handcuffed. The director of the police department, Zhao Dongqin, appeared in front of them. The man tried to justify himself, considering himself a conscientious entrepreneur. Dongqin didn't think so, pointing out its brutal demolition that injured several people. The man panicked, thinking that no one remembered about it. Ye Feng wanted to see their chief of staff, but they were in the city police, and his case was handed over to specialists. They suspected him of national security and were planning to take him to the police station. Neighbors were shocked when the son-in-law went from being president to being a prisoner. Su Xun started clapping as he watched this performance, regarding his global crime as a success. Ye Feng was shaking with anger, and with a blue face, he looked at her with a gloating look. He abruptly ran towards it but was blocked by the guards. But he pushed them aside. I swung my fist at him, but his punch was suddenly deflected by Mandala, who didn't want to let her boss get hurt. Her response made his hand shake with pain. Guns were pointed at him from behind, ordering him to raise his hands in the air. Su Xun was no longer afraid of death thanks to his bodyguards. Ye Feng believed that no one would dare to arrest the heir of the Ye family, but the Ye family's butler ran up to them, claiming that there were no such people in their family. He tried to explain that Mr. Ye had long since severed ties with him and asked him to follow strictly the law. Ye Feng knelt in front of him, trying to regain his status as the heir, but he slapped his hand away because he didn't deserve their last name. He didn't know what he was talking about. Ye Feng only wanted to return to his family. This was his only hope. But the master himself had decided to cut off all ties with him and was not going to accept him, especially after his crime. Su Xun tried to calm him down, telling him not to be so arrogant behind bars. Ye Feng asked him not to be arrogant in return because he still had people abroad who were going to take revenge. But Su Xun already knew about his company of mercenaries that were destroyed by his artillery half an hour ago. Ye Feng immediately didn't believe his words. Then, Su Xun decided to show him his last movie in this life. And on the phone, you could see how his company was burning down. Su Xun finally introduced himself to him as Satan and the Mercenary King. He immediately remembered this person. Su Xun suggested that he report it to national security, but Ye Feng knew that he wasn't afraid of this, and he was going to make fun of him again. He acknowledged his victory. As he was being led away, the system congratulated him on his victory, giving him a superpower to mimic. He could now annoy people, even if that would make him an easy target. He was approached by the Liu family, who invited him to come inside, but Tianlong was already tired of listening to her talk, glad that he had managed to sneak out of Kanglong. He apologized to Su Xun for this embarrassment, but Su Xun had things to do, so he decided to leave. Mom thought he was the perfect match for Xiao Yun, but she didn't even have time to get a divorce, especially since he was her student, so also with a girl. The woman didn't see anything wrong with it. The girl was not ready to fight with her student for a man. The woman asked her husband's opinion, but he only called her a snob, because of which the daughter cannot have a relationship. Qinju was upset that she didn't have time to intervene. He got in the car, reminding them that they wouldn't have resisted the police. Qinju didn't mean anything by it anyway. The phone in his pocket rang. He got a call from Mr. Li, who complimented him on his excellent work. Now companies with significant investments have returned them, and even doubled them. He believed that their company would soon take the lead. Su Xun praised him for his work, intending to announce the next task soon. He still had a few days left before receiving his new identity. He had already started planning his next weekend. But he looked at Qinju, who only wanted one thing. He knew better than to consult her, or she would start offering her own advice. In his mind, she was already looking at him with a loving gaze, and I decided to find other, more useful activities. The directors of other companies were surprised by Su Xun's greed, even taking businesses from the Kanglong Association. And he didn't even leave them a single crumb, just like with the Bright Star. He asked everyone to calm down, reminding them that Qingyan was already a powerful group, and now they were doubling down on their impressiveness. The old man thought that no one would dare challenge Qingyang now. The guy offered to keep a good relationship with him rather than compete. Everyone agreed, realizing that their companies needed to survive. It was early Monday morning. It's time to extract a new identity. Now he has become an alien defector. He jumped out of bed in shock. Under his guise as an ordinary Earthman, he had the identity of a defector from another planet, taking refuge on Earth as a starship pilot. 30 years ago, there was a rebellion on another planet, and the Jade Dragon Legion that he belonged to was one of the rebel factions. The rebellion was crushed, and the Marshal of the Jade Dragon Legion was executed, and now Su Xun has escaped from the planet, and subsequently, a wanted list has been issued throughout the universe. Now, the planet is once again engulfed in war, and his subordinates were able to find him by coordinates, urging him to return and continue the fight. His abilities were increased strength, speed, and berserk. The mission was to return to the planet and end the war to create one nation. He was shocked that he would have to leave Earth,